The protagonist thought that he could not start with this. Looking at the dumbfounded opponent, the protagonist used the improved technique of the Nine Heavens Spear, the first form. John watched the flying stream of mana. He spun the sword in his hand. The old man grabbed the handle. The vampire swung the weapon. John dodged the attack. The guy stepped on the ground. Chuck ran away from the flying enemy. The protagonist grinned and held out the spear. The protagonist gripped the handle tightly. The old man quickly dodged the blow. The vampire attacked him with a sword in the stomach. The illusion of the guy began to dissipate. Running behind the enemy, Chuck said that this was a substitution of bodies. Reflecting the blow, John said that this is Brittany's mystical art, he has learned it well. The protagonist grinned and held out the weapon. The old man swung the sword. The protagonist jumped back from the powerful attack. He braked with his feet. Having launched the mana streams, the guy activated the improved technique of the Nine Heavens Spear, the third form. The opponent looked at him in surprise. He looked away. The vampire closed his eyes. The old man dodged the attack. The energy flow rushed down. Laughter rang out under the night sky. John smiled and said that he would never have thought that the spear would jump out of the ground. What a bizarre technique. Wiping the blood from his mouth, he said that if he had been too late to dodge, the spear would have pierced his head through and through. The scratch on his nose disappeared. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thought about the wound's healing. The vampire smiled and said that he would never have thought that an ignorant child from the mountain would grow up like this. The moon above the trees turned red. The old man looked at him with madness and said that he was even jealous. The guy was taken aback. Approaching Chuck's face, the enemy said that he was very jealous of his talent. The protagonist quickly swung his spear. The vampire cut his shoulder. John swung his sword furiously. A stream of mana rushed forward. Having cut the spear, the old man asked if he really looked that pathetic now. Frowning, the protagonist asked when he became like this. The vampire looked at him in confusion. He looked at the red moon and answered that when he came down from the mountain, he despaired from the realization of his limits. Remembering how he looked at his shaking hands, John said that he was disgusted by old age, wanted to do more and go even further, but his decrepit body limited him. Raising his head, the old man said that he swung swords for 50 years, hoping to become the strongest, and asked if it was not stupid to wish this on someone who was not able to overcome their own limits. He remembered how the girl hugged him from behind, saying that he could not overcome the changes of age on his own, so he chose another way to defeat old age. Gritting his teeth, Chuck asked if this was why he became a vampire. Smiling, John said that since he was waiting for reinforcements, he hoped that they would be here soon. The protagonist bit his lip, listening to the story that if he drank all their blood and he, perhaps, could regain his youth. The old man looked surprised. Bright mana surrounded the tip of the spear. Raising the weapon, the protagonist said that he really respected it. The vampire smiled and said that this was enhanced sword energy. How amazing! This is impossible at the highest level. With tears in his eyes, the guy listened to their fight becoming more and more exciting. Against the background of a sword with smoke, a voiceover says that when a martial artist reaches the highest level, he can put all his energy into the weapon, and such energy is called sword energy. A stone splits and someone says that this is how you can multiply the destructive power many times and cut steel like butter. The man holds the same sword, and the voice continues that in the future you can learn to give shape to the energy of the sword, and this will be called enhanced sword energy. Chuck looks ahead tiredly and thinks that this way he can make his weapon even stronger. He thinks that it can kill with one blow, but there is a way to defend against such a weapon. The man with white hair stands in front of him while he says that this enhanced defensive energy can help. The man glows red while Chuck continues that this energy is like armor. It covers the whole body and allows him to withstand even the enhanced energy of the enemy. The guy frowns and someone says that only Chuck has not fully mastered the enhanced energy through understanding and cannot use it like this. Against the background of the red moon, the man continues that the path to victory is nowhere to be seen. Chuck madly strikes the enemy. The white-haired man blocks the blow. The brunette does a roundhouse kick. The man in purple jumps back. He looks forward, and his opponent has disappeared. Chuck wonders where her opponent is. He parries the blow at the last moment. He looks at the glowing sword. With this sword, Chuck strikes the enemy. The weapon hits the red aura. The girl jumps back. He looks ahead with a sweat, thinking that as long as his opponent is covered in enhanced energy, he can block most of his attacks, while it will be all over for him if he gets hit even once. The man stares at the white face furiously as he continues that besides the fundamental difference in their abilities, there is something else, namely that he has vampire abilities and enhanced defensive energy. Chuck swings his weapon and someone voices that despite their staggering difference in fighting ability, they have spent hundreds of rounds attacking and defending against each other. Chuck passes to the side and the man continues that while thinking about how miraculous it is that the guy is still alive. Chuck looks ahead madly and the voiceover states that the man stabbed the spear into the void and thereby opened a fatal hole in his defense, and in a battle between martial artists, even a small advantage can decide the outcome of the fight. Chuck realizes the extent of his failure, and the voice comments that for him that moment lasted no more than a tenth of a second, but his pupils contracted and he instinctively felt the nearness of his own death. The brunette feels a jump from behind, while the voice prepares a counter to this action. The white-haired man walks towards him, while he continues that the sword demon stepped back, although he knew that such a wonderful opportunity opened up before him. His mustache parted in a smile. Chuck stares at him in horror, while he says that Chuck realized that the sword demon had descended on him. The voice refers to the past and demonstrates it, saying that it is really annoying that all 4 years passed exactly like this. The man from the cliff looks at the settlement, and he says that he spent 4 years training in Shaolin. Against the background of the fighter's image, he says that Chuck's fighting skills have stabilized after daily fights with Tom, which happened slowly but surely, and he was moving to the highest rank. Such a level is not typical for people at such an early age. Chuck looks at the weapon, and he continues that this is an argument in favor of Chuck, that he is far from weak. Against the background of the girls, he reasons that he simply met too many people on his way who are superior to him, and he will not keep up with these singers even if he trains until he loses his pulse. A bald man and a man with a ponytail come to his mind, but he still does not shut up that, among other things, because of the memories of his past life, he developed a huge inferiority complex. Against the background of the king's image, he says that the guy was just unlucky all the time, because it would have been a simple life for him if he lived in a small world and paid attention only to small things. The guy grips the handle tighter, and he continues that training in Shaolin cured him of the inferiority complex that had ingrained him. The blonde attacks. The voice wonders if this means that he has become stronger. Chuck fell to his knees. He looks at the floor and thinks that he is still weak. The voice says that such thoughts are no longer due to his inferiority complex, nor to underestimating his own person, but rather an assessment of the objective reality of what is happening. Chuck looks at his opponent and realizes that he is weaker than this sword demon, while he says that the problem was not his weakness, but that he took on an unbearable burden in an attempt to take responsibility for the lives that were ruined through his fault. The blonde asks him if he is out of breath, while he continues that for the sword demon, giving indulgences to his opponent was like a fun game. The brunette frowns down and realizes how bad things are for him. The man prepares to kick out while the voice states that this is why the guy has been training. Someone wonders what this is all about. Chuck prepares to strike while the voice concludes that it is because the guy does not want to be weak. The blonde prepares to defend himself while the voice continues that Chuck is doing this because he does not want to feel ashamed. The guy goes on the attack while the voice states that it is because he wanted to get rid of his inferiority complex. Chuck shows a parallel between himself now and his younger self. A knee flies into the opponent's head. The guy falls shoulder first to the ground. The spear prepares to strike his opponent, while the voice states that it is because Chuck wanted a change. The tip of the spear glows purple. The sword and the blonde's hand are engulfed in red light. The guy stabs the blonde in the chest. Someone is puzzled. Chuck looks ahead in surprise. The blonde is bleeding. His opponent's legs are buckling. The man with the ponytail takes hold of Chuck's weapon. He stares ahead deathly and asks how he did it. Chuck looks back at him, not understanding himself. The guy frowns and wonders how he did it, while the voice informs us that the guy is wondering the same thing. Chuck remembers what happened and asks himself how exactly he did it, while the guy continues that the guy didn't know the reason, that the way out of the situation appeared exactly at the moment when his mind switched off and he realized that he wanted to change. The spear flies in the air, and the guy continues that the spear that flew out at that moment was much faster than the sword demon, and could pierce him even through protective energy. Chuck looks in horror, while the guy says that, however, Chuck had no idea what happened a few moments earlier, and wondered what the hell he did. He remembers himself and says that he was overtaken by enlightenment, and asks if he awakened improved energy at that moment, and denies it, but then there was a special feeling. The blonde coughs. He starts laughing madly. Chuck listens in horror to his frantic laughter. Against the background of the red moon, he states that it feels like he tripped on a rock. He looks at him seriously, and continues that it is impossible to do this at the guy's level, and asks if enlightenment has affected him so much, and if he could have become stronger in this short time. The blonde pulls out his spear and says that the guy really does have great talent, and states that he envies him. Chuck listens sullenly to how his spear not only pierced the blonde's body through and through, but it was also stronger, faster, and quieter than the sword. He holds his wound and continues that he thinks that he will not live long, because his increased energy has completely destroyed his meridians, and he does not have enough blood for full regeneration. He takes the sword, which fades, and continues his thought. The sword lights up blue and the man asks it to show him something more. He walks forward. The man looks at him and asks him to show him a level that he will never reach in his entire life, and asks to show him everything he can do. Chuck realizes that his opponent used his innate life force to regenerate. The blonde prepares to attack, and the man continues that he will not be able to last long, even if the guy flees the battlefield. The blonde opens his eyes wide, and the man says that these eyes, they are filled with delight and passion. Chuck prepares to strike again, for his opponent's eyes have riveted him. Their weapons intersect in battle, while the man reasons that someone who uses witchcraft does not become a bad person in the process of using it, and he was simply looking for the truth and ways to overcome his own limits. The blonde fights contentedly, and the man continues that he is different from him, and he should have guessed from seeing those honest eyes that he was lying about his envy of his youth and talent. Chuck attacks and continues that he was just pretending to overcome his inferiority complex and ran away, and Chuck, in turn, will put all his strength into this spear. Against the background of the multicolored moon, the voice does not stop saying that in order to repeat that mesmerizing blow that happened to him by pure chance, he must give his noble master a worthy end. The blonde is bleeding and turns to the guy. The blonde fell and says that he deceived him at the last moment. Chuck realizes that he is ultimately not capable of such a thing. Chuck listens to him say that his blow that killed him should have been faster and more amazing than that one. The blonde raises his hand up and asks why he will die like this. Chuck looks at him, and he says what he wants, namely more. The blonde's hand fell lifelessly. Chuck is distorted in madness. Against the background of the stone, he thinks that he should have lived up to his expectations because of what he created, but because of his return, something went wrong. The man with the ponytail looks down. The blonde smiles with his mustache, and the guy states that the sword demon could have died with a satisfied smile from this. In fact, the sword demon died with his mouth open. Chuck falls to the ground. He asks him for forgiveness. The guy writhes on the ground. He gets up. Something has drawn attention to him. He recognizes Brittany there. She hugs him wounded. She states that he has grown so much since their last meeting. She turns to him. Chuck looks ahead in surprise. She lets him go, and he is perplexed by his presence here. Chuck asks her face why she is here. She silently gets up. The girl stands with a bouquet and explains that she heard rumors about the sword demon. Chuck looks sadly. The girl drops the bouquet on the dead man's chest. She covers his eyes with her hands. The blonde lies with his eyes and mouth closed. Brittany turns around and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time and asks how much time has passed since then, if it was 5 years, and realizes that this is exactly the reason why they met again. Chuck's mouth is bleeding, and she says that he has become stronger. The blonde says that this may seem cruel to him. She was just watching their fight with the sword demon, and continued even when he was losing. The guy stood up and listens to her say that she had a feeling that she should not interfere, even if he died at that moment. Chuck smiles and notes that he is fine and such an outcome was quite expected, because she is a master of martial arts, and he did not die. Chuck asks himself if he should not have died in such conditions. He looks ahead and thinks that he was running away all this time, even despite the difference in strength. He was able to win and won due to pure chance. His silhouette moves away, and his thoughts sound that the sword demon resorted to all sorts of methods to increase his own strength out of pure motives, because he wanted to overcome his limits, and he did not run away. But does not this make his opponent better than himself? Brittany says that he was wrong. Chuck asks in horror if it was a mistake, his desperate desire to overcome his own limits. The girl states that harming innocent people is wrong and that there is no justification for this. She continues sullenly that she does not know his problems or any other things that could prompt him to such actions, but she has something to say in contrast. Brittany recalls recent events and says that the reasons for this are not important, because his actions from her point of view are deeply wrong and immoral. She stands next to him, and a strong difference in their heights is visible. The girl added that her sense of justice is different from his, and asks what made him, or rather what thoughts made him stop. Chuck says that he felt responsible. Brittany looks down and says that she understands it. She turns around and says that she is now a member of the Murim Alliance, and that it suits her, because this way she has the right to administer justice, and she was able to get information about the sword demon also thanks to them. She looks at the corpse and says that they knew each other, and she herself wanted to be one of those who would stop him, and says that she did not expect to meet him here. The guy calls her by name. She turns around when asked how he looks in her eyes, to which she receives in response that he has changed a lot. Brittany smiles and says that since the time on the mountain, he has risen several more levels, and then he was characterized by a huge amount of pessimism and strictness towards himself. She says that she is glad that he is changing. Brittany punches him in the shoulder, saying that she is sorry because now that it is all resolved, she has to go, and she abandoned her mission to come here. Chuck turns around in horror, asking what mission she abandoned. She thinks of a demon and says that she is currently pursuing a small sky demon named Chloe. Chuck remembers her. He stares at her in horror. Chuck reaches out to her as she continues to say that she cannot tell him all the details and says that maybe she will another time when they meet again. She turns around and continues that she cannot promise, but she is sure that they will meet again someday. Chuck reaches out to the place from which she disappeared. He wonders in horror if she is pursuing Chloe and asks if this is an order from her alliance. He imagines this and asks if she was following her, and that is why she could have died in her past life, and realizes that if this is the case, then there is no way he can make her stop pursuing Chloe. The brunette grabs his face and continues that this is what she was just talking about, that she joined the alliance for the sake of justice, and that the sense of justice is not a conviction that can be shaken by someone else's words. Chuck looks ahead in horror and says that he will not be able to convince her, and therefore he needs to act differently. We move to a foggy forest. A man with a bouquet lies on the ground, and a voiceover says that rumors of the victory over an evil demon who used witchcraft and a young warrior who defeated him quickly spread. Against the background of a sword stuck in a corpse, he continues that this hero defeated a vampire, a supreme master of martial arts, on a full moon and was named after this demon's spear. In a wooden building, someone asks if he is here again. Denier floats above the ground and asks if he is going to ask him for a test again, and adds that he already told him that he would go crazy and die during the test, to which he receives in response that he should shut up. The blonde is taken aback. The man with the short haircut frantically asks to just give him this task. Against the background of the barn, he notes that he sees that he has prepared this time. Chuck sullenly listens to whether this is why he barged in on him like a madman, because he is preparing in advance to go crazy after the test, and notes that the guy is really funny. Denier crossed his arms over his chest and continues that he already told him about this and will tell him again, that he is experiencing pain completely different from what he has experienced before. Chuck says that it is none of his business. The brunette angrily repeats that he told him to give him an assignment. Denier smiles slyly. He raises his hand and says that in that case, I agree. The guy carries Chuck to a shiny place. Chuck asks where they are, and he beats him to it with the answer that this is the space of his mind. The brunette asks again about the mind and receives a positive answer, because training in this place will not affect his body in reality. Chuck with the spear listens that the test will thus affect only his mind and says that there are no advantages of people from another world like a status window or skills here. Chuck is taken aback, and Denier clarifies whether he understood what he was told, because in order to get out of here on his own, he must train using his memory and talent. Denier points to the hourglass and says that until all the sand pours out, he will have to stay in this world. Chuck asks how long this will last and receives in response that the duration of the test is equal to 100 years. Denier extends his hand and says that he cannot take his words back, at least he will have to spend 100 in oblivion. Chuck looks down and listens that rudeness should be punished accordingly, and asks him if he thinks the same. Chuck asks again if he will have to spend at least 100 years there, and Denier says that he is full of enthusiasm and that at first everyone is the same. He smiles slyly and notes that in general everything is so and encourages him to stay there as long as he wants. Against the background of the hourglass, he continues that when all the sand pours out, he will have two options. The first is to finish training and return to the real world or turn the clock over. The blonde drew a diagram and explains that with each turn, 100 rets are added to the previous term. That is, if he turns it over the first time, he will need to spend another 200, and if the second, then 300. Chuck looks surprised and he says that after the turn there is no way back. You need to stay there until all the sand pours out. Denier spreads his hands and says that he lied because he did not want to remove the corpse and that not everyone who took his test died, but only 3 out of 10 according to statistics. He remembers the bald man and says that most survive the first 100 years. Full of self-confidence they turn over their watches. Denier breaks into a smile and says that during the next 200 years these same people go crazy. Chuck is taken aback and gets a question about how long he can hold out. Chuck stands with a spear and remembers that this was the last thing Denier said to him before he disappeared and that this is how his 100 years began. The maddened man looks forward. Chuck trains and continues that at first he was inspired, because now he had an infinite amount of time to become stronger. He says that he did not feel tired, nor hungry and did not need sleep. The brunette fell to his knees and clutched his head while thinking that it did not take long before this became unbearable for him. His maddened face accompanies the thought that he began to miss fatigue, hunger, thirst and even the feeling of pain. He pierced himself with a spear and continues that nothing happened to his body, no matter how much he wanted it, and he did not think earlier that the loss of these sensations in itself would be so painful. He clenches his teeth and holds the spear. The guy looks at his hands and curses. Chuck realizes that it was not just painful for him. He holds the spear and thinks to himself. Chuck looks at the weapon in bewilderment, wondering if he is doing the right thing at all. He thinks about his loved ones and realizes that none of them are there. He hits the wall with his spear and says that if he was just swinging the spear senselessly, what if it was all done wrong? He looks ahead in horror and thinks that if he was going down the wrong path all this time and did everything completely wrong, will all the pain he endured be in vain, and realizes that he was slowly going crazy all this time when he thought about something like this. Chuck realizes that he needs some confidence. The brunette lowered his hands and continues that he needs confidence that he is on the right path. He is standing somewhere far away and he has something to counterbalance. The guy is alone in this wasteland and realizes that the answer never came to him. He turned to the clock and says that full of hope that this hell will end quickly, he looked at the clock. Against the background of the clock, he comes to the conclusion that in all this time not a single grain of sand has fallen. The guy is standing in front of Denier. He looks ahead in horror. Dinner smiles and says that he should prepare for another corpse. He opens his eyes. The blonde is terrified for some reason. His eyes are wide open. Dinner says that Chuck is a crazy bastard. Chuck remembers Dinner's words that 10 people took this test, and according to him, they all easily coped with the first 100. The brunette looks up and asks what is wrong with him then, and asks if, compared to them, he lacks not only talent but also fortitude. He looks ahead angrily. The guy says that he remembers well why he cannot give up. Chuck spins the spear and asks if he was not a worm from the very beginning, and asks how he can fall into despair just because he is moving too slowly. He pokes the spear forward and continues that he had already made a decision when he was on the mountain, and asks again if it was all true, because yes, he is a worm, but he will continue to crawl until he surpasses all the geniuses he knows. The brunette grips the handle tighter and says that even if he had chosen the wrong direction, if he continues to move, he will definitely find his new path. Chuck trains and remembers that the training he underwent in Shaolin was not in vain, and he can quickly come to his senses to resume the exercises. He fell to his knees and asks himself that someone who, taking into account his past and present life, has lived no more than 40 can even imagine how long that is, because even a strong determination will become shaky and wear out over time. Sand falls to the bottom of the watch. The guy continues to train and says that there is no progress in the improved technique of the Spear of the Nine Heavens, even after training, and he again moved away from parrying the block and attack. The guy pulls his hair out and says he can't go on like this, but he realizes it too late because people don't change. He looks down and says that's why they can only put on a mask and try to play someone else. The guy looks at his thin fingers and says his hands don't get calluses and he doesn't get tired no matter how much he repeats, and he wonders how many times he's done these lunges. He trains and the thoughts run through his head that the spear is for attacks, that distance, shadow, and the spearhead are both stable and so are distance and shadow, and that neutralization with a spear is one of the best in the world, and that the Shaolin spear technique was pretty good too, but he's still not a monk. The guy lies on the ground and wonders why he is like this. He looks ahead and says he has less than half of this left to live, but still, what has he achieved? He trains and realizes he has a little more to go. The guy grabs his face and realizes that his skills are not enough to change anything outside now, and that he will need to kill himself, because such weak trash needs to be disposed of. He gives in to despair and asks for forgiveness from his sir, because he is very sorry that he killed him, because he believes that he was not worthy of it. Chuck thinks that he knows that he is deprived of talent, and even after 100 years he has not made any progress, although he has been swinging his spear non-stop all this time. He realizes that this is difficult to change, but he wants to kill himself for weakness, although he came here just to eradicate it, but he still has not made any progress. Chuck sits and asks them to stop this. Now he sits with his back and understands that he should not give up. He realizes that most of the sand has settled. Chuck says that it is happening again. The guy turns the clock over and realizes that even if he trains for 200 years, he will achieve nothing, because he is classless and has no class advantages or skills, which makes this place perfect for him. The guy holds the clock and says that he cannot even remember how many times he managed to give up, fall into despair in less time, and maybe he will get nothing again if he turns the clock over. Chuck says that nevertheless, he does not want to run away, but everything will be the same. Chuck frowns from the realization that this is so hard, because the small hourglass is so heavy. He clenches his teeth and declares that this is how much his indecision weighs. The brunette turns the clock over with all his strength, realizing that he has started the next 200 years. Chuck screams in madness. He holds on to his shoulder and looks forward. Chuck looks at the clock and says that when he came to his senses, he noticed how much sand had fallen since his last check. The guy looks and continues that he must have been delirious for a long time before waking up. He holds a spear and says that he has experienced this thousands of times, but again felt disgusted by his own weakness, but somehow he was still able to come to his senses. The guy smiles and thinks that everything will be fine, just as long as he is in his right mind, and all he needs to do is hold out until the end, and he does not need to worry about time, because he has enough of it. He looks at his watch and notices that exactly half is left, and a whole 100 years have passed. He straightens his back and understands that this century was much more intense than the previous one, and he took a couple of steps forward, even if they were small. The brunette looks up and smiles, because this time he will practice the art of the mystical purple dawn, and then the flight of the soul without a shadow, and will continue to maintain sobriety of mind. The guy sat down to meditate and says that he set goals and for the first time was pleased with himself in all this time. He suggests continuing in the same spirit. He remembers that this is how his 200 years have passed. The guy smiles and continues that as he expected, again no achievements worth mentioning, and realizes that this was actually great. He happily turns the watch over again and starts his 300 years. The guy runs screaming that he is going to do his best, because the first century was terrible, but after that everything only got better. Chuck wonders if this could be too easy, maybe he has gone crazy. The guy holds the spear and continues that he thinks that he has made some progress and wonders if he should set more ambitious goals for himself, because he should reproduce that move from the battle with the sword demon. He continues that 300 years have passed in total. He has spent 6 centuries in this place. He throws away the watch and says that as expected, he was unable to repeat that move with the spear and continues that he is not the type to get everything right after a couple of tries. With these words he started his 400 years. The guy sits and realizes that 1,000 years have passed. The brunette looks forward. Chuck looks at the wall and realizes that he hit a wall of the highest level. The guy bursts out laughing, to think that only after 1,000 years he reached the wall. He remembers that he turned the hourglass over again and started a new 500 years. Chuck says that he hit the wall only after 1,000 and asks how much longer he needs to cross it, with which he began training. He trains with a spear. The guy happily declares that he did it. Only after 1,500 years he repeated the movement of the spear that killed the sword demon. Chuck exhales and says that of course it was just a copy, but he could not use it with the same speed and power for other techniques and continues that as expected of him. What a pathetic idiot he is. The brunette hums something and wonders when he will become the supreme master of martial arts. He turns his attention to the clock. Chuck wonders if he needs even more time for that. Dina looks at him in horror. The blonde claims he's just crazy. Chuck looks out of the shadows. He came out with his eyes closed. His eyes widen. He stares at Dina emotionlessly. Chuck looks at the blonde and realizes that he's kept something from the test subjects, that in the mind space the effect of training is reduced several times. He looks at him from the haze and continues that because of this even geniuses who mastered everything much faster than ordinary people had a hard time. Denier is left with only a red haze and he says that all the previous test subjects were much more talented than Chuck, but none could last more than 1,000 years. Denier reasons about him. The blonde states that he was able to overcome 2,100 years. He asks himself how he was able to last so long, to which the guy only sighs. Chuck does not understand why his nose started bleeding. He wipes his nose and Denier says that his brain is overloaded due to the sudden influx of memories that have accumulated over 2,100 years. If not for his blessing, everything could have been much worse. Denier frowns and thinks that during all this time his mind was destroyed many times, but he did the impossible again and again and again assembled it. Chuck puts his hand on his face, and he continues that he is such a fool, limited by the lack of talent, and how could he even survive this? Although there is an explanation for this. Denier looks at him in surprise, realizing that it is all because of his ordinariness, because it is. He thinks of the bird and says that everyone who took the blonde boy's test was extremely talented. They were not used to crawling slowly like a maggot. Denier visualizes Chuck as a worm and continues that he was one at first, and crawled slowly. He continues that he was used to getting up after falling and was always haunted by despair. Chuck looks at his finger, and the blonde clarifies that this despair was important to him. Denier looks ahead and realizes. There is a lot of smoke behind Chuck and he realizes that this is not all the reasons. Chuck says that his body is so heavy, to which he receives in response that he is lucky that he can still feel it. After all, it is normal to get used to your own body for 2,100 years. Chuck continues to look at himself, and he says that one guy after 1,000 years could not even distinguish his own limbs, and he miraculously retained his personality, to which the guy asks if this is true. Dina created a ball and continues that he most likely feels out of place, and he has a backup copy of his memories in his hands. They will help him feel better. Chuck is surprised to receive his memories back. He looks sadly and remembers all the moments of his life. He smiles and says that it reminded him of the time when he was pathetic, but still thanks him for the fact that he should not forget. Chuck raises his hands and says that he really does not like his body, because it is weak like an insect, to which he receives in response that it was just training the mind. Chuck listens to reasoning that as long as he has the same mindset and remembers the experience, he can quickly return to the same level. Denier is surprised to hear that in that case he will stay with him for a while. Chuck points and says that he has nowhere to go, so he will stay there until he gets used to his body, to which Chuck asks what he just said and notes that he was rude before, but now it seems he has forgotten about basic politeness. Denier is disgusted to hear that he did spend 2,100 years cut off from society. Denier yells that he can do whatever he wants. The scene moves to a year later in the Shaolin Temple. Someone is swinging a stick. Tom exhales in the middle of training. He hears someone say that it has been a long time. He turns and asks if it is Chuck, to which Chuck asks how he has been. The bald man is shocked. Chuck looks at him madly. Tom stands with a stick and asks what happened to him. Chuck replies that a lot of things happened, and the man is confused by the answer and laughs. Chuck stands at attention and hears people say that he defeated the sword demon, and the monk says that it was just luck. Tom lowers his eyebrows and asks if it is possible to kill the leader of the mountain cult with luck, but asks permission to ask him another question. Chuck smiles and listens to the question about how much time has passed since he was able to reach the peak and says it has been 6 months. The monk asks again about 6 months, and the monk clarifies that it is not. Tom exhales and says that it is nothing like that. Chuck looks blankly, and the monk says that if you look into his eyes, it feels like much more time has passed for him. The guys look at each other. Tom squeezes the stick and asks if he minds. The bald man smiles and clarifies that he is talking to him about sparring. Chuck takes out his spear and says that it would be nice. Someone stops them in front of the temple. The man blocks them and says that if they fight. William looks at them and clarifies that Shaolin could lose its future if that happened. Tom is taken aback, to which Chuck says that he is overestimating his abilities. William grins and replies that since their last meeting, he has not only mastered a new martial art, but has also become more talkative and asks why he came to him. Chuck closes his eyes and replies that he wanted to know how much closer he has become. Grandpa asks if he is talking about Chloe, to which he answers in the affirmative. William says that he does not know what level she has reached, but most likely, given her incredible talent, she has grown a lot compared to the 17-year-old version of herself who visited Shaolin several years ago. Tom frowns. Grandpa says that he is still behind, to which he smiles and says that everything is as he expected. Tom is perplexed by the fact that he is smiling. Chuck thinks about Chloe, that he never even thought that his current level could somehow compare to hers. He flexes his biceps and continues that he has made more progress in the creation world and hopes to be able to do the same with his main body. Chuck smiles. Someone states that there are a little over 2 months left until the dungeon opens. Chuck stares straight ahead, thinking that there are still 2 months left until the dungeon opens. Imagining Tom in his mind, the boy thought that he asked him to stay the night before leaving, but he had too many things to do, so he took back his demon armor and spear and immediately left Shaolin. Looking away, the protagonist thought that he needed to learn as much as possible about the black heart in his body and prevent Brittany from dying in the dungeon, then find the sorcerer that Denier told him about, and stop the fighting prowess that he had in the consciousness realm, harmonizing his body, energy, and mind. Looking straight ahead, Chuck added that there was much to do and he needed to use his time efficiently, because in that case, he should start with something concrete. Remembering the words of the god of time, who told him to find Enverus, the boy mused that he also had a distorted causality, but not in the same way as he did. Then he visualized how Denier said that he was the only one who escaped death, and his causality was also distorted, but not in the same way. Heading straight for the dark forest, the protagonist knew that it would be able to answer his question. Remembering Neville, who asked him for money, the protagonist mused that according to the information he bought from the vampire, a merchant with the same name was seen in this sleeping forest. Looking to the side sharply, Chuck thought that it could be another person, but this is a special forest, and here, in the sleeping forest, people are known to go crazy because of ghostly screams. While something was moving right at his feet, the boy reasoned that no one knew what was sleeping in the forest, and that this place was avoided by everyone, places filled with monsters. Scratching his head in surprise, the protagonist thought that it was impossible for someone who visited this place to be an ordinary merchant, and wondered if these were the ghostly screams. Waving his hand, he walked further and further, while the plot noted that these ghostly screams were notorious for destroying the human mind, but for the protagonist, who spent 2,100 years in the consciousness realm, it was nothing more than an annoying fly. At that moment, an unknown monster appeared right behind him. Asking what it was, Chuck abruptly destroyed the monster with his foot. Looking at this, the boy killed another ant. With deft movements from his arms and legs, he managed to kill 2 monsters at once. All this was happening right in the depths of a dark forest. Unknown people were watching the protagonist's battles with monsters from the side. The spy, with fear on his face, asked who he was and how he managed to defeat forest monsters with such ease. His one-eyed ally, looking straight ahead, noted that he was taller than a martial artist and one of those who had completed the transformation of the source, so he doubted that he belonged to the unorthodox faction, since he did not feel any demonic energy from him. The warrior continued to hide behind a tree, explaining that they were not enough to stop him, and therefore they needed to request reinforcements, when he suddenly noticed that he had disappeared somewhere. Suddenly, Chuck appeared right in front of them, saying that he wanted to ask them something. Looking straight at these frightened guys, he asked if they had heard anything about a man named Enverus. At that moment, the one-eyed spy jerked sharply. He released the blade, which the boy dodged with a deft movement of his head. The protagonist, putting his hands in front of him, asked them to wait, because he was not going to fight them and just wanted to ask something. While he was trying to explain what he wanted, the warrior suddenly activated fire magic. A moment later, he directed it straight towards Chuck, who wondered if he was serious. With a deft movement of his hand, he managed to repel the enemy's attack, asking why he was doing this. Watching this, the ninja was very stunned that he reflected it with just a wave of his hand. At the same moment, the boy took a step forward, asking why he was doing this. In an instant, finding himself right in front of his opponent, he asked why he was not listening to what he was told. Looking intently straight into the eyes of the warrior, the protagonist asked again why he was doing this. Very frightened by what had happened, the man asked them to wait for him and explained that they were deaf, so if he had something to say, it would be better if he wrote it on the ground. Pulling his fist to the side after hearing this, Chuck realized that they were deaf and thought that the answer was their inability to hear. Immediately after this, the boy took a stick and began to write on the ground the question of who they were, to which the ninja answered that they were from a tribe. Suddenly, an unknown person appeared right above their heads, flying straight towards them. A moment later, this person landed right on the ground. Pointing his finger straight ahead at the protagonist, who was holding the warriors in his hands, he called them idiots. With a look full of displeasure, the man asked how they dared to divulge information about their tribe to a stranger, and although he himself did not know who he was, he should not even dream of leaving there alive. Looking straight ahead in surprise after hearing all this, the protagonist asked what tribe they were, and the boys called out to the elder. Looking forward with a serious gaze, Chuck noted that they seemed to be not deaf and that he was not interested in his tribe, and asked if he knew anything about a man named Endris. The elder ninja, gritting his teeth in displeasure, said this name, and the boy who heard it asked if he knew it. In response, the formidable warrior concentrated the energy of flame in his fist and declared that he could not tell this to a stranger. At this time, the boy looked at him with a look full of calm and asked that they had said something about a tribe. Drawing with a stick directly on the ground, the protagonist explained that he did not want to take anyone's life if possible and did not want to fight at all. Sitting right on the corpse of the elder ninja, Chuck thought that he was able to defeat the elder, who is the supreme master of martial arts, so easily. Menacingly looking straight ahead, the boy asked if they could show him the way. Hearing this, the ninja were very scared. Visualizing the image of the ninja, Chuck thought that this tribe settled in the sleeping forest. Its people use a secret drug that makes them deaf, so as not to hear the screams. After some time, the guys led the boys straight to their village. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist asked why they decided to settle here, because this place does not look peaceful for living. Right in front of him, with his arms crossed over his chest, stood the chief of the tribe, Kanzuya, who explained that everything was in order to fulfill the desire of the tribe. The two menacingly looked at each other, releasing their energy. Looking straight ahead, Chuck thought that he was strong and definitely a supreme martial artist who had completed the transformation of the origin. At the same time, the old man, looking straight ahead, asked what he was trying to achieve, since he had killed their elder and even threatened the younger members of their tribe. With a calm look in his eyes, the boy explained that he had already said that he had no intention of fighting, and that the initiative was on their side. Continuing to look straight ahead, the protagonist noted that, however, if they were going to attack him, then there was no doubt that he would attack back. Hearing this, the tribal leader silently looked at him. Nodding his head slightly, the old man said that then they should forget about it, and many of their people would die if they tried to stop him. Extending his hand straight ahead, the man said that they would accept him as a guest in their village. Seeing this, Chuck remained wary. After a moment, he finally shook his opponent's hand. Then the boys' questions swept through the village, asking if they knew anything about Endris. The old man looked straight at him, asked if he really wanted to meet him, and explained that he had left this forest 2 months ago. Looking straight at him, the protagonist asked where he was now, to which he received the answer that he did not know that much. Continuing to walk slowly forward, the chief of the tribe said that he had no idea whether he was the visitor that the sorcerer had mentioned before leaving, but he said that someone would come here looking for him, and that this someone would come to this forest and ask for information about him. Then the old man added that when this someone came, he should bring him to this place, which surprised Chuck very much. They came straight to a huge tree, the roots of which spread very wide. Looking straight at this creation of nature, the boy asked if this wall was really made of an infinite number of trees intertwined together, to which he received a positive answer. Looking at his guest, the old man asked if he wanted to try to break this wall, and upon hearing this, the protagonist immediately took out his spear from his inventory. Enveloping the blade of the weapon with his power, Chuck prepared to strike. A moment later, he lunged straight towards the wooden wall, putting all his strength into it. The tribal chief covered himself with his hand from the shock wave so as not to be hit. After the strike, the protagonist was very surprised, looking straight ahead. The old man standing right behind him asked how it felt, and explained that he would not be able to break this wall with force alone. Then he added that even Endris could not do it, and only the tribal chief can open this wall, so now he will do it, while Chuck was touching the trees directly. Looking angrily at the old man using magic on this wall, the boy wondered why he asked him to try to break it. At this time, the man was enveloped in blue particles of energy. A moment later, the trees began to part in different directions right in front of the protagonist. Looking into the unknown darkness that opened up in front, Chuck asked what was there, to which he received the answer that he had no idea. Then the chief of the tribe explained that he knew that there was an incredibly strong howl inside, and even a top martial artist would have a hard time passing through this area unscathed, while the boy silently looked forward. The old man simply looked at the protagonist's back, until he suddenly walked forward. The man simply remained silent, continuing to watch Chuck, who moved further. Going deeper, the boy seemed to find himself in darkness, thinking that the ringing dust would destroy the consciousness of anyone who heard it. Moving along the barely visible white path, The protagonist reasoned that this was an incredibly strong psychological attack, and everything was as Kazuya said, that even the highest martial artists who had mastered the mind, energy and body could not resist this scream. At that moment, the sign of the god of time appeared in his head, and he thought that 2,100 years definitely did not pass in vain. Remembering how he suffered from mental pain, passing the tests, Chuck thought that he lived 2,100 years in the realm of consciousness, and his mind was destroyed and restored many times. Returning to reality, with a menacing look straight ahead, the boy noticed that in the process of all this, his mind gained a strong spiritual state, as well as madness. Suddenly, the boy noticed something in front of him, as someone said that he was confused. Right in front of the protagonist was an incomprehensible purple flame. The energy clot levitated in the darkness, saying that it was rare to encounter beings with a twisted cause and effect relationship. So he mistook him for someone else and thought that he was the one who came in there recently and let him in. Then, through the unknown smoke, the words of the violet flame asking for an answer from the being with a twisted connection rushed through. Abruptly incarnating into something terrible, the unknown being asked that he was really one of those who regressed back in time. The boy was very tense from the pressure of this energy clot. Suddenly, a cat girl appeared to the side, asking the monarch of the void to stop this. A moment later, she took the form of a beast man, asking that he did not see that he was shocked now. Seeing this, the protagonist was extremely dumbfounded and did not know what to say. Looking at the beings he had just met, Chuck asked who they were. Hearing this, the cat girl bowed, asking for permission to introduce herself. She put her hand on her chest and stated that her name was Ruby and she was Enver's familiar, and that she was waiting for him there as per her master's instructions. Looking straight at her in surprise, Chuck asked her what was unexpected, was she really a familiar, and why did she take the form of a beast man? To which she replied that her master liked her so much. The boy then pointed at the Void Monarch and asked what that thing was then, and he, upon hearing this, could not believe that he was called that. Clicking her finger at him, the cat girl explained that it was an echo of a great demon, which angered him greatly. Imagining a crazy monster in her head, she told him that 400 years ago he was a powerful demon who led 100 demons, but now he was just a soul without a body. Looking straight at her, the boy asked why she was waiting for him there then, and she was just about to explain everything to him. With a slightly guilty expression, the familiar explained that he had to find her master Enverus, since the only one who could answer his question was her master, who also had a distorted cause and effect relationship. Looking straight at her, the protagonist asked if being his familiar meant that she could detect his location, to which he received a negative answer. After hearing this, Chuck was very upset. Suddenly, Ruby, pointing her finger up, noted that her master was able to detect her location, so if he went with her, then eventually her master would find them too. Moving his hand to the side, the boy explained that he really didn't understand why all this was happening, and why he was making things more complicated. After which the protagonist, pointing his finger at the cloud of energy, said that it turned out that he only needed her, and this thing was useless, and asked what he had forgotten there, to which he was called impudent. With a clearly displeased expression, the Void Monarch stated that he also did not know why he needed to follow him, and all he knew was that the one who had regressed would one day come looking for him. He then added that he needed to leave this forest with him, and the protagonist, who was looking straight ahead with a menacing expression, asked if he was really the one behind the screams of this place. Then Chuck explained that it was said that the tribe of this forest prayed hard, and asked if he was the result of this prayer, to which the energy clot laughed, asking what he was talking about these pathetic parasites. Immediately after that, his voice echoed through the unknown fog, telling them that they were a tribe that was woven into this forest, and as long as their blood existed in this forest, at the end of this path the seal would continue to exist, and their prayers should reach the end of this path. With a serious expression, the energy clot explained that it didn't even know what would happen in the end, and simply existed in the middle of this path. Looking at his new companions, the protagonist stated that he had many questions, but no clear answer, and asked what was wrong with them at all. At the same time, the cat girl, pointing to herself, said that she knew one thing for sure: if he went with them, he would eventually be able to meet Enverus. Looking straight ahead, Chuck thought that her words about him meeting him in the end were naturally vague, and asked him to forget about everything, asking what did this demon mean, going with them, and he didn't have a physical body. Looking straight at the Monarch of the Void, Ruby explained that she was unsure, and the master did not say anything about it, when she suddenly turned to him. When she asked where he was, the energy cloud approached the protagonist for a moment. Then, suddenly, it began to inhabit Chuck's body. The cat girl watched in shock as the demon soul took over the boy's body, asking the Void Monarch what he was doing. The energy ball continued to consume the protagonist and laughed, explaining that it was never obvious that he would steal this fool's body, and explained that he had lost his own body and had been trapped there for 400 years. As Ruby reared up and hissed, the demon soul explained that although this body was trash compared to when he was in his prime, he would make good use of it. Then, in the darkness, he said that he would be able to walk this world again. At this time, the cat girl looked ahead in surprise as laughter continued to rise up around the area. Chuck also looked straight ahead in surprise. The soul of the strongest demon was trapped right inside the bracelet on his arm. The Void Monarch was very scared and asked what was going on, while the boy, who was looking straight at him, explained that he had the same question. The strongest demon stated that this couldn't be happening, because he was a great and powerful demon and couldn't even control a child's mind, and he couldn't believe that he was rejected and locked in this bracelet, while everyone thought he was an idiot. In the form of the bracelet, the Void Monarch asked who he was and why the hell his mind was so strong, and the protagonist, looking straight at him, thought that maybe it was the result of 2,100 years of training in the realm of consciousness. Visualizing something terrible behind him, Chuck thought that it could be some kind of blessing from the one behind him again. The boy looked at the bracelet on his hand and reasoned that he had no way of knowing now, and the only clue was Enverus. At that moment, the protagonist remembered his adventurer friend. He then looked straight at the demon's soul trapped in the bracelet, and explained that he had so many precious memories with it, and it was a shame that he would have to throw it away, to which the demon asked if he was really going to do that. Reaching out his hand for the bracelet, Chuck explained that since they weren't friends or anything, he couldn't help but throw it away, so he would just have to get lost, to which the cat girl agreed, and the demon's soul asked him to wait and expressed his regret, asking for forgiveness for trying to take it. Suddenly, the Void Monarch announced that he could give him a treasure, and the boy stopped abruptly. With great worry, the great demon soul explained that he was a very powerful being and had gained several trophies in battle over the centuries of his reign, so the vault was full of mysterious and wonderful treasures that he had never seen before. Looking straight at Ruby, Chuck saw her nod her head approvingly, explaining that he was indeed an influential demon in the past. After hearing all this, the boy suddenly thought about it. He was still in the same place in the void and was thinking about what to do. In a moment, the system notified that Ruby and the Monarch of the Void became his companions. Immediately after this story, he was transported to the forest, when the cat girl asked where he would go now. With a happy smile on her face, she suggested finding a place with a beautiful view and fresh air and waiting there until the master found them. Punching his fist right on the bracelet, Chuck explained that this was not a bad idea, but he definitely had to visit a certain place, and his companion, who heard this, asked where it was. Looking worriedly straight ahead, Ruby, after a short pause, asked that it was not a very dangerous place. The boy just looked at her silently, not giving any answer. After a moment, he said that this was a dungeon, which scared the cat girl very much. After hearing all this, she screamed sharply, which was heard throughout the forest. Showing us the image of a huge monster, the plot told us that the dungeon is a mysterious location that appears throughout area, and many types of magic are intertwined there. Visualizing a person who defeated a monster and collects various items from it, we are told that therefore, different laws apply in dungeons than in the outside world, and in area after you kill a monster, or collect byproducts from them as loot. Introducing a swordsman who looks directly at a crystal with a demon's soul, the plot explains that in dungeons everything is different, and as soon as he kills a monster, the corpse disappears, and loot appears in its place. Showing us different items, it also tells us that the loot comes in different types, and the stronger the monster killed, the better it is. Visualizing the battles of the war with a huge monster, the story explains that if you defeat the boss of the dungeon, you can get an incredible reward, and the dungeon will be closed. Then the story moves right into the thicket of the forest. Ruby in handheld mode with a frightened expression asked if he was really going there. Looking forward with a serious look, Chuck gave a positive answer. He was right in front of a huge orange magic crystal. Showing us the moment the boy met his new companions, the story told us that 2 months had passed since he met Ruby and the Monarch of the Void and learned the exact location of the dungeon thanks to the information of Erebriza. Looking straight at the huge magic crystal in front, the protagonist thought that this would be his second dungeon, and in his first life, he had obtained a regression stone, so this crimson stone must be the entrance inside. Looking at the orange-colored magic crystal, he thought that if he touched it, he would instantly teleport somewhere in the dungeon, and now he had to finish what needed to be done. Remembering the moment in his head, how Chloe defeated Brittany, Chuck realized that a crazy thought flashed through his head, whether he could win. Stepping towards the teleportation crystal, the boy reasoned that this was a stupid question, because he had come so far only to prevent this. Touching his hand directly to the magic stone, the protagonist decided for himself that he had to do it. Immediately after that, he was transported directly into the dungeon. Once inside, Chuck looked around, while Ruby in portable mode was very scared, saying that they really got inside. Suddenly, the boy felt an unknown surge of energy nearby. The smart man attacked him right from behind. Swinging his weapon sharply, the protagonist thought it was an ambush. The man looked straight at him with great surprise. Holding an axe in his hands, he asked who he was, and Chuck blurted out that he was asking after the first one attacked him, and told his name. Hearing this, the stranger asked that he was the demon Spear who killed the sword demon, and he explained with a displeased look that he did not really like this nickname. while the plot noted that the world bestowed the nickname Demon Spear on Chuck, who killed the sword demon. Right in front of him was the mountain Yakpal Theodore. Staring straight ahead, the boy thought that he heard about him, and his fighting skill is at the highest peak level, and he is one of the martial artists who was killed by Chloe in his past life. At the same time, the warrior with the axe pointed his finger forward, asking if he was here to stop the little sky demon, to which he received a positive answer and noted that he was an amazing and noble warrior. He then became a little worried, explaining that as he already knew, Chloe was very dangerous, and not only did she earn the title of Sky Demon at such a young age, but she also led a powerful group. The mountain Yakpal then explained that the dungeon's rewards were huge, and if they left things as they were, a great demon would be born that no one could stop, while the protagonist listened to him with a serious expression. Suddenly angry, Theodore stated that they must stop her for the sake of protecting the world of Aria, when Chuck suddenly asked if someone else had entered the dungeon besides Chloe. Immediately after that, the axe warrior imagines in his head the image of Chloe along with her subordinates, saying that with her is the sword demon, lonely granny and demonic iron fist, and they are all at the highest level, and are also subordinates of the little demon. Then he visualizes the image of Brittany, saying that from the Roman alliance there is her, a drunkard from the beggar sect, an unrivaled man and the highest heavenly swordsman. Looking at his ally, the boy thought that they are also here, when suddenly he called out to the demonic spear. With a slightly confused expression, the mountain Yakpal explained that Chloe must be stopped, and he must help. Hearing this, the protagonist was extremely dumbfounded. A moment later, he raised his fist up, declaring that of course he will help and do everything in his power to help justice. While Chuck was punching the bracelet, Theodore was rejoicing, saying that this is what a young hero who killed the evil sword demon should do. Immediately after that, the warrior with the axe, slowly walking forward, asked if this was his first dungeon, to which he received a positive answer. With a smile on his face, looking back, Theodore explained that all dungeons are very different from each other, but in this one the monsters are very strong, and it is better to be careful. Suddenly, the mountain Yakpal stopped in place, seeing something in front. Someone unknown was standing right in front of the guys. In the eyes of the man, the image of the unknown was visible, who was standing in front. Suddenly, a voice was heard right through the cave, saying that they had come here too. It was Chloe, who with a smile on her face noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. She stood right in front of the protagonist, saying nothing. The little sky demon Chloe, grinning a little, called Chuck's name. At this time, the two warriors stood silently in place. Theodore looked straight ahead in surprise, not knowing what to say. Straight ahead, he saw Lady Brittany, who did not move at all. Happy to see her, the axeman said that this was great, and he had been uncomfortable since they entered the dungeon and separated, and the boy standing behind him asked him to wait. Menacingly looking straight ahead, the boy asked him to take a closer look. At the same time, the mountain Yakpal looked closely at his ally and was very surprised. The woman's face was half distorted. Noticing this, the axe warrior was very scared. A moment later, Brittany rushed forward with great speed, striking her foot right on the opponent's chest. After receiving damage, Theodore coughed up blood. Watching everything happening from the side, Chuck was very surprised, when suddenly Ruby in portable mode explained that it was a doppelganger. Watching his ally fly away from Brittany's blows, the cat girl explained that it was a monster that copied the appearance of the target and imitated it, which greatly surprised her companion. Leaning forward slightly, the protagonist mused that the shadowless soul flight and the traceless step that she had just used, he was able to copy the martial art of his target. At this time, the double, having dealt with the man, sharply looked away. Her attention was drawn to the next opponent. At the same moment, the bracelet on Chuck's arm suddenly activated. The boy was very angry, not understanding how she could use her appearance, and put on his armor. Noticing the dark energy that the protagonist exuded, Ruby asked why he was so worried and asked him to calm down. At this time, the double turned his head in his direction, after which he also moved his leg, using shadowless soul flight. Embodying the advance of the shadow clones, a huge number of copies of Brittany headed straight towards the protagonist. Chuck stood there, thinking that on the day the sword demon died. A memory suddenly appeared in his head, how the girl with white hair hugged him and told him that he had matured a lot. Holding his head, in agony, the boy thought that it was difficult for him to accept these words. The protagonist was tormented, because he had put in 2,100 years and was proud of himself for getting better, so he wanted to hear it from her. Looking at the huge number of copies of Brittany that were approaching him, he stated that, but not from a monster like her. The narrative of the story then shifts to the moment when Chuck, holding a spear in his hands, stood right in front of the corpse of the monster. Right behind him was Theodore, who asked what it was, and the boy explained that it was a doppelganger. Looking at the defeated copy of Brittany, the protagonist explained that compared to the real Lady Brittany, the doppelganger was weaker, but if you think about it, he was even able to copy her martial art, and something like that really exists. Suddenly, Chuck looked at Ruby in portable form, who explained that doppelgangers usually only copy appearances, and they cannot copy techniques, but it is knowledge from the outside world. Then, with a look full of enthusiasm, she added that in any case, there is no need to worry, because she is already trying to explore the dungeons and can become a guide, so you just need to trust her and show you the way. Suddenly, the monarch of the void in the form of armor intervened, asking what a worthless doll like her can do, to which she asked what he even said, since he sealed himself in armor. In response, the soul of the great demon stated that as soon as he returned to his body, he would kick her ass, and Ruby noted that he definitely would, but he would not be able to find her, when suddenly Chuck, angry at all this, asked them to be quiet. Immediately after this, silence arose around the boy. Then Theodore's voice was heard right through the cave, who said that a terrifying thought had just occurred to him. Hearing this, the protagonist looked in surprise straight at the mountain Yakpul, who asked that didn't they just fight with Lydia Brittany's doppelganger? After which he sighed in fear, looking straight ahead. A moment later, a man with a huge axe suggested what would happen if they or something else appeared, which greatly shocked Chuck. Then the boy was very scared, imagining the image of Chloe in his head. Immediately after this, the story's narrative shifts to a dead man who was slammed right into a wall, and the plot explained that he was the supreme celestial swordsman of the Murim Alliance. Right next to the corpse of his ally, there was another man, while a kerchief fluttered in front. This man was a peerless freak from the Murim Alliance who called the enemy a monster with a fearful expression. Right in front of him was a small heavenly demon whom he called by name. Calling out to Chloe, the peerless freak looked straight at the doppelganger of this woman. The man's hand trembled as he asked what was wrong with her, and whether she had learned a new demonic art, stating that he knew he could not defeat her. A moment later, he rushed forward saying that for chivalry and justice, and for the soul of the supreme heavenly swordsman who had met such a terrible death, he must avenge. Concentrating yellow energy in his palm, the peerless freak wished for the little heavenly demon Chloe to burn in hell. At the same time, her doppelganger destroyed the enemy with a blow of her handkerchief. A huge amount of blood dropped straight towards her. At this moment, many men began to stutter. A moment later there was a roar and blood poured out. The little sky demon's double was looking straight at the fallen enemy. The girl continued to look straight ahead emotionlessly. Suddenly, the monster tilted her head slightly to the side. It was impossible to see anything but indifference in her gaze. Immediately after this, the story moves to the real little sky demon, who had the same cold gaze. She looked straight at the corpse of her age, asking what had happened, because it had already been 9 years. Right at her feet was the murdered monster double of her friend. Looking straight at him, she noted that she was glad that this was not the real him. Looking at her injured arm, Chloe thought that she should have dressed up better. Then she took a step forward. Grinning, she said that he probably tried very hard and became stronger. Looking at the corpse of Chuck's double, the little sky demon said that if he died here, she would be very upset. Wishing that he would not die, away from the corpse of the monster. When she said his name, the narrative of the story suddenly shifted directly to the boy, whose gaze was full of seriousness. The sounds of heavy breathing could be heard right in the cave. They belonged to Brittany, who was wiping the sweat from her face, sitting right in front of the enemy's corpse. While continuing to breathe heavily, the girl with white hair remarked that who would have thought that a doppelganger would appear. Looking at the disappearing corpse of the monster, she thought that it was good that it was the doppelganger of the supreme celestial swordsman. After all, he was the weakest among them. Looking at the small bottle in her hands, Brittany thought that the thing that fell out of the doppelganger's corpse was an elixir, and it was quite pure. Looking around, the girl with white hair wondered where she should go now. After all, she could join her alliance members sooner. Looking ahead, she reasoned that if she faced a small sky demon or more than 2 of her subordinates, then she would have no chance of winning, when suddenly someone called out to her. Turning around, Brittany saw 2 people who called her lightning there. They were Chloe's followers, the small sky demon, the sword demon, and the iron fist demon, who glared at her and asked if it was really her. They then asked if she was alone, and the white-haired girl just glared at them without answering. Immediately after your story, it shifts to Chuck, who was looking at the magic crystal that was taken out of the corpse of Brittany's doppelganger, and was simply silent. Suddenly, the boy was greatly surprised when the spirit of the great demon in his armor asked him why he didn't eat it. In response, the protagonist explained that his mind, energy, and body were unstable, and perhaps if he ate him, he would be in even worse shape, and the Void Monarch, slightly opening his mouth, suggested that perhaps this would not happen. At the same time, he, imagining the black heart located in the protagonist's chest, explained that he felt it, because his heart was an incredible thing, and even among those known as the Great and Demons, he had not seen anyone who had such an exceptional heart as his. While the demon's soul added that, of course, this was all not counting him, Chuck looked ahead in surprise and simply remained silent. Suddenly, he noticed that his ally walking in front of him had stopped. At this time, Theodore looked straight ahead in surprise and said someone's name. He saw his injured ally in front, asking what happened to him, and the ally was happy to see him. It was a man from the Beggar sect, a top 3 rising star of the Orthodox sect, who was shaking in pain, asking that if he could talk to him, then he was not a double. Looking straight at him, he often thought of Toma and reasoned that he was one of the top 3 rising stars in the Orthodox sect, just like the monk. At that moment, the man with the axe ran straight to his ally, asking what was wrong with his hand, and he explained that he had met a double of the sword demon, and tens of units of sword energy were released from just one strike, so no one escaped. Then his voice carried through the cave, asking if he could get a potion first, and the boy gave him a healing potion. After drinking the potion that his allies gave him, the warrior from the beggar sect thanked him, because it saved his life. At this moment, Theodore's voice rang out, noting that unfortunately, if they had the elixir, they could have returned his arm, and he was only a little upset. Then Nicholas, seeing the boy standing behind his ally, asked who it was, and the mountain Yakbal explained that it was the spear demon and he was the man who defeated the sword demon. Hearing this, the man from the beggar sect walked closer to the protagonist and nodded his head, noting that he had heard a lot about him. With a slightly dissatisfied expression, he noted that Lady Brittany had mentioned him a couple of times, and asked if he was helping because he was worried about her, and what a deep and loving relationship they had between the elder and the younger. Hearing this, Chuck was greatly shocked. Looking straight ahead with a dissatisfied look, he asked if it was not normal for the younger to come to the aid of his elder, and stated that he wanted to ask him how he was related to her. In response to this, Nicholas replied that they were very close comrades, and glared at his opponent, while he did the same, noting that of course he was also very close to her. At this time, the guys between them were just shaking with fear and did not know what to do. Suddenly, the two were very embarrassed and did not understand why they were so angry. Immediately after this, the monarch of the void intervened in the conversation, who asked if he really liked the white woman, and it was so funny to watch men try to intimidate each other, when suddenly he received a blow right on himself. A moment later, Nicholas's voice was heard throughout the cave, asking for forgiveness, because it was rude to behave like that with the person who gave him the potion, and the protagonist explained that everything was fine and also apologized. Suddenly, the 3 allies heard an unknown voice sharply turning to the side, which said that it seemed like they were having fun. An unknown woman was walking straight towards them, saying that the fiery love of young people was a joy to behold. It was a follower of the little heavenly demon Chloe, a lonely granny, who asked with a smile on her face if she could join. Theodore was very scared when he noticed her, saying that it was a lonely granny. Smiling widely, the woman said that this pig had a very loud voice and it seemed like they had fought with someone and fell into this pathetic state, so she thought she could take care of them herself. Grabbing his spear, Chuck thought that this lonely granny was also a top-level martial artist. Suddenly, Ruby in portable mode smiled widely, saying that she had finished analyzing the dungeon. Sharply turning towards her, the boy asked her to hurry up, because he was just about to fight, and she said that she would show him everything now. Immediately after that, a dungeon map appeared right in front of the protagonist's face. The boy looked straight at it while his assistant explained that the blue dot was him, and the yellow dots were other people, while the red ones were the dungeon's monsters. Chuck stared at the dungeon map, saying that it was enough and that he needed to focus on the battle now, and then fell silent. Suddenly, he noticed that some 3 dots were moving very quickly, and they were probably fighting. Suddenly realizing something, the boy was very surprised. While his allies were fighting the lonely granny, Chuck was wondering what was behind that wall. Staring ahead with a menacing gaze, he reasoned that perhaps one of the yellow dots was Brittany, and if she had met Chloe or someone else and was now fighting, then he needed to act, when Ruby suddenly called out. A moment later, he asked if it was possible to destroy this wall, and the cat girl, stunned by such a question, said that they would find out after they tried, but it would not be easy, because the wall was quite thick, based on the readings of her detectors. At this time, the warriors from the Murim Alliance, as well as the lonely granny, wrapped themselves in their own energy to continue the battle. At the same time, they noticed Chuck gathering a huge amount of internal energy in his spear, and they realized that this was all happening behind them. Theodore smiled widely, thinking that the demon spear was probably preparing a powerful attack, and that was wonderful, so he hoped that it could buy him some time. At this time, Chuck, continuing to gather a huge amount of power in his spear, thought that the usual enhanced energy would not work, and a little more was needed. When his weapon was almost overflowing, he still thought that more was needed. A moment later, a ball of a huge amount of mana appeared on the tip of his spear. The Void Monarch, watching all this in surprise, said that, however, this is not a technique that can be used at his current level. At that moment, a symbol of time appeared right above Chuck's head, and he thought that it was all because he had already tried it. Immediately after that, the boy pointed a spear with charged energy straight ahead. Seeing this, the warrior with the axe was very happy. A moment later, he jumped aside so that his ally could strike, but he deflected the spear to the side. The protagonist poured all his strength into this strike, sharply turning to the side. Watching the force of his strike, the lonely granny was very surprised. Everyone present was extremely dumbfounded when nothing happened. Then they looked in surprise at the wall in which a huge hole was made. Brittany was heavily painted, when suddenly someone appeared in front of her. Chloe's subordinates looked straight ahead, not understanding anything. Chuck appeared right in front of them, who stood up for the girl with white hair. When he noted that they had not seen each other for a long time, Brittany was very confused. Chuck stood right in front of his ally, protecting her. The demonic Iron Fist asked who he was with a displeased expression, looking straight ahead, and the demonic swordsman asked if someone in their alliance had used a spear. At this time, Brittany was very confused, asking how her friend was there. Holding the pill in his hands, the boy explained that he came to help her. At the same time, he remembered how the Buddhist monk gave him this pill, and thought that he left the great circulation elixir that William gave him because he was afraid of experiencing an energy deviation. Immediately after that, the protagonist bit off that very pill, thinking that in such a situation, he no longer had time to do so. Immediately after that, a huge amount of internal energy flowed directly into him. The demonic swordsman calmly watched everything happening. At this time, the protagonist's energy space was filled with power, while he himself was thinking that he had only eaten half, but had already filled his entire energy core, which was empty, and he did not have any symptoms of energy deviation, so the Void Monarch was right. At this moment, the old man, holding the blade straight in front of him, said that he would deal with the lightning, and his ally said that he would then kill this brat full of fighting spirit. Immediately after that, the guys took fighting stances, waiting for the blow. A moment later, Chloe's subordinates rushed to attack. The demonic swordsman crossed his blade with Chuck's spear. With a deft movement, the boy managed to reflect the enemy's attack. At this time, Brittany was stunned, watching the progress of the fight, and wondered when he became so strong, because when they met last year, he was not like this. At this time, the fight between the boy and the old man continued. The demonic swordsman looked straight ahead menacingly, asking who this strong comrade was, because he seemed less experienced, but they could easily defeat him. Looking straight into his menacing eyes, the old man somehow felt an incredible flow of time inside him, even though he had not gone through age regression. At that moment, the boy suddenly moved forward. His spear was moving towards the swordsman at great speed. The old man and the boy continued to strike each other and deflect them. The dexterous movements of the sword and spear did not allow the two to injure each other. At some point in the battle, Chuck noticed something. Then he struck with his spear with great force, throwing the opponent's hand aside. Immediately after that, the demonic swordsman released his internal energy to strike. Then he made several swings of his blades, sending an energy slash forward straight towards the opponent. Noticing this, the protagonist tightly gripped the handle of his weapon. Chuck deftly wielded his spear, parrying all of the enemy's attacks. The old man continued to strike and laughed, because he enjoyed this fight. Suddenly, he held his hand forward, and was about to use the third form of the supreme spear of the 9 heavens. When the protagonist used the hidden snake strike, his spear twisted right around the enemy. Sharply looking to the side, the demonic swordsman did not understand what kind of movement this was. He could not announce where they were flying. A moment later, he received a blow directly to his shoulder. After receiving damage, the old man was greatly stunned and staggered a little. With a wide smile on his face, the demonic swordsman realized that the spear suddenly flew from below. Immediately after that, he smiled widely and began to laugh, thinking that this was just a wonderful fight. Looking at the protagonist, who was full of seriousness, the old man thought that, judging by his art, he was a master who had trained for a long time, and he was curious about his age, to think that he was so experienced even though he was so young. Watching Brittany fight against his ally, the demonic swordsman thought that he would enjoy this fight a little longer, but his spear technique was very difficult to predict, and if it dragged on, he might be in trouble, because the demonic Iron Fist was also losing. Staring ahead with a menacing gaze, the old man realized that they needed to quickly get rid of them and return to the liege's side, when suddenly the plot noticed that there were 3 things he did not know. While Chuck was holding his spear straight out in front of him, we are told that the guy in front of him is a close friend of the liege, whom he loves and respects. At this moment, the old man was very dumbfounded, while the plot added that the spear technique he had just mentally praised was his mistress's spear technique. A moment later, Chloe's double pierced her own ally with her handkerchief. There was not a shred of compassion in the double's eyes. The monster made a huge hole right through the demonic swordsman's body, while the plot said that his life would be taken by his own liege. At this time, the old man, coughing up blood, asked why. A moment later, he fell straight to the ground, while everyone around him was extremely dumbfounded. The demonic Iron Fist abruptly turned back and called out to the small heavenly demon. With a look full of confusion, the big man asked why she killed the sword demon. Looking at his mistress's double, he explained that even if she didn't like them, they called her their liege, and when she would rule the world in the near future. Clenching his hand into a fist, he added that they wanted to see the demonic martial artist rule the world, that's all. Looking at the corpse of his ally, the demonic Iron Fist asked why. Because the sword demon followed her with all his heart. In response, the double Chloe only slightly tilted her head. Teeth from dissatisfaction with such a reaction, the big guy asked if he was really not even worth talking about, and then everything was clear. While Chloe stood still, he wished death on the little heavenly demon. With just a small movement of his handkerchief, the double managed to destroy him, and the plot explained that, of course, the demonic Iron Fist died, because Chloe who appeared was her double, and both the sword demon and the demonic Iron Fist could not know this, because they never met a double in the dungeon. While the ground was covered in blood, we were told that the demonic martial artists who followed Chloe could die from suffocation of rage. At that moment, Chuck and Brittany were left alone against Chloe's double. At that moment, the boy asked his girlfriend to leave, and she, looking at him sharply, clarified what he said. Staring forward with a serious look, the protagonist stated that he was going to die there one, so he made a hole in the back, and if she went through it, she would find the drunken beggar and the mountain Yakbal. Looking straight at the double of the little sky demon, Chuck said that she needed to lead them there, and they could fight her together, and only then would they have a chance to win. Hearing all this, the girl with white hair with a frightened expression on her face said that if he did this, he might not survive, and he only noted that she was faster than him. With an innocent smile on his face, Chuck said that he was counting on her. After his words, Brittany was about to say something. After a moment, she closed her mouth, realizing that there was no point in talking anymore. Immediately after this, the girl threw the boy an elixir and called him by name while he was catching it. With sympathy in her eyes, Lightning asked him not to die. Hearing this, the protagonist paused for a moment and said with a smile on his face that he would definitely survive. He then looked straight at Chloe's double, noting that this might not be accurate. Imagining the image of Chloe standing right in front of the two arguing men, Chuck mused that in his past life, she left the dungeon alive, and when asked what happened, she answered. With a look full of indifference, the little sky demon explained that everyone died. Her fingers in her back, and the boy reasoned that everyone decided that the little sky demon simply killed everyone, but he thinks he knows the truth now. Looking at the monster in the form of Chloe, the protagonist reasoned that in his past life, her double killed everyone. He looked straight at his opponent, thinking that her cloth looked like an artifact that could stretch and fly forward at incredible speed. Staring at his opponent, Chuck wondered if he could stop her at his current level. At that moment, Chloe's scarf moved slightly. A moment later, she struck with her cloth at great speed, directing it straight towards the boy. The protagonist, noticing this, became very wary. He deftly swung his spear to deflect the opponent's blow. Using a huge amount of his strength to do this, Chuck thought he could handle it, and felt like his arm was about to be torn off. Using his own strength, he managed to survive the double's blow, jumping back. Landing right on the ground a little behind, the boy reasoned that it would take at least 5 minutes for Brittany to bring the drunk beggar and the mountain Yakbal, who were fighting the lonely granny. Enveloping himself with inner energy, the protagonist looked at the canvas approaching him, and wondered what would happen and what would change if these three helped him fight. With a deft movement of his weapon, he managed to reflect another attack of the enemy. Immediately after that, he coughed up blood, but thought that he wanted to live and had to do it. Gritting his teeth, Chuck collected his thoughts, realizing that this was necessary because he had promised many people, and asked what he needed to do to survive. Looking at Chloe's double, he understood that he had to hold on and fight her. Fixing his menacing gaze forward, the boy decided for himself that he had to win. Visualizing the sign of the god of time, he thought that his current body may be weak, but his mind is not, and he will remember the 2,100 years he spent in the world of the mind. This is what is needed now. With an expression full of rage, the protagonist declared that he wanted to remember everything he learned so far. At the same time, memories of little Chloe appeared in his head, who said with a smile on her face that those who attack from the front are weak from the sides, and when fighting someone so powerful that it is difficult to fight, you need to parry the attacks and turn them against the enemy. At the same time, the doppelganger of the lesser heavenly demon attacked again with his cloth. With the help of his ka, Chuck tried to parry the blows of his opponent. One could see only madness in his gaze, but he himself continued to fight. At this time, the doppelganger of Chloe did not feel any emotions. A moment later, the girl noticed how her opponent appeared right above her head. Immediately after, a loud roar was heard throughout the area. Chuck held the spear in his hands, trying to see what was wrong with his opponent. After a moment, he saw that the monster had blocked his attack with a handkerchief. Realizing this, the boy quickly jumped back to regroup. The protagonist looked straight ahead with displeasure, when he suddenly heard a voice coming from the armor, asking if he understood what happened. Looking directly at Chloe's doppelganger, the Void Monarch explained that this girl, without using leg techniques, palms, or martial arts, she simply swings her cloth, and to begin with, it is not a very powerful tool, and it is so strong only because she is very experienced and has a ton of internal energy. Hearing all this, Chuck was very dumbfounded, thinking that doppelgangers are able to reproduce the movements of the original, and the little heavenly demon usually does not use martial arts, but uses her handkerchief. Suddenly, Chloe's double jerked his hand. The boy looked straight at the monster when she put her hand in front of her, and he knew that she did not use martial arts on those who were not worthy of it. At the same time, the spirit of the great demon, sealed in the armor, suddenly glowed, congratulating the child, because he was recognized as an opponent worth using them against, and it seemed like she was just fooling around all this time. After all this, the protagonist was very dumbfounded, thinking about Brittany and that she did not need to come there. Watching Chloe's double, who was wrapping herself in internal energy, he thought that she was a real monster. Suddenly, the narrative of the story moved straight to the corpse of a lonely granny, who was lying under the rocks. Brittany, with fear on her face, said that they should go save the protagonist right now. Right in front of her was a wounded Theodore, who asked her to wait and look at him, and the girl with white hair explained that they did not have time to discuss this now. Lightning with an angry look asked to forget about them all and said that if they guys did not go, then she would go alone, when suddenly the drunk beggar appeared behind her. A moment later, Brittany's eyes clouded over. The mountain Yakbal, looking straight at his ally, what did he do? And he, holding the girl with his hand, explained that he knocked her out by blocking the pain point, and if they went as she said they would die. While blood flowed from his mouth, the man with blue hair noted that, firstly, they were wrong about the combat power of their opponent, and they used all their strength in the fight with the granny, so in order to subdue the little sky demon, they need 5 times more power than they have now. Then he added that it was better to retreat now, and the warrior with an axe who heard this silently recalled the image of Chuck. Looking at his ally, Theodore asked if there was a way out of there at all, and if they did not defeat the boss, then there was no way out, and the drunken beggar showed him an unknown scroll, explaining that they had luck, and he found the dungeon escape scroll when he searched a lonely granny. Hearing this, the mountain Yakbal agreed with his ally, and he, continuing to hold the scroll in his hand, explained that this was not an easy decision, and thanked him for agreeing to this. Meanwhile, the man with blue hair changed the position of the unconscious Brittany, after which he silently looked into the hole that Chuck made with his blow. The drunken beggar trembled a little, not knowing what to say. Finally, apologizing to his ally, whom he was abandoning, he used the teleportation scroll, and everything around was illuminated with a blue glow. There is an energy circle in front of the man in the armor. Chuck is bleeding. The voice from the armor tells Chuck to pull herself together because it is coming. The brunette goes on the attack. Chuck stabs the spear while the voice continues that he needs to hit the center, then at 10 o'clock on the conventional clock, then at 7 o'clock. Chuck looks ahead in horror while the voice tells him that he needs to dodge a blow from the left, and then rages. The guy jumps back while the voice continues that he is getting too upset, but he must act according to its instructions. The guy screams for him to shut up while the voice tells him to try harder because his house is about to be destroyed. G bows his head while the voice tells him that he is an ungrateful brat, and that if he had not blocked the blow, he would already be a pool of blood, and that if he died, he will have to rot in this miserable place for the rest of his life. The voice reminds Chuck about Brittany, saying that the woman has not returned yet, although quite a lot of time has passed. The guy sullenly answers that he knows it, and gets a question in response about whether he hates her because she betrayed him earlier. They look at the girl, and he still does not shut up, that if he had not come there to save her, he would not have found himself in such danger, and notes that he is now simply dying for her. Chuck notes that he does not care about this and listens to the indignation of the interlocutor. The guy gets up and continues that he knows it, namely that she is not like that, and that he is sure that something happened, and adds that he decided not to think about such nonsense. He smiles and answers that he wanted her not to come back and suggests to start with the fact that he would have died on that mountain anyway if not for her. The armor thought about it. Chuck is perplexed by the hysterical laughter of the armor. The girl goes to them, and he continues that he is starting to like all this, because in any case he will not let him die just like that. Kyle smirks and says he'll help him out a little. Chuck looks back in surprise. The guy asks what he's doing, and he tells him to just shut up and accept it, because he's trying to help him. He emits a spark and asks him to look, because he's a real god of chaos. The girl looks ahead in confusion. Kyle breaks away and says that it would be easy for him to gather his forces together if there was a mediator, and suggests that he go ahead and use his power for his own pleasure. Chuck looks ahead in horror. Chuck asks if this means anything, and he replies that it's part of his demonic powers, and he knew that his heart could take some demonic power. Chuck is scared and thinks that the wounds are healing, and even his broken arm is recovering, and on top of that he feels incredible power. The voiceover notes that the air has changed and the double has inherited the arrogance and curiosity of his original. While the girl is frozen, he continues that while he was standing there and watching Chuck, all this happened. The girl lights up with a red light, and he says that the creature has recognized Chuck as a worthy opponent. Chuck grits his teeth and thinks that this power is incredible, because he has a feeling as if his meridians are about to burst inside. Kyle urges him to come to his senses, because she is approaching. The girl is ready to attack head-on. The brunette swings his spear, thinking that he attacked him for the first time and this is still not enough. The guy angrily listens as he tells him that if he gives control over his body to the demon, then he will take care of the crazy creature, to which he refuses, because he himself can do it. Chuck tenses up and says that he just has to give him his power, to which the demon laughs and adds that if he gives it, then he will not be able to cope with it. The voiceover says that this is a power that he could not use because of his weak body, but nevertheless he knew perfectly well how to use it. The girl prepares to knee him while he continues that with the level he has reached in the mental sphere, he could defeat the doppelganger standing in front of him. He also says that he could defeat even Chloe. Chuck frowns and mentally asks to just give him strength, and that's it. Chuck's spear glows purple. It fills with red energy. The doppelganger and Chuck are about to clash in battle. The girl is stunned by what she sees. The spear releases a powerful volley towards her. The doppelganger hits the wall with her back. Chuck strikes again and tears the floor to shreds. He frowns and uses the ultimate spear of the Nine Heavens technique, specifically its fourth form. The spear emits purple smoke while he uses the distraction of the 9 dragons. The room is cracking at the seams from the battle. The doppelganger gets rid of the excess smoke around her. She holds out her palm and it glows. Her huge palm is about to slap the poor brunette. He looks ahead and realizes something. The guy is stunned by the fact that the most powerful technique he can use after receiving the power of the Void Monarch. Chuck is preparing to attack again with the 9 Heavens Supreme Spear technique, but this time in its 6th form. He grits his teeth. The guy extends his fist, using the path of nothingness. The doppelganger flies back via a shockwave. He looks ahead with empty red eyes. There is only a flash ahead. All that remains are hot stones and steam emanating from them. Chuck is trying to catch his breath exhausted. However, he is standing on his feet, while his opponent is lying on the floor. The guy grits his teeth. He forces himself forward. The guy lets out a scream. Chuck looks at his small self and realizes that 9 years have passed since then, and several thousand years specifically for him. The guy looks at the sparkling opponent, and continues that he has come this far simply from the thought of that person. The brunette falls to his knees and wonders if he has become any stronger in the end. The demon asks him how he feels when he borrows his powers to win, and notes that his companion is very funny. He emits sparks and continues that he could say that, but notes that having power and being able to use it are two completely different things, and he would be able to control his abilities, which are several levels higher than his. Chuck is dissatisfied, while Kyle thinks that he is an incredibly interesting comrade and asks him to get ready. The guy is wary, while he emphasizes that now he will take his power from him and the return from the manipulation will be huge, so much so that if he does not concentrate, he will immediately die, to which he receives in response that he should not worry, because he is used to pain. Kyle prepares to perform the manipulation and says with a grin that he wonders if he can get used to this. The guy tensed warily. His eyes widen from a sharp pain. Chuck feels like he is broken into thousands of fragments. The guy lets out a scream. All he sees is darkness. Ruby tries to bring him to his senses. She puts her hands on him and asks if he's awake, to which he calls her by name. The girl looks tiredly while he asks how long it's been since he passed out, to which she says an hour has passed, and that he's been writhing in pain the whole time. She remembers that she used the elixir that the girl gave her, but it still didn't seem to make him feel any better, and she left. The guy looks at the empty vial and asks again if he felt that bad even after taking the elixir, and that if it weren't for that, he would have really died. Chuck smirks and notes that he's in Brittany's dead again. Kyle asks how he feels now, to which he receives the answer that he feels like he's dying and that all his muscles, energy core and meridians are all tangled up in one big ball. Ruby fearfully asks him to wait, because he can't move yet, but he only replies that he needs to go. He grits his teeth in pain as she asks him where he needs to go. Someone's legs are walking in an unknown direction. Chuck looks at the lonely granny. The ball says that he feels mana and reports that a teleportation magic was used here, and Chuck asks him again about this, to which he receives in response that the video was an escape scroll obtained from the dungeon. The brunette rolls his eyes while he adds that 3 people teleported, and he wonders who those 2 with Brittany are. The guy smiles and thinks that this means that Brittany successfully got out, and he has already achieved his goal just by being here, while the ball asks where he is heading. Chuck looks at the map and declares that he is heading forward. The map has approached the boss's location, and he continues that he needs to go forward. He holds onto the wall and talks about Chloe and asks how much stronger she has become over the past 9 years. Someone is running while he thinks how much she has changed. The ball is very puzzled, and he wonders how her voice sounds, how she walks, and what impression she makes on people. Chuck falls to his knees and wonders if she thinks about him as much as he thinks about her. The guy coughs up a clot of blood and understands that this is unlikely. He got up and walked on, reasoning that he had been walking towards her for all 9 years. But for him in the meantime 2,100 years had passed, and what she told him 13 years ago was all that gave him the incentive to move on all this time. His legs are shaking, and he continues that he wants to show her the result of his hard work and wants to shout that it was thanks to her that he was able to become stronger. Chuck can barely walk and understands that there is still a little left, and he just needs to go a little further. His eyes go dim. Something stunned him. His eyes sparkle from what he saw. The brunette flies around the room. Chuck's breath caught from how beautiful it was, and he realized that his childish desire to show off his height instantly collapsed. The demon prepares to attack Chloe as he continues that her every move was perfect, and this is perfect, even better than he imagined during the test. She attacks as he realizes that the devil couldn't imitate her at all, and this is what he was striving for all this time. The girl turns around as he calls her by name. She fixes her hair. Chloe smiles and states that she thinks it was the dungeon boss. The brunette walks forward and continues that he was quite strong and the past her would hardly have been able to defeat him. She smugly closed her eyes and says that she also met a monster that was similar to him, and he used the supreme spear of the 9 heavens. A view of her from behind as she says that he turned out to be quite an interesting opponent. Chuck is confused that she told him that he got stronger. Chloe closes her eyes again as the guy asks her not to say that because it seems like he is absolutely satisfied, and she smirks that he finally answered her. Chuck wipes the blood away contentedly, and says that he hasn't known what to say yet, and she asks if he should hide behind the wall. He calmly replies that it's because he's still not good enough to meet her. The girl stretches. She turns and asks who he met, to which he replies that he met her. He smiles weakly, and she continues that he must have suffered a lot and still managed to survive and get there, which means he must have been able to defeat her, to which the guy replied that he can't say that he did it alone. Chloe leaned her back against the wall. The brunette remembers him earlier and congratulates him on the fulfillment of his dream, which was that he would train martial arts with her, and in 10 years he would be able to pierce her heart with his spear. But the guy retorted that it is not worth thinking about. Both are sitting contentedly, each on their own side. Chuck begins a monologue by saying that 9 years have passed, and that it was a really meaningful time for him. He smiles, and the girl asks how it was for him, to which he replies that it was meaningful, but nevertheless, he suffered a lot. Chloe looks displeased. The girl asks if he will go with her. The guy asks again, to which she receives in response that, as she told earlier, she hates being the object of other people's expectations. She remembers that it was like this before she arrived in this world, and even after she was called there, these disgusting expectant looks followed her everywhere. She finds a refutation against the wall. She continues that she doesn't think she would be upset if those were his eyes. The guy listened to her sadly and asked for forgiveness. The girl smiles awkwardly and asks if he wants to travel with her, to which he receives a negative answer. Chuck seriously replies that if he goes with her, he will become like a shadow again, and he does not want this, because he wants to be on equal terms with her. The brunette lowered his head, while she asks if he will stick to his opinion even though he has already become much stronger than she expected, to which he notes that it is still not enough. Chloe sighs and notes his greed for power. She turns away and says that 9 years and exactly 1 year remains until their agreement, which he confirms. Chuck points at her and continues that 1 more year, and he will be able to climb to the level where she is now, and then they will meet again. The guy is taken aback by the question of whether he will go with her then. Chloe laughs contentedly. She stands up and says that she agrees to such conditions and that she understood him, because for now it is worth restraining her greed towards him, and then, she asks permission to tell him one thing. The brunette smiles slyly, while she says that it will not be easy for him, because during this year she will become stronger than him, but he already knows this, and in the end she is the person whom he personally made his goal. Chloe sighs and thinks that he has changed a lot. Both stand up. Both said in chorus that then they will meet in a year at the promised place. The brunettes look at each other contentedly. The girl leaves thinking that she would really like to take him with her even by force, because she is dying to turn back time and look at his face, but she holds back because she does not want him to hate her. Chloe smiles and continues that they should talk when they meet in a year, because she wants to meet him face to face and eat and drink together, and talk about everything that happened. She reaches out to the blue haze and remembers what she forgot to tell him. The girl smiles towards the flash. She forgot to tell him that she missed him outside the dungeon. In the background of the forest, someone got hit. Brittany, horrified, clutches her hair and asks why they brought her there, because the guy is there fighting without her. The dark-haired guy says that they had no choice, and his comrade thinks that she is reacting so violently despite being known for her insensitivity. She looks displeased and continues that they are cowards and asks what it means to be a warrior. The dark-haired man swings his arm and asks her to calm down first, while she quietly says that she is leaving the alliance. The man asks again in bewilderment, while she answers that she no longer wants to be in such a place, and asks him not to look for her. Brittany turns around with disdain and says that she finds them all disgusting. The dark-haired man stands stunned. The girl bites her lip from tears and mentally asks Chuck for forgiveness, because she is very sorry that everything turned out this way. Against the background of the forest, she thinks about what she needs. The blonde raises her head and clarifies that she needs to become stronger. The elf is training. The red-haired woman covered her mouth in horror. Tom is practicing his blows under the auspices of William. The brunette is eating someone's paw and turns around displeased. The man looks at the sparks in the air in the forest. He touches the mask. End of the first season. The voiceover says that the bipedal creatures that live in this world, which everyone calls people. He introduces us to 2 people and continues that they have norms and rules and they follow them to maintain order in their society. But there are creatures that ignore the rules or do not obey them at all. In the background of the act of devouring the girl, he says that such creatures feed on the blood of others. The Skeleton King screams, and he continues that creatures that ignore even death and continue to live in vice. He introduces us to a creature in blue armor with the words that these are creatures that have thrown away the respect and beliefs that they should have kept. The werewolf screams, and the voice says that these are creatures that are possessed by barbaric nature. They howl at the moon. In the background of a disheveled man, he says that creatures that are not people at all. Returning to Chuck, he completes the thought of creatures that are on the border and that people call such non-humans. Chuck is standing in a purple uniform. He looks around and does not understand where he is. The guy realizes where he is until someone asks him why he is so pale. A purple entity materializes behind him and giggles. Chuck asks the haze if it is the Void Monarch, to which he receives a positive answer. The entity peers at him while he asks what this place is and is informed that they are in his dream. The entity remembers and says that when he lent it his power, then their spiritual worlds seemed to connect, and while he was sleeping, the Void Monarch was able to penetrate his dream. The Void Monarch refers to Ruby and continues that at the moment his physical body is suffering from the effects of using his power, but nevertheless, he will not die. Chuck turns around and wonders if he's serious, because he was already worried that he was in a mirage again, but since after experiencing everything, his memories turned out to be hallucinations. The guy asks if this is his true form, to which the demon laughs and replies that he just took on a form in which he is comfortable. The Monarch of the Void flies up and asks if he wants to see what he will really look like. Chuck looks at the patches of purple smoke. The Monarch of the Void begins to take shape. He shows his humanoid form and asks what he thinks about it, because here is his true form, his as a great demon and the Monarch of the Void. The demon supports his lower jaw while the guy says that he looks more human than he expected, to which he replies that demons are still very similar to people. Purple smiles and continues that this is not his real body, but he is very glad that he has it at all after so much time, to which he receives a question about what he is doing in this place, because his interlocutor is tired. Chuck finds out that he has a couple of questions for him. The Monarch of the Void asks with displeasure, and clarifies with him what he is. He remembers that he gave him his power, which, by the way, people like him are not able to cope with. Chuck sullenly listens to the fact that, nevertheless, he was still able to cope with it, and used it so deftly, as if it originally belonged to him, and asks how he managed to do such a thing. The demon crosses his arms over his chest in response to Chuck's question, why would he even tell such a thing? To which the demon only grinned and said that he should do it at least because if not for his power, the guy would already be dead, but asks him if he is shameless, in addition to his own weakness. Chuck listens to him as he shared his powers with him and was able to feel his emotions, namely all his aspirations, his inferiority complex, and these are all the emotions of a weak creature that he, the invincible one, has never been familiar with. The demon moved closer and notes that, however, he is morally strong enough not to let him subdue him and asks again who he is. Chuck opens his mouth to answer who he is. The Monarch of the Void answers that he knew it. He sat down on the ground and continues that he knew he was a regressor, but Mersher and Dinur, he could not even imagine that this guy was trained by two gods. Purple smiles and continues that now he understands everything. That's where he gets such moral strength, and the ability to resist, and the abilities inherent in his species. Chuck points at him while he says that he cannot believe that he was able to train in the world of the mind for 2,100 years, because it is so frivolous. But the guy stops him with the words that he is older than him and asks to show him respect as an elder. The Void Monarch bursts out laughing, because no matter how old he is still a child to him and urges him to first become stronger than him, so that later he will be able to say such nonsense. But to himself he thought that such a moment will not come in his life. Chuck listens with displeasure to the question of what he was able to achieve in 2,100 years of training, to which he receives in response that he has already said that the body is not able to demonstrate everything that he became capable of after the test. Purple grins smugly, because this is true, but nevertheless, he should not think that he is ridiculing his talents, although he should do just that. Chuck is stunned by the fact that he mentioned the limits of human strength. The Void Monarch madly asks him to become a demon. The brunette looks at him in confusion. The demon sees the guy's broken soul and continues that he probably already felt that as a price for using his power, it leaked into him, and his heart is like a monster's. Purple continues that if he becomes a demon, he will make an extremely interesting creature. The Monarch of the Void mentions the protagonist's childhood friend, that if he becomes a demon, he will finally become stronger than the girl he is so crazy about. Chuck is desperate, and does not understand what to do. He looks madly ahead. The guy sits opposite the demon and refuses his deal, to which he receives in response that he simply let him know that such an option is quite available to him. Chuck sternly listens that he must know the main thing, that he should not forget about the inhuman energy that is inside him, because the guy is already on the verge of possibilities. Someone tells the guy to go north. The crazy grandfather says that in 5 years he is ordered to go to a place where the 1,000-year-old snow does not melt, and that it is there that he will be able to meet someone very important. Against the background of a forest clearing, someone thought that he understood why they were going to the great city of the north, the northern city. Ruby clenches her fists in displeasure and asks why they have to live on the streets like this, even though it will last 3 months. Chuck chews on a piece of dried meat and replies that it's because they have nowhere else to stay and that they are almost there, so she should calm down. The demon shines through the cuff and asks if the guy should become an object so as not to waste food, to which the girl asks again and asks the boobless idiot to stop talking nonsense. Chuck shows the demon to the girl. The guy continues to chew, thinking that it all started from that day. He remembers the day he saw Chloe and that 3 months have passed. Chuck thinks about the battle and continues that when they escaped from that dungeon, he paid dearly for borrowing the power of the Void Monarch, and he barely managed to recover before they set off on themselves, as William bequeathed. The guy thinks about the city of the Northern City, that at the moment their goal is this northern city, and after 3 months of wandering they have almost arrived at their destination. He thinks about Neville, that according to his information, this city was once ruled by a bloody sky demon. Against the background of warriors, he continues that after he lost his arm in a fight with a lesser sky demon, order was disrupted and all kinds of monsters and demons went wild, and now this place is more like the underworld. Ruby holds her legs and says that before the appearance of the bloody sky demon, the northern city was a land of demons, unorthodox factions and non-humans, and she honestly says that she does not want to go there. Chuck asks again about non-humans, to which he receives in response that the northern city has always been called the world of non-humans and demons. Chuck glances at the monarch of the void, while she continues that demons live there, like the void demon, liches, vampires, werewolves, monsters similar to humans. Ruby doesn't understand what Chuck has realized. The guy against the forest background says that he has been smelling a dog for some time now. White eyes are visible from behind the trees. Chuck turns around happily, because here is proof that they are close to their destination. The werewolves attack, while he continues that he hasn't exercised for a long time. The guy uses a weapon and says that it's time for him to warm up. Chuck looks sternly ahead. The girl shouts at him to be careful, because lycanthropes become stronger at night, and cannot be defeated with only ordinary weapons. The guy thinks about ordinary weapons. He imagines what it could be. Jessie looks at the pink stone in bewilderment. Chuck asks again if this is a pink energy stone, and she asks if he is so stupid that he did not even know what it was before, and clarifies how he was able to get it, and such a clean and huge specimen. Chuck remembers that this thing appeared when he defeated Chloe's double and replies that he found one in the dungeon. The guy looks at the stone and notes that he wants to make a spear with this crystal and thinks that the girl does not look like herself. However, the piece is so large that even after forging the spear, part of it will remain. Jessie does not let go of the stone, and he continues that she can take its remains as payment, and she clarifies if he has gone crazy. The girl falls into a rage and says that it will be a great honor for her to simply work with the pink energy stone, because for such a piece you can buy yourself several castles, and he wants her to take it as payment, then let her insert its pieces into her magic armor. Chuck tells her what he wants, and she agrees. Chuck stands pompously with a new spear. In real time, spinning his weapon, he prepares to try it out. The guy pierces the enemy through and through without thinking. The wolf gets hit in the face. Chuck turns around and attacks another one. And another one. The brunette finished off another one with a blow to the chest. He got a cut on his face. He stands surrounded by wolves and thinks. The guy scratches his temple and asks what he should do now, because he does not understand why they attacked him at all. The wolf is taken aback and asks how dare he, and clarifies if he thinks he can survive after such statements. Chuck turns around and asks what's wrong, because he did not even start all this, to which he receives in response that, according to the wolves, it was he who created a mess on the territory of the sect of ghost wolves, which is also their own territory. The guy sullenly asks again about the sect of ghost wolves and says that he remembers that dogs created a sect and specifies where their territory is. Ruby is indignant from behind the bushes, because how could he forget that he passed by a small village on the way here? Because he created bedlam in that very village and they were unable to collect taxes from there. The guy discontentedly recalls what they are talking about, because there the innkeeper drugged Ruby and tried to sell her into slavery, while the monarch of the void adds that it was funny for him to watch this paralyzed catgirl. The wolf stared at him in bewilderment. Chuck angrily hits him in the face and screams that they are the ones in the wrong here. He points his finger at the other and asks how dare they behave so absurdly, and also blame him, provided that they themselves can stop attacking, and then he will stop and leave too. The werewolf furiously notes that what he said is nonsense and asks again if he thinks that after such humiliation they will just let him go. The opponent tried to tell him that the sect of ghost wolves never forgets insults, but in the process his head was cut off. The guy looks at him without an ounce of excitement. The monarch of the void asks what he has in mind, to which he replies that nothing like that. Chuck asks if he should think about whether or not to kill such scum, to which the demon agrees with him. They look at the decapitated wolf and he continues that they are too weak for him, and with such power in his power, he could easily kill a dozen of his kind. Chuck discontentedly asks again what he is getting at, and he says that he should not be too self-confident. The demon continues that he seemed to demonstrate his superiority when he killed those dogs, and only invincible creatures like him are allowed to do such things. The guy listens with hatred as he says that those guys look familiar to him. Ruby says that vampires and lycanthropes serve the same master, and from there create low-ranking life forms. She thinks about dogs and continues that in the case of lycanthropes, low-ranking life forms will be similar to their master. The Void Monarch looks at the corpse and says that if their master is the leader of the wolf sect of the Ghost Wolf sect. Chuck looks at him, and he continues that in that case, in his current state, the guy will not be able to defeat him, so he asks him not to show off if he does not want to die so early. The brunette angrily asks what he is even asking him about, and if he means that he should have allowed them to sell Ruby into slavery. The girl cries and asks him for forgiveness, because everything happened because of her, to which he denies it, because a skirmish with them was inevitable, since they entered their territory. Against the background of fireflies, the demon says that he just warned him. The guy listens that in this world there will always be someone stronger. Behind his back, he mentions a ghost, because the worries of the Void Monarch came true much faster than expected. Chuck turns around and tells someone that he is glad to meet. The Void Monarch looks at him in bewilderment. The man in glasses appears in front of him. Chuck recognizes him as the leader of the Ghost Wolf sect. He says that his name is Walter, and the system adds that he is a lycanthrope, the leader of the Ghost Wolf sect and also a reckless wolf. The guy is wary. Walter looks around and asks if all of them are dead. The leader notes that he raised them not so weak and asks who he is, because they have not met him before. Chuck prepares to attack and introduces himself. Walter asks again in surprise, because the name sounds familiar, and then remembers that he is the one they call the Spear Demon. The boy grits his teeth as he continues, which he finds odd, as he thought the Spear Demon was part of the Orthodox faction, but when he met him in person, he realizes he's more on their side. The leader adjusts his glove and says it doesn't matter. His hair emits smoke and he addresses the Spear Demon. His eyes light up and he asks how he wants to die. Chuck watches stunned. The Void Monarch calls for the reckless wolf to stop. Walter doesn't understand what just happened. The Void Monarch shows up and asks if they've outgrown their moment of bullying the weak. The wolf sect leader recognizes the spirit energy and the Void Monarch in front of him. Chuck waits as he confirms it's him and asks how many years have passed since they last met, if it's been 4 centuries. Walter chuckles and says he heard he died 400 years ago and asks where his body is and why he's possessed this boy. The demon sullenly replies that he has no idea what happened to his body, because it was probably destroyed. The leader of the wolf sect covers his face and laughs, because how could this happen to such a great monarch of emptiness, and notes that he has become even more pathetic than before. The white-haired one listens to him, who has also changed a lot, and specifically the question of what kind of fish eyes he has, because the reckless wolf used to constantly go crazy, like a dog without brakes, to which he received in response that now people call him Walter. The dog asks if he wants him to just let the guy go, to which he gives a positive answer. Walter is stunned by the answer. The monarch of emptiness angrily listens to him, who seems to have really done nothing for 400 years, otherwise he would not have believed that the monarch of emptiness is capable of saying such a thing, to which he replies that if he really wants to fight, then he can arrange it for him. Walter grins and refuses this alternative, explaining that he just happened to be nearby and did not lose that much from the death of a couple of his people. The leader of the wolf sect points to himself, and says that this time he will forgive him. Chuck angrily listens to the question of whether he is heading to the northern city, to which he answers yes. Walter turns around and says that in that case he should be more careful. The leader of the wolf sect looks madly and says that the others will not be as kind as he is. Chuck looks at that he disappeared. Ruby looks out while Chuck asks if he would lose if they fought, to which he gives a definitely positive answer. The monarch of the void remembers him with the words that his opponent is a monster who has honed his skills over the centuries and he is one of the strongest in humans, and he had absolutely no chance of winning, although he himself does not know of course what came over him when he created his own sect. Chuck smirks as he continues that he had to grovel and beg for mercy, stating that he was just a weak insect who needed to become stronger. Chuck thinks about Walter as the demon says that he can't stand the guy's self-confidence, and complains that he misses his original body. The guy thinks about the ghost, that he was the wolf sect leader, who once founded a small sect he had never even heard of, and even after reaching the peak of his martial arts, he still has so much to do. Chuck smiles, realizing that the world is truly vast. The guy walks towards the forest while the voiceover says that he no longer falls into despair hitting the wall, rather he was glad, because it meant that he still had a long way to go. Chuck takes a step and realizes the contradiction. He remembers Walter and his words that the others would not be as kind to him as he was and does not understand what he meant then. The guy frowns and wonders who these others are. Walter is standing in the shadows. He is wearing dark glasses. The leader of the wolf sect says that he met the monarch of the void on the way. He looks at the ball on a leg. Something materializes behind him. Something purple asks again about the monarch of the void and whether he is dead, to which he receives in response that it looks like he still lost his body, and only part of his soul remains. However, his spiritual strength is still great. Walter twirls his finger at his temple. He shows the monarch to the creature, who confirms that it is true and that he himself cannot believe that all 400 years ago he could have survived the enslavement squad, even though he lost his body. The creature asks who this guy is, to which he receives in response that it is a demon's spear and it looks like the Void Monarch has taken possession of it. The creature reasons about the demon's spear and asks Jeniella if this is the guy who killed her toy. The girl replies that it was not her favorite toy, but she is still very sorry that it was broken. She looks at him and says that now she knows what he looks like. Walter says that he is human, but he feels like he is closer to the Inhumans, and the Void Monarch was there, so he spared him. The girl listens that it looks like he is heading to the northern city, so he will watch him for now, to which she asks if he is coming to them. The creature asks her not to hurry, because the spiritual energy of the Void Monarch is not a joke to her, while she asks him not to worry through laughter. The leader of the wolf sect says that this is all for him and says goodbye to them. He looks at the creatures and says that if something serious happens, he hopes that they know that it should be reported to him, and calls them predators. The creature thinks about Chuck and is glad that he finally found him. He continues that he is a thief of hearts. Someone remembers that the man says that this document, it has a lot of important information about the northern city and inside a short description of the moves of the main troops with characteristics. Chuck looks at the sheets of paper. He sees the emblem of the predators. The voiceover says that he does not know when their alliance was founded, but it has definitely existed for at least several centuries. Against the background of the emblem of the predators, he continues that vampires, lycanthropes, liches and others are an organization that hires non-humans and their symbol is an inverted pentagram. Chuck reads that despite the fact that they almost never come out during the day, they are very powerful and sinister. The guy is stunned and says that especially the 5 leader of the wolf sect, also known as the 5 stars, it is simply impossible to guess how strong they are, because they are unimaginably dangerous. The monarch of the void reads while he speculates that maybe the predators are the others that Walter is talking about, to which he confirms his guess, because most likely it is, because they tried to hire him too, but he refused, because there was too much work to do. He remembers Walter and says that one of the 5 stars is that same reckless wolf. Chuck is shocked and wonders if there are really 4 more as strong as him. Chuck looks at the demon while he says that they have been living for many centuries and people cannot cope with them, and he was just lucky in the situation that arose with his dog. Chuck grits his teeth as he continues, what if he doesn't want to regret what he did when he needs the power the most? But Chuck interrupts him because he's starting the same old topic again. The Void Monarch listens in surprise to the question of whether he wants the guy to become a demon, and he reminds him that he feels like he's given up on this idea several times already and asks if he's going to never stop trying. The guy closes his eyes and continues that he already told him that one person he knew and respected had already gone down this path once. The guy looks at him and says that in order to honor his memory, he refuses to lose himself, to which he receives in response that he's already at a crossroads and he thinks his suffering is pointless. Against the backdrop of the night sky, the demon asks again about losing himself, because what's the point of being himself if he loses the chance to gain the power that he will need? Chuck frowns and the guy says that he is already tired of his stupid thoughts, to which the guy replies that he should shut up, because he can become strong enough without becoming a demon. Chuck sits on a stone and listens as the demon asks if this is true, because he hopes that when he realizes that the demon was right, it will not be too late, and fortunately this time the reckless wolf left without making a fuss, as usually happens. The monarch of the void remembers the man with the flask and sends off to the northern city. The girl looks at the corpses, while the demon says that there is a crazy woman there who especially likes guys like Chuck. She tells the guy that all those who were ready to do anything just to get a drop of his love when he was strong turned away from him the second he showed them his weakness. The guy discontentedly asks her to disappear, while she continues that she could not even imagine that he defeated them all with such a body and it impressed her. The girl looks down contentedly. She grabs his face and says she's sorry. She hits him with all her strength. The guy gets angry and says she's a vampire and should disappear. She reaches out to him and he replies that he won't be tempted by a vicious woman like her. The guy, horrified, says he's a bloody sky demon, but in fact he's the former ruler of Travich, a bloody demon. She grabs his wrist. The demon, horrified, asks why and why her heart trembles so much from seeing proud warriors. She licks the wounds on the back of his hand and calls for him to finally belong to her, while the system informs us that she's the Black Star of the Predators, the same vampire queen named Jeniella. She says he lost his left arm and that it will instantly grow back as soon as he becomes her servant. The demon listens in horror as she says that he too will gain the power to defeat the small sky demon that turned her into one before. The boy groans in horror. He clenches his teeth and says that he refuses. Jeniella looks at him in ecstasy. She looks at him and thinks that he is incredibly beautiful, despite the fact that he has a terrible loss to a girl much younger than him and the despair that fills him, and despite even the shattered honor and army that he so carefully built, he is still unwavering. He trembles as she continues that does he know, but every time she comes here, she receives a weaker rejection. The voiceover says that the bloody sky demon will soon surrender to her. He trembles and watches her go, for she is not happy about this. In the background, the voice continues that she has always been like this. As soon as she received a new toy, she immediately lost interest in it. She closes her eyes, and he says that this is when she starts looking for a new toy, and she has been entertaining herself like this for a very long time. She turns around and says that it looks like it's time to look for a new toy, to which the light one turns to her. She rolls her eyes. He says about Chuck, that a very strange person entered the city. Jenniella listens that it is absolutely human, but he feels some kind of inhuman energy from him, to which she agrees because Walter must have told her about him. She remembers with displeasure that this guy destroyed her toy, and at that moment she no longer liked it, but nevertheless. The blonde asked her earlier not to do anything rashly. She thinks about it. Her eyes lit up bright green and she says that it does not concern her, and offers to see what this spear demon looks like. A bald man dies sitting on the bare ground. People in cloaks are doing something. Chuck looks around warily. He looks away and says that it is good that they have finally arrived in the northern city, but asks what is wrong with the city, because there are only corpses walking around here, to which Ruby replies that she seemed to tell him that the place turned into complete chaos after the bloody sky demon was defeated. The guy looks at the pile of corpses and the explanation is not enough for him. The monarch of the void says that these are not just corpses. They look at the townspeople, and he continues that they are all non-humans, specifically lycanthropes and vampires, because there are so many of them. Chuck listens with displeasure that usually non-humans hide in the dark, but seeing that they are just walking around the streets, it really seems like something is wrong with this city. Ruby fearfully asks if he will be able to find something important here, because the monk told them to go north. Chuck looks at her and says that after all, there is someone important here. Jenniella appears behind him and says that he is talking about her. Chuck listens sullenly to the red-haired girl being glad to meet him and calling him a demon spear, then introduces himself. Jenniella? The hero looked at the bracelet which replied that this was the crazy manager in Travia he was talking about. Jenniella was standing with her back to the frenzied wolf and smiling maliciously. The bracelet said that frenzied wolf in berserk mode is impossible to stop, but he himself is quite calm, which cannot be said about Jenny. Chuck listened carefully to what the Soul Eater was saying, and he continued that since he showed frenzied wolf that his demonic power was safe and sound, he doubts that she would bother him now. A view of the village at night, and the bracelet advises that in any case the girl should be avoided. The hero held Janie in his arms. She looked at him with glowing eyes. He looked in horror and thought about what he said, and that she would not do anything now. Chuck asked Janie if she was Janie. She smiled and asked if he knew who she was. The guy raised his hand and answered positively. The girl asked if the Void Monarch told him. Janie, bending down, scared Ruby and smiled, and then said that she heard about him from Ju-1. Apparently everything he said was true. She bowed her head to the bracelet and said how low he had fallen, because he was once called the Nightmare of the South. The girl looked and seemed pleased when the bracelet responded, calling her a little girl, and that she had become too self-confident. The Soul Eater stood over Chuck and pointed his finger at her, saying that this wouldn't do, he needed to teach this slut a lesson, and that this was the only way she could learn some manners. The girl bent her arm at the elbow, laughed, and asked what was wrong. Her eye glowed magically, and she asked again if he would teach her a lesson. The Soul Eater smiled, looking at her, and said that her soul was completely separated from her body and that it was very strong, and it was thanks to her that he was able to maintain his existence, but that she was no longer in her prime. He leaned over her, smirking. Jenny looked up and asked if he was sure he wanted to try his luck with just a soul. His eyes turned red and he said that if she was so curious, then they should try. The girl, without looking away, looked into his eyes and asked why she would be curious about the obvious. Jenny raised her finger to her cheek and noticed the girl behind Chuck who was scared. She looked at her and noted that, calling her cat ears, she was not half human, but there was nothing human about her either, because her bones and organs did not function as they should and they were just for show. The girl, wide-eyed, watched Ruby and added that this was an organism that supported its existence with magic and a doll created to satisfy its owner. Ruby, closing herself off, felt uncomfortable and asked to stop. Jenny asked if she could even call herself a living being. The girl laughed and said that he scared her and apologized. Ruby hid behind Chuck's back. The guy looked at her carefully and the bracelet at that moment repeated that this is why it is difficult to deal with her. She has penetrating demonic vision, the eyes of one of the vampire queens. Jenny's face was calm, and her eyes continued to glow. The bracelet added that she was able to see through a person, including their essence, and that she only had to look into someone else's eyes. The guy tensed up after Jenny said that it was time to look at him too. Clouds floated across the night sky. The girl looked at him and thought. She grabbed his cheek and shook it. Jenny came close to his face and thought that it was strange why she could not see anything. The devourer, folding his arms, watched as the girl tried to count the guy, said that after all, he himself was strange and that her penetrating demonic vision would not work on him. She looked straight into his eyes, grabbing his head. The devourer asked her if it was not interesting. She answered him that yes, absolutely. Jenny abruptly pushed the hero aside. She bowed and said, asking for forgiveness, that it seemed she had shown herself from a not very pleasant side. A man suddenly appeared behind her and asked what was going on, since she was a woman and a killer. He only managed to say that she shouldn't talk to this weakling, but should talk to him, when his neck was twisted. Without turning her back to him, Jenny replied that she wasn't interested in him. Everyone standing around the heroes started to twist their heads. Chuck looked at what was happening in horror, his mouth open. She said that it was too dirty here. Jenny, shrouded in magic, looked at the hero and said that she would be brief. He looked at her dismissively and asked what she was talking about. Suddenly, he noticed the demonic blade. Jenny remembered how she killed the man and said that she took him several years ago, and that despite his despair, he was steadfast and did not give up. The girl, smiling sarcastically, tilted her head and noted that he was weak, but she liked him, and that she liked hard-working people. Chuck looked at her with a shudder and reasoned that this was how she was trying to make him pay for killing that man. The girl laughed and answered that no, but admitted that of course she thought about it at first. The guy looked at her attentively and listened to her about how all toys break over time, and would not blame him for this. The main character's hand tensed, and he asked what she meant. The girl answered that everything was simple. Jenny jumped up to Chuck and asked him if he would like to become a vampire. The girl looked into his eyes in anticipation and said that the demonic blade became only a low-ranking vampire because he drank diluted blood, but she would make him her first servant. She continued to say that she had never offered this to anyone and would surround him with great love. Chuck looked at her with disgust and refused. She smiled, showing her fangs. Jenny pointed her finger at him and said that there was nothing she could do then. The girl smirked and said that what she had now was enough and thought that she would be disappointed if he agreed to her offer so quickly. He looked at her questioningly, and she thought about the fact that she could not see him with her vision, but his eyes had seen such difficult times that a normal person would not stand. She tried to look closely at his eye and thought that if he had been through so much, his irises should be clearly round, and wondered why his eyes looked like they would break at any second. She smiled at the hero. The girl turned and said that she was leaving. She continued to think that she would see the demon's spear again. Chuck stood, covering Ruby with himself, was angry, thought about not giving up so easily. He looked at her questioningly, and asked what had just happened. The bracelet replied that she was now too interested in him, and that she was such a pervert. The devourer bowed his head to him, and said that she was ruthless. Jenny would offer him her terms again when he was pathetic and wretched. The blood from the dead man rushed to his shoes. Chuck looked away and asked him how strong she was. The Soul Eater replied that she was the second strongest of all those he had ever met. The guy turned to him and asked who was first. The monster smiled in response. The hero immediately understood who. The bird watched from the side at the heroes, who were actively discussing something. The devourer said that this is why he should become a demon. Chuck objected that all monsters have such a quirk to try to turn others into their own kind. The bird watched intently. Something was visible in her red eyes. It was said that he had finally found it. In the magic ball, the silhouettes of the heroes that the bird was looking at were visible. He said that the hero had entered the city. The lich looked at the sitting Amanda and said that he was counting on her. The girl humbly looked into his eyes. 3 men stand in front of a man whose vision has become clouded. It seems he was wounded. In a fit of struggle, the man with the sword strikes. Someone's silhouette appeared in the flaring energy ball. The man, who is in horror, is attacked by a man with a sword. He screams so loudly that drool, snot and tears fly in different directions. Stan, with his head down, was kneeling in front of someone's body. He clenched his teeth in anger. He looked at his hand in blood and asked how long he had been out. Stan looked at the wall, or the fence, and thought, scrolling through his head, Snow City, is this Travia? Steam came out of the man's mouth, and he wondered why he had gone all the way to the north. A little to the side he saw 2 heroes fighting. Chuck with a spear was confronting Amanda. Stan saw and thought in confusion that it was the tentacle girl and the spearman. He continued to watch this fight from the side. The man smiled and laughed. The city was shrouded in darkness, and the plot spoke about the events a few days after the meeting with Janie. The young man in the hood suddenly noticed someone. Chuck and Ruby ran into a familiar face. Mike. The hero cried out when he saw a familiar face. Mike took off his hood and said that it seemed like they often unexpectedly met. He continued to say that this was their first meeting after they killed the sword demon in Dreimer. Chuck looked at him and apologized for disappearing. The heroes walked along a dark street. Ruby was hiding behind the guy. Mike replied that he probably had reasons for this. Chuck asked what he was doing there. The young man, after thinking for a while, said, asking that he was enjoying the views. The protagonist drew attention to the dead man by the wall, and noted that it seemed that there really was something to see in Travia. Mike laughed and noted that such views were sometimes really interesting. He asked if Chuck had heard of predators. The guy looked at him in surprise. The young man looked away and added that judging by the reaction he knew, stating that they were non-humans. A magical pentagram was in the air. Mike continued that the monsters that ate people were in the human world itself, and they had begun to act. Jenny stood with her back to the crazy wolf with a monstrous smile, and the young man said that some of them were the strongest in the territory, and that they had the power to wipe the Bloody Heaven Alliance off the face of the earth at any moment. Mike raised his finger and said that these people were going to Travia, and even though they had previously allowed the Bloody Heavenly Demon to rule here while hiding behind the scenes. Chuck looked at him in amazement and listened to how many demonic creatures had settled here when the Bloody Heavenly Demon was defeated, and they had declared their desire to disrupt the order and that the predators would soon achieve the ideal they had been striving for. Wolf and Jane looked away. The young man thought about what they were trying to achieve. Those monsters at the top had been hidden for centuries. Chuck looked through Mike, gritting his teeth, and the young man continued that perhaps a new story would begin in this place. Mike laughed mockingly and said that he would like to see what would happen too. Chuck and Ruby were leaving the city, and the bracelet said that perhaps he should have accepted his invitation, because he could have been that very important person. The hero remembered the dialogue with Mike, where the young man offered that if he had nowhere to stay, he could spend the night at his place, but he politely declined. The hero said that he just felt uneasy. Ruby was upset, and Chuck explained that he felt like he would be dismembered while he followed the prophecy and looked for the important person. The bracelet replied that everything was clear to him. Ruby bowed her head in sadness and asked if that was why they came back. The guy looked at her and said soothingly that after all, no one said that this important person would be in the city. Chuck turned back towards the city and said that the city was much more dangerous than he heard. Ruby sighed sadly and said that she wanted to go swimming. He replied that they would walk a little more, and if they did not find anything, they would come back. Suddenly, the guy turned around, sensing danger. He pulled out his spear and blocked the blow from behind. Ruby watched questioningly as pieces of tentacles flew apart and blood splashed. The guy smiled in anticipation of the fight and said that not much time had passed since their arrival, and they were already in trouble. In front of him was that girl with tentacles instead of hands. He cried out her name. It was Amanda. The girl said his name, Chuck, smiling. The guy aimed his spear, prepared for battle, and hurried her. Amanda spread her arms out and was enveloped in pink magic. She said she could do that too. He watched it and thought about endless mana and regeneration, unpredictable tentacle attacks, and the energy became even stronger. He looked at Amanda and the Devourer called him, calling him kid. Chuck told him no, don't even start. The hero is surrounded by a bright light, and he says he will do it himself. They screamed before attacking each other. Stan said they were having fun here. He attacked them, clenching his hands into fists, saying that he should be allowed to join. Chuck was lying in a pile of earth and thinking about who this guy was and that he just came and knocked him and Amanda down. Blood was dripping from the man's fist. He looked, stretching a smile, madly said that he was the reckless demon of the bloody skies. Stan. Nigel points his finger and says that if he meets a light heavenly demon, he must run away immediately. 3 demons stood before his eyes. They talked about the blood heavenly demon, the lesser heavenly demon, and the light heavenly demon. 3 heavenly demons rule in Erie. Nigel stood in front of Chuck and Scarlet and said that he believed that among them, only one was a real heavenly demon, the light heavenly demon. Chuck, with a bump on his head, asked why. The man answered that there were many reasons for that, but the main one was that he was very strong. Stan stood there looking at the heroes insanely and terrifyingly. Amanda, clenching her teeth, tried to get up from the ground in pain. Chuck thoughtfully looked up at him and wondered what this giant light heavenly demon was doing here. Stan glanced around and sarcastically asked where all the fierce aura had gone and hurried his rivals. He spread his arms out to the sides and looked up, yelling at him to play with him. Amanda was sitting on her hands, leaning on them, watching angrily. She stood up abruptly and yelled that this wouldn't do. The girl spread her arms out furiously, ready to attack, saying that this wasn't fun and that he had ruined everything. Stan turned around and let out a joyful cry. Oh! She ran at him, attacking, and he, ready, exclaimed that this was wonderful. Stan stretched his arms forward and tried to stop Amanda. Large fiery hands flew towards the chimera. She looked at it all in surprise. The Lich watched the scene and was stunned. The girl, flying at him with frightened eyes and saying that if the body was destroyed, even she would not be able to recover, a dangerous attack. She spun around after trying to turn around. She ran away from him to the side. Stan caught up with her, and there was a big explosion. Amanda felt helpless with horror on her face. Chuck screamed, enveloped in a bright light. A powerful fireball illuminated the night city. The demon was satisfied, looking at his flaming hands. He watched with a smile at the defeated Amanda. She, bleeding, lay without limbs. They were scattered around. She was alive and raising her head said that she would kill him. The Lich held the ball in his hands and addressed the chimera, that it was impossible, because if this old man was her only enemy, she could use the hidden power to fight back. But the Thief of Hearts was there too. She was offended and clenched her fist, heard that she should not be stubborn, but should run. She rose on new limbs, trying to turn around. Stan watched her trying to leave and cried out questioningly that she could regenerate. Amanda soared into the air, trying to leave, but the demon shouted that they would continue the game. He silently watched as she flew further into the night sky. Stan, having calmed down, turned his gaze to Chuck and said that okay, then he would play with him. The hero, scared, cried out. The demon looked fixedly at the enemy and thought that initially he forgot about dignity and started a fight because of this guy. Chuck held a spear in his hand and thought about such a strange feeling. He definitely saw it for the first time, but when he saw it, there was a strange pounding in his chest. The bracelet turned to the main hero, saying that something was wrong with this guy and he needed to be interrogated, so he did not need to be killed, but caught alive. Stan stood and watched patiently. Chuck reasoned that the devourer was wrong, that he was not even sure whether he could defeat him at all. The bracelet said that if he was angry, it was better to move away. Stan asked the guy what this place was. Chuck lowered his head and answered that it was Travia. The demon scratched his chin and thought, so he really is in Travia. That loss of control and mass murder from the madness of the light demon is nothing new, but he first went this far. Stan raised his hands in front of himself and continued to reason that he was out for months and ran to the very northern edge. He stood and, waving his hands, wondered what he was. Chuck watched what was happening questioningly. The bracelet noted that he seemed to be thinking. The demon closed his eyes and, lowering his head, froze. He opened his eyes and said, "What is the use of these thoughts?" The hero watched him questioningly. Stan prepared for battle and exclaimed that who knows when he will come to his senses again, so he needs to take advantage of the moment of clarity. The guy was scared and screamed. He asked him to stop and asked why he was fighting. There were no reasons. Stan, with a merciless look, said that this was a stupid question. His rage grew and he explained that when warriors meet, they don't need a reason to fight. The demon jumped to attack, and Chuck, spear ready, waited for him. The guy looked at what was happening in horror. Stan extended a fiery palm, attacking the enemy. The hero glowed with pink magic and prepared himself. Chuck spun the spear around its axis. He furiously pressed the handle of the weapon to himself. The fiery palm hit the hero and he thought that he could not reflect the blow by spinning, because this attack was too powerful. The demon's face looked crazy. Chuck reasoned that he was incredibly stronger than the double of Ouija. The bracelet was fascinated by this energy. Stan looked at the enemy questioningly. An explosion of light flew apart. The hero stopped the demon with his spear. A crater formed around the warriors, which spread like smoke. Stan clenched his teeth and noted that such dense energy for his age, and that then great, he would prolong the pleasure. Chuck looked sternly at the enemy and thought that this was unimaginable nonsense, and that he needed to find a loophole and escape. The devourer screamed no. The demon raised his palm and looked at the hero from above. Chuck asked the devourer again, and he replied that he couldn't escape, he needed to take him. The guy clenched his teeth, raising his spear. The bracelet spoke of his power, and that this bastard was using his energy. Stan, getting ready, glowed with red magic. Stan, with a smirk on his face, declared that Chuck couldn't escape, and then ordered to capture him. The dumbfounded protagonist thought that this was his power. Looking at the man, shrouded in a red aura, the protagonist came to the conclusion that this fool was using his power. Holding the spear in front of him, Chuck also asked if he was using the energy of the Void Monarch. The protagonist dodged a powerful attack from the light demon. He jumped back and noted that this was not the case. Chuck thought with a serious look that he couldn't get distracted in battle, he needed to eliminate the threat first. Stan's eyes were glowing brightly with red light. The protagonist imbued the spear with pink mana, using the 9 Heavens Infinity Spear, the 5th technique. The deadly flash was directed at the light demon with great speed. The man's hand began to emit a glow. He put out his hand to reflect the attack. There was a smirk on his face. Stan caught the tip of the protagonist's spear. Chuck was shocked by what happened. The man threw him aside. The enraged protagonist reasoned that in the battle against Amanda, he was confident in his victory. Looking at Stan, who was flying towards him, Chuck thought that in the battle against this guy, he had no chance. Examining the face of the light demon, the protagonist emphasized that he had definitely reached the godly level. The protagonist's eyes began to glow, and he wondered what it even mattered. Chuck sent streams of energy at him and thought that every time he encountered something like this, he moved forward step by step. Enraged Stan screamed about the mixed technique. He had a smirk on his face. The protagonist appeared behind him and swung his spear. He aimed at the man's back. Chuck's face was enraged. Mana began to spread from the man. A bright red light enveloped the area around him. The protagonist crashed into the ground from a powerful blow. He noted with a dumbfounded look that as soon as he disappeared from sight, he unleashed his energy, destroying everything around him, this monster. Looking at the sky, Chuck emphasized the fact that if he had not stopped the blow that was chasing the soul and did not cover himself with protective energy, if not for his orichalcum armor, he would have definitely died. Stan swung his hand. He was flying at Chuck. Grinning, The light demon screamed that the protagonist looked 20, and his internal energy was almost the same as his. A powerful explosion was heard. Stan was flying above him. He asked with a satisfied look if the protagonist had become younger or if he was the lesser heavenly demon. Chuck smirked and said that both assumptions were wrong. The man said with a satisfied look that he didn't care who the protagonist was. Stan stomped his foot on the ground with destructive force. He swung his arm. The man threw rocks covered in mana at him and shouted that he wanted to enjoy the fight even more. Chuck, dumbfounded, thought that the energy could be used like that. Burning rocks were thrown at him. The protagonist presented the yellow mark and emphasized that he had spent 2,100 years honing his martial arts skills. Being in the void, he could stop at any time. Chuck asked with a serious look why he didn't do that. He introduced his comrades and asked if he wanted to give up, if he wanted to remain weak, or if he didn't want to hate himself. The protagonist's eyes began to glow brightly and he came to the conclusion that it was because he had fallen in love with martial arts. The protagonist rushed into battle. Stan watched him, puzzled. Chuck was flying at him at great speed. His face was furious. The man's face was insane. He began to reflect the protagonist's attacks. They looked into each other's eyes. Stan suddenly unclenched his fists. Looking at the protagonist's face, the man wondered if he was getting stronger and faster with each counterattack, and if this was an epiphany. Dodging the blows, Stan came to the conclusion that this was not the case. Chuck was simply getting stronger. The demon stood behind the protagonist and talked about 2,100 years. He watched the fight and reasoned that this brat was not evolving. He was simply following the path he had once trodden, the path of 2,100 years of training that he had lost when he returned to reality. The demon presented the image of the protagonist and stated that the power he could not use due to the broken balance was now pouring out of him. Blood flowed from the lips of the protagonist while he said that this was not so. He remembered how he fought with a spear and said that everything should be different, then he was much stronger. Stunned, Stan thought that he was repulsed. If he had initially fought seriously, this would not have happened. He had a choice. He would have to give it his all. His eyes began to glow even brighter. Chuck noticed a cloud of energy in the man's body. Stunned Stan noted that he had a gap in his defense. The protagonist's face was serious. He took a step forward. The protagonist hit the man in an unprotected part of the body. The light demon opened his mouth in surprise and thought that this was a dangerous blow. Chuck's gaze was bloodthirsty. The man flew to the side. He stretched out his fists, surrounded by a stream of energy. He sent a powerful stream of mana at the enemy. The furious protagonist watched this. A vortex of energy flew at him. A cloud of dust rose. Stan was furious. Standing in front of a huge piece of land, the man said that he had killed such a promising one. Looking at the crater, the light demon noted that if he had 10 more years, he would have been much stronger. He got carried away, lost his vigilance, and did not hold back. Stan said with a serious look that the aftertaste of this victory was bitter. There was probably nothing left of him there. But if something did remain, it was worth honoring him. The man saw the outline of a man through a veil of smoke. A spear pierced his chest. The protagonist grabbed him by the throat. He was shocked by what happened. Smiling, Chuck said that he certainly fought much better than he expected. Veins appeared on Stan's face. A demon appeared behind the protagonist, who said that he had many questions for him, after which he called Stan a thief of spiritual energy. The protagonist smirked and asked where he got it from. The man was shocked. He gritted his teeth and wondered what kind of power it was, noting that he couldn't release it. The protagonist lifted him off the ground and asked if he would answer. The protagonist's eye began to glow, and he stated that Stan could remain silent. A pink aura began to hover around him. The light demon began to scream as he felt intense pain inside his body. Chuck was suddenly taken aback. He saw a cloud of energy in the man's lower abdomen and thought that his spiritual energy was already deep in his core. A human shouldn't be able to control such power. The protagonist continued to hold him by the throat. Chuck began to strangle himself. A demon appeared behind him. The enraged protagonist asked for his body to be returned to him. The Void Monarch thought with an enraged face that he certainly knew that the protagonist had a strong will, but he was trying to regain control of his body. The demon stood in front of him, confused, and said that it wasn't trying to take over his body. The thing is. Chuck lowered his head and began to try to catch his breath. Looking at his hand, the protagonist apologized to the Void Monarch. He turned his attention to Stan, who was lying on the ground, and called the monarch a reckless demon. The protagonist imagined the man delivering his most powerful attack and thought that he had managed to fight off the last attack to some extent. If the Void Monarch hadn't intervened, he would have died. Confused, Chuck pointed his finger at the demon and said that was different. The protagonist's face suddenly became serious. Taking the spear in his hand, the protagonist thought that if only he could use the power he had been accumulating for all these 2,100 years of training, he would have withstood the last attack and won. Looking at the demon, the protagonist added that he couldn't, and the Void Monarch had to help him. His body still couldn't keep up with the training. Chuck closed his eyes. Kyle pointed a finger at Stan and assumed that he was his patron. The demon, with a displeased look, reported that he felt his spiritual energy deep in his energy core. Kyle imagined how an aura surrounded Stan, and he told him that the man freely used it, just like his inner one. The puzzled protagonist listened to Kyle, who said that there were some side effects, such as being absorbed by madness, but if he learned his method, he would be able to use spiritual energy while remaining sane. Looking at the dark sky, the man began to talk about the south. With a serious look, he said that he wandered and gradually reached a tribe in the south. Stan introduced the warriors and said that they were strange, did not know anything about martial arts and did not know how to use their own bodies, but their strength could be compared with the masters of the 9 great schools. Stan imagined himself approaching the warrior and telling him that he felt that such a gift should not be wasted, and taught them a method of martial arts training, and in return their tribe taught him breathing techniques and gifted him with fire elixirs. Sitting opposite, Stan noted that he had been in a period of stagnation at the time, but thanks to this he had made great progress. Then he encountered another problem. The man imagined how he had gone mad and said that in the end he had fallen into deviation and suffered from madness. He had gone crazy and wandered the world, turning into a monster, killing everything in his path. Smiling, the light demon said that now he had regained his mind, but did not know when he would go mad again. Kyle pointed his finger at Chuck with a grin. Looking at him, the protagonist turned to him. The protagonist with a serious look said that he would cure him of madness. Dumbfounded Stan clarified whether it was possible. Raising his finger, the protagonist said that his case was not a common deviation, but the result of a force called spiritual energy. The man took the protagonist by the shoulders, who said that with some shamanic rituals they could suppress the madness in him. Smiling, Stan asked if Chuck really wanted to say that he could finally get rid of this nightmare. The protagonist answered with a serious face that it was true, but the path would not be easy. He closed his eyes. Sitting in front of Stan, the protagonist began to remember their fight. The sky was dark. The man's face became joyful after the protagonist said that he should completely trust him, and cried out that he would do anything. Chuck slapped him and noted that he needed to be whipped well. Smiling, Kyle said that in the south there was a tribe that worshipped him. This guy somehow contacted their descendants. Annoyed, Chuck asked again if they worshipped him. Looking at Stan's serious face, the demon said that it was good. If the protagonist learned the breathing technique that the guy would master, he would also be able to use spiritual power. Kyle hung over them and said that the protagonist should not rush. The man's madness was the result of frantic spiritual energy wandering after losing its host, and as long as he was nearby, he would not suffer from side effects. Kyle imagined how they were located on the map, and said that the big guy's madness would also disappear if he was near him. Chuck's face was puzzled by the demon's words that he should use this and say that he would cure his madness in exchange for the technique. The protagonist slapped him. The beaten man said that he could not teach the protagonist the breathing technique. Kyle stood behind and said that they would have to torture him. Looking at the protagonist, Stan emphasized that he would not teach him not because he did not want to teach him, but because he swore to them through a pact sealed with words. Frowning, the demon said that this is the power used by shamans. When someone seals their promise with the right words, it is simply impossible not to fulfill their promise. Kyle imagined the corpse of a man and added that this is somewhat similar to the mage's oath of mana. If someone breaks the rules of the pact, he dies, and to some extent this is even in their favor. Chuck should ask him to lead them to the southern tribe. The puzzled protagonist mentally asked if the demon wanted to say that they would need to go south from the very north. Looking at Stan, Kyle said that if they cannot extract information from him themselves, it is easier to just go to the southern tribe and ask them. It turns out perfect. Chuck looked at him and asked what was ideal about dragging himself all over area, after which the demon asked if he remembered what Kyle had told him the first time they met. The protagonist remembered looking at the bracelet that screamed that he was a powerful yokai, had ruled for centuries and had collected countless treasures. His treasure dungeon was full of rare items he had never even heard of. Holding his chin, Chuck listened attentively to his treasury being in the south, after which the demon suggested that they stop by to pick something up since they were on the way. The protagonist continued to beat the man. Stan pointed at his beaten face and asked how it could help cure madness. The protagonist stared at him. He opened his mouth wide and said that the scheme was similar to forced interrogation and bloody martial arts techniques. Madness is cleansed by saturating with shamanic energy. Frowning, Chuck thought that Stan was more obedient than he expected. He thought that the man would attack on his own after a few blows. Turning around, the protagonist listened to Kyle's words, that as long as he had the spiritual power of a demon, the connection between him and this club was like the connection between a vampire and his lineage. A child cannot defeat its parent, so he will instinctively obey him. Frowning, Stan wondered why he felt like he couldn't go against the protagonist. He remembered how the protagonist turned into a demon, and wondered if it was because of that form, noting that the crushing energy and deathly frightening aura made him stagger. He looked at Chuck's back and reasoned that everything was different then, as if a completely different person was standing in front of him. A bead of sweat ran down his face while he thought that his mind was truly clear, and for now he had no choice but to follow him. Stan approached the protagonist and asked if they would head south right away, to which he replied that they would return to Travia first. He was too tired for another sortie. His face was calm. The man was surprised by the question of which of the strongest in the world he was. Smiling, the light demon said that at Chuck's age, with such fighting skills, his interest in the strongest was quite natural. He put his hand on his hip. The protagonist was surprised. The man showed a huge ball on his back and told that 10 years ago, one of the 6 masters of the Heavens Beyond Heaven organization, a sword master, left him this scar. Looking back, Stan said that people have been learning martial arts for only a couple of decades, after which he asked what if creatures who live for hundreds and thousands of years have been honing their fighting skills all this time. Chuck was surprised by the question. What if they were born with an innate talent for fighting? What will these creatures become? Stan said with a serious expression that this scar was the answer to the question. Even if he met a sword master, he was not sure that he could withstand even a couple of techniques. Frowning, the protagonist listened that sooner or later he would meet him too. They are always looking for new powerful warriors to test. While the man put his cape back on, the protagonist wondered if even the monstrously strong reckless demon of the bloody skies was far from the top of the strongest, noting that this world was scary. Chuck raised his gaze. He was looking at the sky. Looking at the clouds, the protagonist clarified how high she had already risen. The sky turned red. The guy put the cup on the table and said that the tea had cooled down. Touching the cup, he clarified whether this was worth such deep reasoning. Looking at the ceiling, Chloe asked about reasoning. Looking away, she replied that she did not think much about it. In general, she did not care. She sat opposite the guy and asked what the organization was called, to which she received the answer that its name was Heaven Beyond Heaven. Putting his hat on the table, the elf said that he would repeat. He was a master of martial arts, the weakest of the 6 main ones in the heavens beyond heaven, the lesser heavenly demon Rick. He invited her to the heavens beyond heaven. Holding her hand near her face, Chloe listened that she had become one of the strongest on the surface, so she should understand how lonely it was at the top. Rick with a serious face said that if the girl joined them, she would forget about loneliness, she would understand that there were others behind these heavens. He frowned at the words that this was a stupid reason for creating an organization. Stretching out her hand, Chloe said that if she was lonely, then she should join a hobby group. She was not going to get close to a bunch of guys who decided to get together because of some nonsense. Smiling, Chloe emphasized the fact that she has never been lonely and already has a loved one. The girl turned away and closed her eyes. Rick, surrounded by a powerful aura, suggested that she needed to be taught a lesson before he let her into the organization as a low-ranking person. Chloe smiled and asked about the low-ranking person again. Red energy surrounded her, and she stated that he was the one who was being disrespectful. Stan looked back and said that since they had reached Travia, he wanted to meet his friend. The man winced at the question of whether he was going to run away, after which he loudly asked where else he could go, because if Chuck didn't punch him in the face, he would go crazy again. He turned his attention to the lying corpse. It stood quietly and noted that one stupid kid just lived there. The protagonist's face was calm. Standing in front of the man, he asked him to come to this same place when he was done. The night sky enveloped the fortress. The protagonist stood next to Ruby. Turning around, Chuck asked how long they would stare at him. The bird landed in front of them. He stared at it. A skull appeared behind the bird and asked why the protagonist was so confident, adding that he had spent his entire life creating a heart that was eventually stolen. Annoyed, Chuck asked if the bird wanted him to rip it out and give it to her, noting that a black magician who locked himself in a dungeon and experimented on people would probably have something to say. Pointing at his heart, Chuck asked what was so special about this heart that she couldn't live without it. The angry bird replied that she wouldn't tell him anything. She was taken aback by the question of whether this was Lloyd, the head of the magicians of the Golden Tower. The protagonist introduced Lloyd and emphasized the fact that he had saved his life not long ago. He would grant his every wish. Chuck, furious, said that since a certain lich kept bothering him, which scared him, he was thinking of asking to exterminate it. Frowning, the protagonist added that he was only worried that it was too cruel. The bird was scared by the question of whether a pathetic lich could withstand the power of the Golden Tower. Judging by the fact that he was silent, he was probably confident in his own strength. The bird shuddered and loudly asked Chuck to stop, noting that he had researched predation and evolution with the Black Heart. Ruby and the protagonist exchanged glances. The lich was flying behind the bird and thought that even if he was threatened by the Golden Tower, he should be safe in Travia, but if he contacted Lloyd, he might find out about the heart. The lich introduced the man and emphasized the fact that if they found out about the heart inside this crazy thief, no matter whose body it was, they would try to destroy it. He could not allow that. The bird began to talk about the Black Heart with a serious look. She imagined a girl licking blood from her fingers and told that the heart absorbs the hearts of other creatures, absorbs their strength and knowledge. An image of Amanda appeared in the protagonist's imagination. He listened attentively to the bird, which was controlled by the Lich, that through him the heart continues to develop, become stronger, more powerful. An image of Amanda appeared in the Lich's imagination, and he told that his beloved daughter, her body was grown around the heart, so all potential is available to her, but not to him. In his case, the heart was transplanted into a human body. Holding his chin, the protagonist asked if he could grow tentacles like Amanda. He frowned and asked what the Lich wanted to do with his heart. The Lich in the body of the bird sat in front of them and began to laugh. The monster with glowing eyes said that he wanted to achieve the highest form of life. Standing in front of Chuck, the Lich said that he did not know what the highest form of life was, because it was the highest because it had not yet been achieved by anyone. He imagined the image of a monster and noted that, however, with a black heart, he would probably succeed. It was a form of life that was better than any other. Chuck swung his foot at the bird. He crushed the bird. Streams of purple energy rose from his foot, after which the protagonist thought that this was not the most detailed answer, but now he at least had an idea of what was inside him. Looking at the dissipating mana, the protagonist came to the conclusion that judging by what he heard, it did not harm it much. He presented 2 pills and noted that when he absorbed them, the fact that they were absorbed must have something to do with the heart. Stan stood behind him and called out to the guy. Turning around, Chuck asked if the man had returned yet, noting that it was about time. Bill was standing next to him. Looking at the guy's angry face, the protagonist asked who he was. There was a vase on the ground. The man crossed his arms and turned to Bill. He frowned and said that by the look of it, he had been abusing drugs and alcohol again, and then asked how it was that Bill was in a worse condition than him, considering that he was insane. Smiling, Bill asked if Stan had decided to give a lecture after 10 years since their last meeting. Sitting against the wall, the guy said that he had become disillusioned with his talent and accepted reality. He had encountered a wall that he would never be able to overcome, so there was no point in trying. Looking at Bill, the man asked if he had lost to the little sky demon Chloe. He was a pathetic idiot who had given up after one defeat. Enraged, Stan cried out that there were many warriors in history who had become great, having only one arm. Bill smirked and suggested that it wasn't for him. He knew that from his own experience. Furious, Stan remembered how they met many years ago. Bill, with a smirk on his face, told him that there was a time when he believed that he had a chance to become the strongest in the world. Among his peers, he was the strongest. He imagined Chloe beating him and said that if it was just a loss, he would accept it, but the talent and strength of a small sky demon was absurdly unfair. The man listened with a serious expression that they started from different places. No matter how much he suffered, he would never defeat someone like her. Bill, with an evil smile on his face, said that the guy who poked everyone that he was just a genius, lost to a 22-year-old girl. Stan will understand what he means when he meets her. Furious, the man screamed that he was a fool. The light demon showed his scar on his back and said that he had already experienced the difference in strength and skills 10 years ago, but he did not give up. Stan approached him and said that no matter how high the wall was, he could lose his mind, but he would never give up when it came to progress. Standing in front of a huge mountain, a warrior is grateful for the test provided. This is the way of a martial artist. There is nothing in the fact that Bill lost to the girl, because today he almost died in the arms of a 23-year-old brat. Dumbfounded, Bill asked again. Veins appeared on Stan's face from anger when he said that he was not lying and could go right now and prove it. Sweat was running down his face. The man stood in front of Chuck and noted that this is how it turned out. The protagonist looked at the angry guy with a stone face. He frowned. Enraged, Bill said that this was just ridiculous. He looked at Stan and clarified if he had deceived him. Looking at the protagonist, Bill wondered if the man had said that the protagonist was a genius who could match the strength of a small sky demon. He might be strong, but he definitely couldn't beat him. Annoyed, Chuck looked at Stan and asked why Bill was acting like that. The man closed his eyes. The puzzled protagonist listened as Stan brought the bloody sky demon there because he wanted him to fight him. The man imagined Bill losing the fight to the girl and told him that after he lost his arm in the fight with the small sky demon, Bill fell into deep despair, consumed by his own sense of inferiority. The enraged guy listened as Stan wanted him to beat him again, beat him so hard that he would finally wake up. The man was taken aback by Chuck's questions as to whether he thought such a violent method would work and why he would fulfill such a request. The protagonist gritted his teeth when he heard that Stan would teach him his martial art technique, the demonic art of the blood ghost, after which he thought that even if he learned another technique, his body would not be able to withstand it, so he did not need it. Bill walked up to him. Looking into his eyes, the guy asked why the protagonist was staring into space, standing in front of a person, and should show at least a little respect. Looking at the protagonist, Bill emphasized the fact that Chuck was so confident in himself, but with such a level at his age, it was not surprising. He added with a crazy look that when the protagonist met a real monster, he would know true despair. A smile appeared on Chuck's face. Standing in front of him, Bill assumed that the protagonist was laughing because he did not understand yet, noting that he was once like that too. The protagonist, with a satisfied look, thought that these were his words. The protagonist remembered how Chloe trained him and added that Bill was making so much noise only because he lost once. It was really unpleasant to watch from the outside. Chloe was really a saint if she tolerated it. The man suddenly turned around when the protagonist said that he would give him a gift. Chuck said with a serious look he could not watch this anymore and asked Bill to start attacking. Clouds floated across the night sky. The villagers turned their attention to the guys and asked if this was a bloody sky demon. Chuck held a spear in front of him. Red mana swirled under Bill's feet. Bloody fog surrounded him. Looking at the protagonist, the guy thought that even if he lost his arm, even if he despaired, he would never lose to a brat who was not even comparable in strength to the little sky demon. Enraged, Bill said that he would finish him off. He rushed into battle. The guy repelled the protagonist's attack. Watching him, Bill thought that the protagonist was fast, but that was all. Frowning, Chuck wondered if he was using chi power techniques like a reckless demon of the sky, noting that his technique was not enough to break through the chi. He ran towards the enemy. The confused warrior wondered how Chuck moved his legs like that. Energy surrounded the protagonist, while Bill thought that he should not know any chi techniques, but his steps alone directed the energy. The protagonist imagined Brittany, who said that he needed to kill the enemy in 2 steps. His leg was enveloped in pink energy when he used the third technique. The soul split without a trace. Gusts of mana flew at Bill. Covering himself from the attacks, the guy clarified whether he charged the chi energy with his legs alone. He was shocked by what happened. Bill suddenly frowned. Chuck swung his spear. He watched the protagonist, who was preparing for the next attack. Suddenly, there was a bright flash. Bill frowned, thinking about his left hand. The guy was taken aback when the protagonist appeared behind him. The onlookers were shocked. Stan closed his eyes. The protagonist held a spear in front of Bill's throat. He stated with a serious expression that he had won. Bill was furious when Chuck asked if he was now equal in strength to the little sky demon. The protagonist looked at the guy, who asked how he could compare himself, a poor worm, to a dragon, after which the protagonist said that it means that Bill is worse than a worm. Looking at the dumbfounded guy, Chuck stated that his internal energy and technique are simply disgusting. He is not used to fighting with one hand at all. The guy gritted his teeth in rage when the protagonist said that if he had continued to train after losing, the result would have been completely different. He was just wasting all these years. The protagonist hit his spear. Leaving there, Chuck came to the conclusion that Bill should make his own decision. Frowning, Stan listened to the guy himself understand how huge the world is and how much could happen in 3 years. This time he needs to overcome his despair on his own. Looking at the guy, the main character said that he believes in him. He is a warrior who can get back on his feet. Turning around, the protagonist emphasized that he himself had been in despair many times and it does not always lead to a good outcome. The night sky enveloped the fortress. Bill was lying on the ground. He was breathing quietly. Jenny was walking towards the guy who asked to turn him into a vampire. We see a luxurious hall. Looking at the doors, the girl said that she had seen many dark magicians. She held out a glass, saying that no one was as unique as he was. Smiling, Mike replied that she flattered him. It was just a lucky series of coincidences. Jenny smirked and told him that when her master, the Demon King, disappeared, she was summoned to this world, and that was how she escaped such a close death. Raising her glass, the queen asked him if he liked the drink, adding that it was blood wine squeezed from 10 people. The girl laughed and asked if this was how he proved that he no longer had humanity. Smiling, the guy said that he didn't have to try hard or do anything ostentatious for it to be noticeable. The interlocutor raised her glass. She stood in front of him and answered that it was true. She usually didn't get along so well with people. Mike bowed when he said that he was the second most insane person she had ever met, and said that he was not at all. Jenny pointed at the man. The queen watched as he held out the box, saying that it was a black star, proof of membership in the Predators, and gave it to him. Looking at the star, she said that welcome to the world beyond humanity. The girl watched as the boy threw his hand behind his head and said that he was a dark mage, rejected by humanity, but wearing its appearance. The queen looked calmly, hearing her call. The servant bowed and said that a person dear to her would soon leave Travia. Turning around, Jenny asked if he heard. She stood in front of the formidable man, informing him that the one who humiliated him was leaving here. The monster's eye was filled with blood. The girl smiled. Looking back, the queen said that she would allow him to fulfill his will. Jenny looked up and said that he should just not dare to kill him. The man smiled furiously and replied that he was grateful to Her Majesty. Mike drank wine in front of her. With his eyes closed, he listened to her asking for forgiveness, interrupting the conversation, and replied that it was okay. The guy looked at her in surprise, hearing that, by the way, it was interesting. Remembering how the other guy bowed, Jenny said that usually when someone is called second, they ask who is first. She smiled, listening to him roughly imagine who he was talking about. Looking at his smile, the girl thought it was similar, but he got himself into more trouble. Mike pointed his finger at the flying organ. Imagining the guys turned away, the girl mentally wished him luck. Meanwhile, the dark sky was filled with clouds and the man was shouting that everything was wrong. He watched as the guy saved up mana in his fist, saying that he needed to wrap chi around himself differently. He would teach him to control internal energy. Having hit the student on the head, the demon said that he didn't at all. The bump on the back of the protagonist's head was smoking. The protagonist hit the man in confusion. He stood in front of him and told him that it just seemed to him that he suddenly went mad. He said that it was not blows, but treatment. The guy looked at him seriously. Introducing the three guys, Chuck thought about the fact that 2 months had passed since the last meeting with the duo of heavenly demons. Contrary to his original plan, he stayed in Travia for more than 2 months. The protagonist remembered how the man extended his finger, saying that as promised, he would teach him the demonic art of the bloody ghost. The protagonist imagined Stan standing in front of him, telling him that from now on he would be his master. He imagined how he looked at the night city and listened to what he had already said. Learning another martial art would not do him any good. Remembering how the demon grabbed him by the shoulders, the guy thought that at first he refused, but after his tirade, he finally agreed. Chuck imagined himself saying with a desperate expression that he would learn the blood ghost demonic art, but he didn't want to become his disciple, so he should just teach him. Imagining the dumbfounded demon, the protagonist thought about how he had said this indifferently. He was too lazy to continue insisting on his refusal, but for some reason he thought about it for a long time before agreeing to such conditions. The protagonist remembered clenching his fists and thinking about how the blood ghost art was a supreme technique, on par with the peerless spear of the 9 heavens, and because of this, he had only mastered it quickly to a certain level, but after that, the entire training had become a constant suffering. Frowning, he thought that his biggest problem was the imbalance of his mind, energy, and body. Since he had finished with Denier's trials, he had no time to think about it. The boy remembered how he had clasped his hands in rage, thinking that he had already informed everyone so that Amanda would not be able to attack him, and the fact that the mad sky demon destined by the prophecy was just Ho-Ju's interpretation. Chuck sat in front of the man, thinking that he had remained in Travia for the rest of the year, perfecting the new technique and entering into harmony with his body, energy and mind. Taking hold of his wrist, the protagonist thought that the results were not so satisfactory, but since the prophecy would soon come true, he no longer needed to stay in Travia. Imagining Chloe smiling, the protagonist thought that 10 years had passed. He imagined the girl turned away, arguing that it was time to meet her. The starry sky illuminated the clearing. The man looked forward seriously. Putting his hand to his lips, Stan asked what was wrong, why it smelled like blood. He looked thoughtfully into the distance. The demon turned around. The man looked forward in shock. The vampire was clenching his fist in anger. The boys were standing in front of him in the clearing. A mad eye was visible through his hair. The protagonist frowned. Stan pointed at him in panic. Bill extended a trembling hand and asked how he was doing. The demon opened his eyes in fear, asking how. The man held his head with a grin, listening to what had happened to him. The monster frowned furiously. The protagonist stood in front of Kyle, saying that he had become a monster. Bill walked towards them surrounded by mana, answering that he had become a vampire. Gritting his teeth, Stan shouted that he was a fool. He had already forgotten about the pride of a warrior. The man raised his hand and asked what was wrong with that. Would this so-called pride return his lost hand to him? He lowered his eyebrows in alarm, saying that if he truly respected the bloody heavenly demon as a warrior, then he should not interfere. The guy took out his spear and asked if he had come for revenge. Bill grinned and replied that who knows, after so much time it is hard to say. Hatred towards him and the little sky demon is already like a habit from the time when he was still a human. Introducing a smiling Jenny, the man said that he was here for one and only reason, because Her Majesty wants him to despair. Chuck swung his spear in front of the demon. Stan clenched his fist furiously. Having created armor on himself, the protagonist asked his friend to protect Ruby. Looking at the enemy surrounded by mana, the protagonist listened that he must be careful. He is not one of those weak and feeble vampires with whom he had fought before. It seems that Jenny gave him some of her power. He confidently pulled out his weapon. The enemy quickly jumped up. The guy hit him with a spear. Chuck, grinning, held back the attack. Bill delivered a powerful blow. The protagonist kicked the ground. Flying up, he activated the divine art of the purple fog and the demonic art of the blood ghost. The protagonist looked down furiously. He was directing streams of mana, using many skills. The energy pierced the ground. The guy backed away. Chuck stood in the smoke. Bill grinned through the fog. The demon was flying behind him and telling him to dodge. The vampire writhed and laughed furiously. The protagonist swung his spear. The enemy extended his fist furiously. The protagonist looked at the glow with alarm. Ruby was taken aback. The demon desperately closed his eyes. Bill smiled evilly. He stood in front of the wounded guy. Looking at the lying Chuck, the vampire laughed. Frowning, the man asked how much power that crazy Jenny had poured into this fool. Bill grinned. The monster walked on the ground, saying that Her Majesty said that as long as he was alive, you can do whatever you want with him. Approaching the guy, he said that first he would deal with his filthy mouth. Raising his hand, the vampire said that he would then tear off his limbs one by one, and then the little sky demon. Stan suddenly grabbed his hand. Squeezing his wrist, the man said that if this was a duel between two warriors, he would do so. He frowned, saying that he was only trying to protect the young boy from the bloodthirsty beast. The demon threw the torn arm aside. Smiling, Bill said that so he used the demonic art of the blood ghost. Stan writhed in fury, listening to whether he really took him as his student. The man approached him, answering that it did not matter. The vampire looked at him with a smirk and said that he never thought that he would be honored to finish off the reckless demon of the bloody skies. Ruby sat down next to the wounded boy. Gritting her teeth, she listened as the demon said that all his energy flows were mixed up and his organs were damaged, to give him a potion quickly. The girl poured the medicine into his mouth. The demon stood next to him, saying that the elixir should help him at least for a while. Looking at the fighting guys, he said that Jenny put her whole soul into this fool. Even if the old man and the protagonist worked together, the chances were not that great. Clutching his head, Kyle said that he would have to convince him to accept his demonic energy. And how could he, the monarch of the void, get stuck with such a weakling? The demon furiously lowered his gaze. He turned to look at the wounded guy. Ruby anxiously extended her hand to him. Taken aback, the man asked what it was. Blood was flowing out of the protagonist's mouth. Kyle leaned over in surprise. The demon watched as the girl held his armor and said that he was regenerating. The man stood before them, reporting that even his energy and pulse seemed to be finally returning to normal. He looked down and asked if a human was capable of such a thing. The protagonist imagined himself as a child. The guy remembered Chloe smiling. Chuck opened his eyes slightly. The protagonist frowned. Watching Ruby hold him by the shoulders, the protagonist thought he was dead. He looked at the worried demon. The guy looked at the fighting boys. Gritting his teeth, Chuck thought about what he was doing. The protagonist imagined himself standing behind the wall with the girl, deciding that he couldn't die yet. The protagonist dodged the reaching hand. He looked away furiously. The guy looked at the smiling man. Suddenly, Chuck coughed blood onto Ruby. The girl was taken aback. She licked the blood from her hands. Looking at his hand, the protagonist thought about what just happened, the flow of his internal energy more stable than usual. The demon looked at him in shock and said that after the internal wounds were restored, harmony and balance found their place in his mind, energy and body. Looking at the sitting protagonist, he asked how this was possible. The guy raised his head in surprise. Frowning, Ruby shouted that where was he going, he almost died, let him not say that he was going to get up and continue fighting. Kyle stood behind, thinking that it was clear, so that was it. Imagining the heart, the man thought about what it meant, the same black heart that the Lich spoke of, it brought him back to life and his body evolved. The demon looked ahead in surprise, thinking that everything was somehow too random, a feeling that the world wanted to save him and make him stronger. Imagining a grinning Stan, he thought that the crazy sky demon was not the chosen messenger. If he was with him, they would have met anywhere, not only in the north. Kyle imagined Bill throwing up his hands, thinking that the messenger was not blessed. He was informed by none other than this dark vampire. The man watched the boy walk the earth and thought that the prophecies of the spirits are always like that. They force you to move along the path of a predetermined fate, which creates an immediate fate. The protagonist approached the rivals. Stan smiled. Looking at the protagonist, he asked what just happened to him. Frowning, the guy answered that it seemed that he was not one of those who died so easily. Remembering how the man smiled, Chuck thought that it was true. The protagonist imagined how the old man looked at him happily and said that he was the favorite of the omnipresent god of chaos. The protagonist raised his hand, wondering if this god really owned the hand that granted this unknown blessing. But why would he save him? What was he trying to achieve? Imagining the blue flames, he thought that he should forget. Well, there was no point in thinking about it for now anyway. The guy frowned and decided that he wanted to use this power to fill his heart. Chuck watched as the vampire raised his hand, wondering what was happening. The aura around him suddenly changed. He gained enlightenment on the verge of death. Red energy hovered in front of Bill's face. Reaching out his hand, the man shouted that no, it didn't matter, with the powers that the queen gave him. He quickly jumped up. The vampire extended his fist. The protagonist punched him in the face. The protagonist threw him back with his spear. The opponent was lying on the ground. Bill was pushing himself away with his hands furiously. Frowning, the guy listened as he asked why he didn't use his spear, and replied that it was not the time yet. The opponent grinned, hearing that he wanted to try something. If he used the spear, their fight would be over. The vampire angrily ran towards him, shouting that he was a fool. Chuck looked at the glow with confidence. The enemy's severed hand flew to the side. The protagonist swung his weapon. The protagonist looked at the blood splashes, asking how he liked it. Bill grinned angrily. He jumped up, thinking that he should not talk nonsense. Gritting his teeth, the vampire thought about the fact that he had already left everything. The monster extended his hand to the guy, thinking that it was just to defeat them, the creatures. Chuck looked down with confidence. A spear flew past him. Stan looked at it in shock. The protagonist stood in front of the fallen enemy. Rolling his eyes, Bill said that he had to obey. Imagining himself as a puppet, the man continued to say that it was the order of Queen Jenny. The protagonist stood above him and asked if he was really thinking about his queen in the last seconds of his life. He looked down with contempt. The man grinned. Bill screamed madly that he should shut up. He would kill him and the little sky demon and restore his reputation as a martial artist. He was a bloody sky demon. The vampire imagined Jenny pushing the shards away. The boy raised his spear. The veins on the enemy's face stood out, and he called for the queen. Stan looked worried, hearing about Jenny's order. Bill was drooling. The man frowned. The demon stood in front of Chuck, saying that he was a fool. Turning away, he said that it was time to finish him off already. The enemy's pupil reflected the protagonist's face. The protagonist cut off his head. Blood dripped from the tip. Frowning, the guy wondered why Jenny was attacking him through Bill. He put away the spear, saying that it was time to go, and thought that he couldn't think of a reason. The city was filled with fog, and Chuck said that he didn't want to come back here anymore. The plot moves us to the palace. The queen smiled. Jenny watched the guys through the portal, thinking that she still didn't understand what was happening. He didn't use any demonic powers, so he didn't think that the monarch of the void interfered. Grinning, she thought that it was interesting. She hadn't been so interested in chasing people for a long time. Turning around, Mike said he was curious, asking what standard she used when choosing a person, and the girl replied that the person should look like they would never fall into a stana. The queen looked at the protagonist in the portal and said that this is the despair they fear the most. The guy stood in the hall, asking if there were many people like that. He looked surprised, hearing that, for example, he was not one of them. Touching his cheek, Jenny said that he was both human and not human at the same time, and already in despair. She looked at the man around him, saying that he was certainly interesting. Watching him fall would be uninteresting, so she was not interested in making him her servant. Tilting her head, the girl asked if she wanted her to predict the future, adding that he would probably fail in trying to achieve what he wanted. The queen looked at the dark aura of the guy, saying that he would die a terrible death. Mike walked away from her, answering that he hoped it would be true, thinking that he was talking nonsense. Frowning, he thought that since he was now a member of the Predators, he no longer needed to be on the server. The vacation he took from the guild was almost over. He needed to return to the Tower of Dark Magic. Imagining a male silhouette, the guy thought about the Apostle of the Apocalypse and causality. Judging by the blessings of the Apostle, he would follow his destiny. Mike looked down, thinking that he would just constantly bump into him, as if fate itself decided this for them. I wonder what happened to him in his past life. What is his role in this one? He walked surrounded by dark mana, thinking what it would be like the next time he met him, waiting to meet Chuck again. We are transported to the central city of Area, Rubes, where the protagonist looked at the train, thinking that this is a city filled with abundance to the point that it is called the City of Dreams. Imagining a tall building, the protagonist thought that the Magic Guild of the Golden Magic Tower and the Bloody Magic Tower are located here, and the main center of the Mercenary Guild is also located here. He walked along the street, thinking that he is near the Crown, where the Murim Alliance is located, so there are many magicians and martial artists here. Frowning, the guy thought that this is his first time here. Even an A-rank mercenary here will be looked at as if he is nothing. Chuck put the token on the table. The girl at the counter took it, asking if he is an S-rank mercenary. Who is next to him? Stan picked up the medallion and replied that he is a reckless demon of the bloody skies. The worker frowned and said that this city was protected by the Murim Alliance, the Demon Alliance, and the Mages Guild, and if he did anything bad, it would be bad. Chuck watched as his companion smirked and asked if he thought he was a fool who would cause trouble left and right. Stan stood behind him and said that the Murim Alliance, the Demon Alliance, if he wanted to, nothing would stop him. Ruby jumped out from under the guy's clothes. Raising her leg, she said that she hadn't been to Rubes for a long time. The girl put her finger to her chin, saying that this was the main center of the Mages Guild. The protagonist looked surprised when he heard that there was also a Golden Magic Tower and a Bloody Magic Tower. The protagonist remembered how Lloyd raised his finger, thinking that he said that he would fulfill any request he asked of him if he approached him, even though he didn't have any special requests yet. Looking at his palm, he thought that Scarlet was here too. He imagined his smiling friend, thinking that she said that she would contact him through the bracelet if she needed help, but since he hadn't heard from her for several years, it meant there were no big problems. Ruby lowered her head and said that her master hadn't contacted her for over a year. Chuck was surprised to hear that she could leave a message at the Golden Magic Tower. Smiling, the girl told him that Lloyd, the head of the Golden Magic Tower, was also her master's apprentice. She closed her eyes and said that if he wasn't a mage, he hardly knew about it, but her master was really something. Turning away, the protagonist replied that since they didn't have anything planned for today, they could stop here. The protagonist walked with the guys down the street, saying that first they would go to the Golden Magic Tower, and then look into the Bloody Magic Tower. He looked at the arches and said he hadn't expected that. The guy looked up, saying he knew, of course, that this place was very rich, but still, to think that someone owned it. Introducing the two men, Ruby said that some people without a class had techniques that were available to magicians and martial artists when the skilled hands of gnomes worked together with magic. She happily pointed to the train and said that it was the highlight of the city. A voice came from the guy's bracelet, saying that she didn't understand why she was so proud of the city at all. Chuck stood on the platform and offered to go already. Frowning, Stan said that he would tell right away he would sit by the window. The girl sat down on the chair and told him to sit down already. The main character smiled calmly, listening to how all this was only in Rubes. Because it was safe here and the city was extremely rich, he doubted that other cities could take care of such technologies. Kyle looked thoughtfully. Imagining the mountain, he thought about how much had changed in the 400 years of his imprisonment. I wonder how the South had changed then. The protagonist walked along the Golden Magic Tower station, saying that they had arrived quickly. Imagining a serious Stan, Ruby said that about the old man. She didn't even expect that he would be so happy about the train ride, so childishly. She stood next to the guy and said that first they should go to the Golden Magic Tower. The building was illuminated by the sun's rays. The guys entered the tower. Chuck looked at the chandelier. Pointing to the corridor, the girl said that they should go there. Lloyd took off his glasses. The protagonist stood in the aisle with a serious look. The man smiled. Lowering his glasses, he said that these were unexpected guests. Ruby happily said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Lloyd sat at the table, asking how much had passed, really 7 years, and said that she hadn't grown a bit. He looked away and said that the protagonist had changed a lot. The guy smiled, listening to him say that he couldn't believe that he and the one he knew were the same person. The man examined the chandelier, asking if he had decided what he wanted to ask him for. Chuck sat down opposite him at the table, answering that he hadn't yet. The protagonist closed his eyes with a smile, hearing that he shouldn't forget, he had his limits, he shouldn't ask for something unimaginable. Touching his chin, Lloyd said that since he wasn't here to ask, why did they come, they clearly weren't here for tea. The girl held a cup and answered that they came to ask about the whereabouts of her master. She sat at the table, telling him that she was acting on orders from Master Enverus and Chuck, but so far she hadn't heard anything from her master. Frowning, the man said that her master. He put his hand to his chin and continued saying that he had visited him 2 months ago. The protagonist thought about Enverus with a serious expression. Remembering Dinur about the clock, the protagonist thought about how, like him, causality is confused, a mage who survived the test of the god of time. He imagined Kyle crossing his arms, thinking that he went to the sleeping forest to meet him, but instead found his familiar, along with the monarch of the void. Ruby spat out her tea, hearing that her master apologized, saying that he wanted to meet in person, but there was no opportunity. Raising his hand, Lloyd said that this is why he asked her to go to the south. The guy sat on a chair, thinking that this was just right for him. Anyway, he was going to go south to practice using demonic energy. The man extended a finger and said that they would meet him on the way to the south, and asked him to tell her. Dumbfounded, Chuck listened that one cannot stray from the path of humanity. Gritting his teeth, the demon thought about how Enverus was always so elusive. If he had foreseen their meeting, then he must have foreseen that he would join them. The protagonist looked at the serious man and asked if he had been following Presken, if he knew that he was now in the north. Introducing Jenny above the city, Lloyd explained that the northern region of Travia was ruled by the vampire queen, and if he killed Presken, Arbs would hunt him. Kyle hovered over the boy, informing him that this was the leader of the liches and the predators, meaning Presken was probably one of his subordinates. The man placed the cup on the table and said that Arbs was a monster much more ferocious than Presken. The protagonist frowned, hearing that among all the mages, only her master could deal with Arbs. Imagining Jenny licking her lips, he thought that he was trying to say that Enverus had power comparable to those monsters. Looking at the tower, the boy thought that after that, they went to the Bloody Tower of Magic to meet Scarlet. Chuck remembered standing in front of the guard, thinking that unfortunately they couldn't find her, hoping that one day they would meet again. Stan happily held the bags and shouted that the great he was back. Ruby looked at the bag in shock and shouted that these were souvenirs. Did he really buy all this himself? What a redneck. The man burst into tears and replied that it was true, he was a redneck. He couldn't imagine that there were such stylish things in this world. The guys happily jumped behind the guy. Remembering how Chloe held the bundle on her shoulder, the main character thought that tomorrow was the day of the promise made 10 years ago, March 14th, the day they agreed to meet. Kyle flew behind him and told him that the little sky demon he saw in the dungeon a year ago was just a young monster, but now, an end monster in his prime. The protagonist lowered his head and thought about how he had somehow managed to pull through, something he couldn't even imagine 10 years ago. He imagined the girl walking away, mentally wondering how far Chloe had gone and how far he had come. He closed his eyes and decided he couldn't stop thinking about it. Chuck was taking a spear out of his bag, thinking that he needed to practice in the fresh air. The protagonist walked out onto a dark street. Looking at the area ahead, the protagonist thought that this place would be suitable. He confidently swung the weapon. The guy was spinning the spear. A silhouette appeared behind him. Putting his hand to his chin, the man said that he was impressive. His skills were truly worthy of praise. He walked towards Chuck, saying that he looked very young, and asked what his name was. Frowning, the protagonist said his name, and thought that he was following him. Ethan smiled happily and said that he must be the demonic spear that defeated the sword demon. The protagonist gripped the weapon's hilt and thought about how he was an indestructible spear, one of the best spearmen in area, a master of martial arts and magic. Smiling, the man said that it seemed like the rumors about the demonic spear were true. His spear techniques surpassed even the founder of martial arts. He closed his eyes and said that even at full strength, he probably wouldn't be able to stand up to him. Turning away, Ethan asked if he was here with the reckless demon of the bloody skies. The man imagined Stan leaning against the train and telling him that the reckless demon of the bloody skies was a notorious demonic figure who had done many terrible things, asking why he was traveling with such a person. He put his hand to his chin and asked if he was being threatened. He shouldn't worry, he could help him. The protagonist listened with a frown as he said that if they attacked together, even Stan wouldn't be able to resist, and replied that there was no need to worry. The serious guy held a spear. Ethan writhed tensely and asked if he was protecting him. Chuck gripped the handle of the weapon tightly. The man glared. The protagonist answered with a serious expression that he wasn't really. "We see the steps to the tower." Smiling, Ethan said that of course not, a righteous warrior like him would never do that, and apologized if he had offended them. Crossing his arms, he said that he had it for his information. The protagonist listened with a frown as he said that there was a branch of the Murim Alliance nearby. Looking away, the man said that if he strayed from the righteous path, the blade of justice would catch up with him. The guy watched him go. Looking up at the foggy sky, he replied that he would keep that in mind. The story takes us to March 14th, the promised day, with the sun shining on the buildings. Ruby smiled and said she hoped he would have a good time. Kyle looked at the boy with concern, asking if he was nervous. Frowning, Chuck listened to him say that he was not some boy who had fallen in love for the first time, and replied that he was not at all. The demon ran after him, saying that yes, of course, such attraction between a man and a woman always gives birth to love. Grinning, he asked why his heart felt like it was jumping out of his chest then. Kyle blushed and said that to think that he had caught him like this, and he was charming in his own way. The protagonist took off his bracelet. The protagonist stepped on it. A fountain was shown. The protagonist stood up straight, thinking about the promise he had made 10 years ago. The protagonist looked up in displeasure, realizing that he had arrived too early, and that there was still an hour to go. The boot hit the ground as Chuck considered maybe buying a bouquet. The confused young man looked away as he wondered why he would buy flowers when he was just seeing an old friend and that was all. The protagonist clenched his fist as he wondered if he was worthy of standing next to her now. He imagined his friend's face as he realized that he wanted to be acknowledged by Chloe. The protagonist's mouth dropped open as he added that he wanted her praise and encouragement. The girl stood before him as he thought about how even when she told him that he had no talent and that he was unintelligent, and how it cut into his heart, he still fought with all his might for her acknowledgement. His distorted reflection was shown as Chuck wondered what would happen if she acknowledged him one day. Clouds floated over the city as it was finally noon. The dark-haired boy looked ahead worriedly. There was a building behind him when he realized that she was still missing. One structure resembled a spiral. The boy approached the old man, asking if today was definitely February 14th. The protagonist's mouth was slightly open as he thought about how sure the date was, and then turned to Neville. The man appeared in front of him when the protagonist said that he wanted to know where Chloe was now. Chuck looked down intently when he was asked to wait for a moment. He looked at the boy in front of him, who said that if he meant the little sky demon, then she was currently in Rubia, fighting the unbreakable spear at the southern gate. Then he asked about what he said. The protagonist remembered the creepy smiling man when he realized who he was talking about. The protagonist charged forward, gritting his teeth, deciding that something was wrong, since with her abilities, his girlfriend should be able to easily defeat this opponent. Chuck jumped up, thinking that the unbreakable spear was forcing her to retreat. The townspeople gaped, looking up, as they shouted that movement techniques were forbidden in the city. The boy hung in the air above the people. He landed on the roof of the train. Other cars were shown, as the protagonist thought that perhaps something had happened to Chloe, otherwise she should not give in to Ethan. The protagonist frowned deeply, wondering what had happened. A warrior in armor stood in front of the girl. The weapon was shown close up. The knight in a helmet stood straight as he said that it seemed like she did not live up to the rumors about herself. Blood was dripping from Chloe's mouth as she asked why he was attacking her. The girl put her hand to her face when she said she had done nothing to him. Ethan was in front of her when he answered that you should hunt a tiger when it is wounded, then asked if he was right about there being something wrong with her since her blood had turned black. Then she said he was petty and dishonorable. The man in the helmet gritted his teeth when he asked if demons were talking about honor now, then Chloe looked ahead, explaining that he was being sarcastic. The armored warrior was shown up close when he admitted his methods were dishonorable, but he would take the blame when he was done with her, then asked if she really thought this day would never come, even though she walked the world calling herself a demon. A dark silhouette was shown when the girl asked what time it was, then a helmet was shown when Ethan answered it was noon. Chloe had her back turned when she asked again. Clouds were floating in the sky when she said that it meant she had broken her promise. Blue eyes flashed when the warrior thought about how he didn't know why she was weak, but he had to kill her then and there. The brunette held her hand in front of her as the man added that the little sky demon was growing stronger at a terrifying rate, and that he had not asked permission from the Murim Alliance, and that this was a purely personal decision made on behalf of the unbreakable spear. Ethan made a move when he decided that he would destroy the villain. The girl was shown in profile when she wondered if this was really how it would end there. The armored warrior held a weapon in his hand when she wondered if she would die at his hands. Chloe imagined the smiling protagonist when she apologized to him for failing to keep her promise. The brunette's eyes were closed. Someone passed by her. The man in the cloak stood with his back to her. The girl looked surprised. Ethan was shown in profile when he asked the protagonist if he even realized what it meant to stand in his way. Chuck's mouth dropped open as he asked what he was doing. The man looked ahead angrily as he repeated his question, then replied that he was destroying the villain, and that if they didn't, she would be unstoppable. Chloe looked shocked as the warrior added that if he had to pay for it, then so be it. She was sitting behind the protagonist when she turned to him and asked if it was really him. The guy smiled slightly. The protagonist looked at his girlfriend behind him as he answered in the affirmative. The girl continued to look ahead, her mouth open. Chuck looked down, pleased. Ethan was standing with a spear in his hand. The veins on his forehead appeared as he asked how dare they chat and smile in front of him. The man jumped up, rushing forward. The protagonist's cloak was revealed. The protagonist was half-turned. Chuck looked back angrily. Ethan gritted his teeth, looking forward. The guy attacked him with a swing of the spear. The protagonist extended his hand to the side. He pointed the weapon at the enemy. Ethan leaned on his spear as he addressed the boy. The protagonist looked ahead seriously as he wondered if the enemy's armor was magical like his since it could recover, and then thought that even this stance with a spear and his fighting style were very different from ordinary warriors. The armored knight was enveloped in green energy as he used the skills of strengthening and acceleration. Ethan pointed the spear at Chuck. The pupils of the mustachioed man narrowed as he used the technique of explosion. The youth turned his head to the side. There was smoke in front of the warrior, as the protagonist realized that he also had magic. The protagonist frowned, looking ahead as he realized that this would not be an easy battle. The warrior in the helmet tilted his head forward. There was no one in front of him. Chuck swung at Ethan, thinking that it would be nice if he was like before. The protagonist stood holding a spear. Blood was running down the knight's face as he called the protagonist a loser. The guy looked away indifferently. A crowd of people was shown as he realized that spectators were starting to gather, and that it was dangerous to stay there. The protagonist stood in front of his friend. The girl looked ahead with a smile as she said that she never thought that they would meet like this. The protagonist was shown in profile as he agreed with her. He extended his hand forward. Chloe was sitting in front of him. She opened her mouth slightly, smiling as she apologized, explaining that she really couldn't get up. Chuck looked down attentively. He opened his mouth wide as he asked her again. The friend hugged him from behind. The girl looked languidly at her comrade as she asked what was wrong, because he was sweatier than her, and that she was really that heavy, to which he replied that of course not. An angry Ethan opened his mouth as he addressed the demon's spear. He was behind the protagonist. The dark-haired man looked forward angrily as he warned him that if he left to protect the small sky demon, the Murim Alliance would consider it an act of rebellion, and then wondered if he really decided to follow the path of demons. The protagonist turned around, carrying the girl. Chuck's mouth dropped open as he spoke about the orthodox path and its opposite, and how wasting your life playing factions is a choice for everyone, and how he has no interest in it. Chloe's eyes were closed as he explained that he just wanted to save his comrade. Ethan stood there, looking forward as he asked him again, saying that in that case, he would have to finish him off to leave, otherwise he would notify the Murim Alliance, and they would send an extermination squad after them. The boy looked away intently. He had his back to the armored warrior when he said that he didn't like killing, and that the man himself had noticed that the pursuers were approaching, so it was better to hurry, adding that if he was tired of living, then he should jump off a higher cliff. Ethan gritted his teeth in anger. The protagonist looked ahead when the man mentally asked him to leave the city. The protagonist looked at the knight behind him, who added that he would say one thing on behalf of the one whose life he saved. The warrior placed his hand on his knee when he said that the Murim Alliance headquarters was nearby, and that they would send the best martial artists, and that an elite squad would soon be formed, and that while the little sky demon was weakened, they would not cope. Ethan looked from under his brows, gritting his teeth when he summed up that if the guy ignored this warning, then he would personally lead the squad, and next time everything would end completely differently. Chuck looked away in displeasure, answering that he would keep it in mind. An overhead shot of the buildings was shown when Kyle asked if the boy would flee the city as advised. The protagonist was flying when he replied that no, as that would be foolish and that the unbreakable spear probably hadn't thought things through that far, adding that even if they escaped immediately, it would be difficult to escape. The demon looked after the protagonist when he asked what he would do then, to which he was told that the Murim Alliance was not the only organization in the city. Neville crossed his arms when Chuck added that if the Murim Alliance was fighting for justice, then there should be a faction that opposed them, like the Demon Alliance. A red silhouette was shown when an unorthodox organization was mentioned. Kyle was behind the protagonist when he asked how the protagonist had become so naive and why the protagonist thought the Demon Alliance would help him just because he opposed the Murim. The protagonist pursed his lips, looking forward as he replied that he knew it was a risk, but in a situation like this, there was no other way but to take the risk. Chloe's mouth fell open as the boy added that he never thought something like this could happen to her, and then wondered what had happened. Kyle looked at the girl as he explained that it was a curse, and was questioned again. Chloe was on Chuck's back as the demon explained that it distorted the energy flow from her core and destroyed her body, and that no one would be able to move normally under its effects, and was questioned again. Kyle smirked as he explained that, fortunately, this curse alone would not kill her, and that it was meant to cause pain, so to speak, to subdue, concluding that it was not a pleasant thing. The boy turned his head to the side, his mouth slightly open as he realized that his girlfriend had traveled all the way there in such a state just to keep a promise. The protagonist gritted his teeth as he asked how he could lift the curse, and the demon replied that it was simple and that he just needed to kill the one who cursed her. White clouds floated across the sky as the demon's spear was greeted, asking about the fact that he had a small sky demon on his back. The protagonist stood with his leg bent as someone said that it was an honor to host two young heroes who had great fame. The woman looked ahead with a smile as she said that her name was Clara and that she was the head manager of this estate. The brunette's face was shown up close as she welcomed them to the Demon Alliance's home. Chuck looked ahead in disbelief. Purple rooftops were shown as someone announced that they were waiting for the protagonist. The man stood sideways as he introduced himself, saying that he was Clark, the head of the Demon Alliance branch in Rube's city. The protagonist had a female friend on his shoulders as he thanked them for the warm welcome and stated his name. The dark-haired man turned his head to the side as he said he had some questions. Dark silhouettes were shown as Clark reminded them that Chuck had defeated the Sword Demon and the Blood Sky Demon. The Alliance branch chief looked towards the guests as he said that they thought the young man was a righteous warrior belonging to the Orthodox faction, but he came with a reckless Blood Sky Demon and even saved the little Sky Demon despite the fact that it would incur the wrath of the Murim. The dark-haired man smirked as he asked him to tell him whose side he was really on. The protagonist's mouth dropped open as he replied that he was often asked that question and that he was on neither side. Clark stood in front of the protagonist, who added that he was simply Chloe's friend. The boy and the man looked at each other as the Alliance leader asked him again, laughing, and then wondered if the little Sky Demon really had a friend. The warrior pointed his spear at the protagonist as Clark exclaimed that he understood why he stood up to the unbreakable spear, even if it meant incurring the wrath of the Murim Alliance. Chuck looked straight ahead seriously as the man added that it was brave. The Alliance branch leader glared as he summed it up by saying that it meant they wanted protection from a demonic organization, and then asked if they realized what that meant. The boy was shown in profile as he asked him to stop being distracted and get to the point. Clark introduced Chloe and the protagonist as he said that the guy with the little Sky Demon didn't have a preference for anyone and that they wanted to know if they were going to officially become allies of the Demonic Alliance. The protagonist held his girlfriend as he answered that he didn't know what the girl would do, then they asked him about himself. The man looked ahead with a creepy look as he asked if it wouldn't be at least fair for them to join their ranks since they were going to use the Demonic Alliance as their shield. The guest stood in front of the head of the organization's branch. Clark's mouth dropped open as Chuck said that he was right and that it seemed like he had been rude. The guy stood holding Chloe as he added that he would go elsewhere, and then thanked him for his time, thinking that if there was no other way out, he would have to ask Lloyd from the Golden Magic Tower for help. The protagonist imagined the bearded man when he thought about how he doubted that the Magic Tower would go against the will of the Murim Alliance just to help them, but there was no other way, and how he could only hope that Lloyd would take his request seriously. Clark looked after the guests as he asked them to stop and wait for a minute. The man put his hand behind his head as he called the boy impatient, and then asked to at least let him finish. The leader of the Alliance looked serious when he said that the unorthodox organization would protect them even if they did not join their faction. The protagonist stared ahead when he asked if he was serious, to which he was told that it was a direct order from the leader of the Demonic Alliance. Clark stood in front of the boys, saying that whenever they asked for their help, they should accept them into the Alliance if possible, and protect them if they refused to join. Chuck looked ahead in confusion, thinking about the leader of the demonic faction, when the man added that since they still needed help, he hoped to recruit powerful allies, but it seemed that would not work. A girl appeared next to Clark when he said that she would take them to a place where they could rest and recover. The dark-haired man looked ahead kindly when he added that he was only saying this out of concern, but maintaining neutrality in everything may not be so easy. The room was shown when Kyle said that most likely he was talking about the Murim Alliance and the demonic faction. The demon appeared above his comrades when he added that, but not only, then the guy agreed with him. The protagonist lowered his thoughtful gaze when Kyle said that between the orthodox and the unorthodox, as well as between the human and the inhuman, he walks on a knife edge. Chloe was lying in front of the protagonist when the demon asked him how much longer he could maintain balance. Then the guy asked him to shut up, since she was waking up. Chuck looked at his friend with a smile when he addressed her and asked if she could hear him. The girl sat up, looking at her comrade when she said his name, then he asked her to lie down a little longer and not to strain herself. The young man looked down when he added that he heard that she was cursed, and then asked who it was. Chloe looked at him carefully when she asked why he needed to know, to which he replied that it was obvious. The protagonist looked shocked when his friend asked if he really started to think that he was stronger than her. The girl lay looking away when she told him that she fought this villain for 3 days and 3 nights, but was unable to finish him off, and before leaving, he put a curse on her. Chloe looked at her friend sitting next to her when she asked him if he thought he could handle him, to which he replied in the affirmative. Sweat appeared on the girl's face. The angry protagonist opened his mouth wide when he exclaimed that no matter what happened, he would definitely handle him. The friend looked surprised. Chloe smiled contentedly. Rick was shown when she revealed that she was cursed by a Fist Lord who said that he was a low-ranking member of a group called Heaven Beyond Heaven. Chuck remembered Stan's muscular back when he realized that the wound was inflicted by a Sword Lord from that organization. The girl looked forward with a smile when she said that he was so angry as if it happened to him, and that she was pleased. She was sitting in front of the protagonist when she added that, in the end, it was her problem and that she would solve it herself. Then the guy asked if she was really going to do it in such a state. The protagonist looked at his friend angrily, who replied that she couldn't even imagine such a thing 10 years ago, and that she would never have thought that she would hear such words from him. Then he exclaimed that he had never said such a thing. A window with carved shutters was shown when Chloe said that she really didn't want to talk about it, and that 10 years had already passed. They were sitting next to each other when the girl asked if he was really angry about what happened because they were friends, to which he answered in the affirmative. She approached a confused Chuck when she said that she wanted to ask him for a friendly favor, and then asked if it was possible, to which the young man answered that of course she could ask for anything. There was food on the tray in front of them when her friend said she was hungry. Chloe opened her palms in front of her when she explained that she couldn't move a finger. The protagonist looked at her questioningly. The girl stuck out her tongue when she asked to be fed. The protagonist's shocked face was shown. There were white clouds above the building. Chuck was watching Stan and Ruby when he explained that while they were within the walls of the unorthodox demonic alliance, he was trying to find out about the heavens beyond the heavens through the connections he had. The angry guy was in front of the old man when he added that, however, even Enverus didn't have much information on them, and that he couldn't figure out how to lift the curse on Chloe either. Kyle appeared next to the protagonist when he said that as a result, the answer lies in the south. The demon brought his hand to his face when he explained that there are many Shans living in the south after all, and that it would be much easier to find a solution there. The girl was lying in bed when the protagonist thought that the Murim Alliance's hounds were probably catching up to them by now, and that he needed to make a decision before it was too late. The sun was shining on the roof of the building when the man said that he was told that he wanted to ask him something, and the boy replied that it was true. Clark stood in front of the boy, who asked to what extent the demonic faction protected its members, and the boy replied that it was a good question. The man presented a red silhouette when he explained that most of their organization were demonic people trained in the martial arts of evil, and that these techniques were powerful, but at the same time they changed the nature of the person who practiced them. The protagonist stood in front of the head of the Alliance branch when he asked if they didn't control it, to which he replied that they controlled it to a certain extent, but unfortunately, some of them periodically crossed the line and turned into monsters, going berserk. Clark opened his mouth slightly, looking ahead, adding that when something like that happened, the demonic faction's protection would no longer apply to them. The protagonist frowned when he concluded that they would leave the cleanup to the righteous Murim Alliance. Chuck was in front of the man when he announced his decision. The boy looked ahead when he said that they would leave the unorthodox demonic alliance, and that they would be pursued by the Murim and the heavens beyond the heavens. Clark stared ahead. The boy turned away from him. The man's distorted face appeared before the protagonist when he was asked if he was sure he wouldn't regret his decision. Sweat appeared on the protagonist's face. He looked at the man in front of him, who said that he was glad to meet him and introduced himself as the leader of the demonic faction. A frightened Chuck backed away when the demon said that there was no need to be afraid and that he was speaking to him through a device installed in the branch leader, and the boy wondered how he could control himself after what he had seen. The man's eyes glowed purple as he assumed that the boy was leaving them because of the small sky demon. The protagonist looked determined as he answered in the affirmative, adding that he was grateful for the shelter provided, even if it was short-lived. The being inside Clark was shown, telling him that it was okay and that if he wanted to leave, he could, but it wanted to leave him a message. The man in the red cloak sat on a rock when he said that the boy was currently walking a gray path, but if he ever decided to take the dark path, he should come to the forest of Legro, and the boy would find him there. The protagonist sat looking ahead. In front of him sat Stan, who said that she was truly impressive. The man looked down appraisingly when he asked about how she could possibly be only 23 and yet have already achieved transcendence, adding that there had never been a precedent for such a thing anywhere. Chloe raised her hand to her face when she called him a reckless demon of the bloody skies, saying that she had heard many rumors about him. Then he asked what she thought when she saw him in person. The girl looked at Stan when she replied that he did not seem like a particularly scary opponent. The man clenched his fist when he said that her words really got his blood pumping, and that if her body recovered, he would gladly fight her one day. Chloe's face was dripping with sweat as she agreed with him. Her friend leaned on Chuck. The boy looked at her seriously as someone said that it was a shame that a martial artist like her was in such a terrible state, and the protagonist turned to the reckless demon, explaining that he needed his help. Stan smiled as he told the boy not to worry, as he had been fighting the scum of the Murem Alliance for decades. The boy stopped in front of the stairs. Ethan stood, looking ahead as he told the protagonist that he ignored his warning. Chuck was shown in profile as he responded that it was a rather mediocre move for such grandiose threats, and that he thought there would be more. The bearded man's mouth fell open as he explained that certain circumstances had arisen. Stan looked down menacingly as his name was spoken. Chloe looked ahead in concentration as she was addressed. The protagonist looked menacing as his name was called. Ruby's mouth was drooling. The man clutched his weapon in his hand as he addressed the wicked villains who were disturbing the peace and quiet of the common people, declaring that in the name of the righteous Murem Alliance, he would destroy every single one of them. Ethan held his hand out in front of him as he finished speaking. Sweat began to appear on Stan's face as the protagonist said that neither he nor the small sky demon had done anything evil, and then asked if they couldn't settle their problems peacefully by offering him a reckless bloody sky demon in their place. Veins bulged on the man's forehead as he replied that practitioners of the demonic arts would inevitably descend into crime one way or another, and that such was the nature of wicked heretics. There was darkness around Chuck as he began to speak. Clark's face was shown as the boy said that he frankly didn't agree with that logic. A warrior with a spear stood before him when the protagonist asked about how, despite Chloe doing nothing, just because she was in an unorthodox faction, he was determined to finish her off. The protagonist looked ahead, gritting his teeth as he said that they were all madly obsessed with everything being black or white. An armored warrior was shown as the youth added that since he wanted it so much, he would deal with him, the unbreakable spear. Ethan was shown in profile as it was revealed that a letter had arrived at his estate that same day. A shadow fell on the man's face as it was explained that it said that he needed to finish off the little sky demon at all costs. Then he realized that there would be no reinforcements. Stan and Chuck were shown as Ethan thought that even though Chloe was weakened, the two of them next to her were such powerful warriors that even one of them would be difficult to handle. The mustachioed man's mouth dropped open as he added that it was basically an order to go to his death. His blue eyes sparkled as he decided that it didn't matter. The warrior clenched his weapon in his hand as he wondered if the reason he was sent alone without reinforcements was because the Alliance forces were busy with another problem, or if this was punishment for bowing his head to them in front of the crowd. Ethan stepped forward as he decided that he would destroy these demons. He frowned deeply as he looked ahead as he added that these were the beliefs he had held his entire life. The boy waved his spear in front of him. The protagonist held his hand out to the side. Stan looked up from behind him as he asked if he needed help, to which the boy replied no, that he could handle this himself. The armored warrior rushed towards him as he exclaimed that he would take the head of the little sky demon with him. The protagonist swung his weapon as he thought about how these villains wanted to kill Chloe, even though she had never done anything evil, simply because they had called her a demonic person. The helmeted man stared ahead as the boy added that his gaze was still unwavering, as if he could not find a single flaw in this spatial black and white logic. An angry Chuck gritted his teeth as he realized that their unwavering conviction was infuriating him beyond words. The boy parried all of the enemy's attacks. Ethan opened his mouth wide. The protagonist's eye flashed as he decided that this was the case. The protagonist held a spear in his hand as he thought that since they considered themselves to be paragons of righteousness, and they were branded as demonic people, then he would agree with it. The boy looked ahead carefully. A ball of energy appeared in front of the armored warrior. Chuck, looking forward seriously, decided that he would take this path. The opponents stood opposite each other. Ethan's helmet began to disappear as he warned the protagonist that he would regret his decision. The dark-haired boy opened his mouth slightly, looking down as he replied that it would not happen. The man spat out blood as he agreed with him. The young man stood up straight as he added that he thought the same. The protagonist's eye was shown up close. A bloody body lay in front of him as he thought about how even the unbreakable spear, a great martial artist like him, would bet his life on this black and white view of things. The protagonist and Stan were shown in profile as the boy wondered if it was really worth it. The mustachioed man looked away as he said that it was inevitable, but he had just gotten into trouble, and that now that the boy had killed a famous martial artist from a respected sect, all the reputation he had built for the demonic spear name would evaporate without a trace, and he would be treated as just another demonic man. Chuck stood there, looking forward with a serious expression, as he added that the Murim Alliance would no longer have to hold back, and that they would openly send out a punitive force. Ethan's body lay in a pool of blood, as Stan guessed that the man had most likely been used as a pawn for exactly that purpose. The protagonist looked at his comrade, who said that the man with the little heavenly demon had simply not yet managed to gain enough notoriety for them to be able to afford a full-scale punitive force, and that he knew all too well how those wily Murim Alliance rats could act. Stan looked at the girls behind him when the protagonist asked if he meant to say that they sacrificed a martial artist who had reached the highest peak just to get an excuse, to which the man replied in the affirmative, adding that it was definitely worth it. Ruby held Chloe back as he explained that it was beneficial if in return they were able to finish off a monster who had reached the level of transcendence at the age of 23. There was a building behind the guy as he asked it again, saying that he thought he had heard of it before, and then wondered what kind of level it was. A masked guy appeared, asking if he was curious. Chuck was in front of Stan. The protagonist was hugged by a stranger, whom he asked about when he managed to sneak up on him, to which he was told that the level of transcendence was too majestic for worms like him to even whisper about. The hand reached for the light when he explained that this was the final stage of a martial artist's development, beyond the highest peak, and that this level was a colossal wall. Stan was in front of the guys when Ron said that countless losers were doing their best, desperately trying to conquer this wall, like the man who was hanging around with Chuck. The reckless demon was shown from behind when he said that this couldn't be true, recognizing the stranger. Someone in black stood next to the protagonist when he asked if his wounds left by the Sword Lord had healed at all. The protagonist was shown in profile looking worried as he realized he couldn't move after Ron added that the small sky demon seemed to be unconscious. White clouds were floating in the sky as someone warned them that he was going to give them the honor of facing a transcendental level martial artist. Ron held up a few fingers as he said that he was the hidden ruler of the heavens beyond the heavens, and that he was there for two reasons. Sweat began to appear on Stan's face. Chuck looked scared as the ruler told them to attack together now. Raising his hand, the boy said that he was the ruler of darkness, and that he was here today for two reasons. The man gritted his teeth. The hero's eyes widened as he heard that they should attack together. Frowning, the protagonist asked what two reasons. What was he talking about? The ruler of darkness stood before him silently. The girl sat on the ground. It was heard that, well, first of all, he, of course, wants to take the small heavenly demon. She was breathing heavily. It was said that thanks to the curse of the Lord of the Fist, this will not be a problem. But there is one thing. Stretching his hand forward, the guy said that while he is with her, taking her will not be as easy as he expected. Looking at him, Chuck asked what because what will kill him, yes. Holding the sphere in his hands, the Lord of Darkness answered that he could, but there is a second reason. He threw it up. Rays appeared in the sky. The hero clenched his teeth. The man looked in amazement. The girl opened her mouth in surprise. The guy silently looked forward. Darkness appeared around him, and he said that they should not be afraid. He only separated the space to get rid of the insect's gaze. The protagonist looked at him in fear, hearing that he had impressive strength for his age. He had killed an iron spearman, one of the best masters in the Murim Alliance. Holding the dagger in his hands, the guy said that he wanted to test it. Looking at him, Chuck heard that this was the second reason, not to worry, he would not kill him. Frowning, the man asked where the Overlord was, to which the guy replied that he should shut up. Looking straight ahead, Ron asked that it had been, 10 years since his defeat, right? Then he had shown promise, but in 10 years he had not achieved transcendence. Stan looked at him in surprise, hearing that he was not interested in trash, let him not interfere. Looking away, Chuck thought about the old man. The starry sky appeared. It was heard that enough talking. Holding the weapon in his hands, Ron said that they would begin. The hero abruptly rushed forward. Standing in front of him, the Lord of Darkness asked, what is trying to hide fear, rushing into the attack, pity? Suddenly he stretched his hand forward. The blade stuck into the ground. It returned to the owner. The protagonist clenched his teeth tightly. Suddenly several blades flew forward. Chuck's eyes widened in amazement. He began to dodge them. The hero looked forward in bewilderment. Stretching his hand forward, Ron said that he was missing on purpose. He did not even have time to react. The man stretched his hand to the side. The Lord dodged his blows. Stan froze in amazement. He clenched his teeth furiously. The man looked angrily at the Lord of Darkness. Standing behind the hero, the spirit said that they were on completely different levels. He was just playing with him. The protagonist clenched his teeth tightly. His eyes widened, hearing the question of what he would do. Ron closed his eyes and sighed. Standing behind the man, he said that he was tired. Stan looked at him in fear. Suddenly he fell to the ground. Blood flew out of his mouth. It was heard that he had wasted 10 years. Raising his hand, the Lord of Darkness said that he did not even want to look at him anymore. Suddenly Ron looked in amazement. A bright glow emanated from the hero. Standing in front of him, the Lord said that this would not work, he would have to take only the lesser heavenly demon. The protagonist stood still. It was heard that who knew that he was a non-entity clinging to the power of a vile demon. Chuck clenched his teeth in anger. The Lord stretched his arms out to the sides. The man's body flew up. Looking straight ahead, Ron said that it was too fast. The man's eyes lit up, and he asked, "Which is clear?" Then he too. Gritting his teeth, the demon said that the old man went crazy because he felt his demonic energy. Now he can fight him, but he should be careful. Suddenly Stan swung his hand. He dodged the green beams. It was heard that there is no power in the world that is given for free. The beams flew around the man. The man's eyes lit up. It was said that demonic energy destroys a person. Looking to the side, the guy asked what, and, using this abomination, he dares to challenge him. Suddenly, a blade appeared in front of him. He dodged the weapon and asked again. A glow appeared around his hand. The hero swung his hand, using the skilled destructive thunder strike. He struck the Lord. They began to fight. Gray smoke hung. It was heard that not bad. Leaning over, Ron said that although he borrowed the power of the demon. Frowning, he added that but in power this blow was at the level of transcendence. So be it, he praises. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thought that the hell, even with the power of the monarch of the void, he did not strike him seriously. No, this is not enough. The demon looked away, hearing the appeal. An image of a girl appeared. It was heard that he needed to become stronger than then. The hero's eyes lit up and he shouted that he needed more. Gritting his teeth, Kyle said that of course, but he should be prepared for the consequences. Frowning, the protagonist thought that now everything was different. He had already restored the balance, and the chi controlled the demonic energy. Looking straight ahead, Ron shouted that the demonic energy and chi had intertwined into a whirlpool. Holding a fan in his hands, he added that since he could release so much power, he should no longer be underestimated. The Overlord opened the fan and said that, as promised, he would not kill him. Chuck looked furiously, hearing the appeal. A sphere appeared. It was said that let it collide all the forces, weave, compress them into a sphere of pure destruction. The hero extended the spear in front of him, and used the seventh form of the infinite spear of the nine heavens. Purple rays appeared around the sphere. A bright glow appeared in front of the ruler. He was holding a fan in his hands. Ron raised his hand up and said that it was a good attack. He destroyed the glow around himself. The ruler of darkness closed his eyes. Looking straight ahead, he said that it was great. Ron opened his eyes in amazement. The hero looked at him furiously. The stars appeared in the sky. Ron was lying on the ground. His eyes wide open, he thought, surprisingly, after such a technique he still had strength left. Damn, the attack was deadly. The hero stood still. The thought occurred to him that he had struck right at a weak spot. The protagonist's face was covered in blood. The thought occurred to him that he had barely managed to counterattack. It was a pity, he ended up killing him. Looking at his hand, the ruler of darkness thought, well, what can you do? He lost his vigilance. Okay, he will take the little celestial. Ron looked down. Suddenly, he looked in amazement. Blood was dripping onto the ground. The hero stood in front of him. He said he wouldn't allow it, his eyes wide. Ron stared at him in silence. The protagonist took a step forward, a thought that was both delightful and annoying. He was still able to move. Raising his hand, the Lord of Darkness thought that if he were a little stronger, he would take him, even with demonic strength. A bright flash appeared. It was heard that it would be limited to a small heavenly demon. The dagger rushed towards the hero. A glow appeared around him. Purple rays appeared. Ron opened his eyes in amazement. The man grinned, said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and then asked what he saw. He still bullies the weak. Frowning, Ron told him not to call him that. The man smiled, hearing that he was the head of the union. He pulled the dagger from the hero's head. Looking straight ahead, the Lord of Darkness asked how he was here. Looking straight ahead, the man asked what was wrong. There was no place he couldn't go. A glow appeared around him. Lowering his head, the boy said that I understand, a double, to which he asked what and so what. Gritting his teeth, the hero thought that this was the leader of the evil demon alliance. The demon smiled, hearing that he interfered in the affairs of the sky beyond the sky, to which he replied that well, it seemed so. The protagonist lowered his head. It seemed that he was touched by the desperate efforts of this boy. Looking straight ahead, Ron heard that whether he was a double or not, it was easy to kill him, especially when he was in such a state. Standing in front of him, the leader said that in their stupid circle, only the old man could threaten him, but now he was alone and would not move for the sake of his skin. The guy frowned, hearing that okay, he was tired, let him get lost, he had 3 seconds, otherwise he would turn into a bloody mess. The leader smiled and began the countdown. Suddenly the guy disappeared. Looking to the side, the leader said that let him look, how pathetic, let him never become like that. Looking at the hero, he heard that he could kill, to which the man replied that perhaps he could, he was also seriously injured. The girls clenched their teeth. It was heard that but then in a couple of days he would have met the sky, They would have killed him, of course, but they would have taken the small sky demon. The hero looked straight ahead, hearing that, but they let him go alive, so the sky would know about his interference, and would be forced to do nothing. Standing in front of them, the leader addressed the small sky demon. Looking straight ahead, the girl heard that the choice was hers. Weakened by the curse, she would only be a burden to this boy. Looking to the side, the protagonist asked again, and the man added that he did not want to go to the sky beyond the sky. Let him come to the Union, it would provide protection. The starry sky appeared. Smiling, the man said that he should beware of the leader of the Murim Alliance. Suddenly he disappeared. The girl opened her eyes wide and exclaimed. The man's legs shook. It was heard that why. Chloe hugged the hero. The protagonist lowered his head, hearing that why it was necessary to go so far. The demon clenched his teeth tightly. Chuck suddenly woke up. Having risen, he asked what was where, to which the girl answered that in a cave nearby. The man held the crystal in his hands. It was heard that they were being pursued by the Alliance, so it was impossible to go to the city. Those two were putting up a barrier. The hero looked away. He looked in surprise, hearing that for the first time he felt so helpless. Now he had to protect her. Daggers were stuck into the hero. It was heard that because of this The girl screamed furiously, hearing that she was okay, to which she replied that she was not okay. Looking at her, the protagonist heard that she should be stronger than him, but now she simply would not survive without his help. Gritting her teeth, she added that he would try to save her even at the cost of his life. She did not become his friend so that he would suffer like this. Sitting on the ground, Chloe added that she would accept the offer of the head of the Union. A red light appeared. A thought appeared that even if he decided to be stubborn and stay with her, Chloe would only reproach herself and suffer. Clenching his fist, Chuck responded approvingly. Smiling, he shouted that he should let her rest there properly, and in the meantime he would find a way to remove her curse. Lowering her head, Chloe said that she was a friend. Raising her head, she asked again. The hero looked in amazement, hearing that she was interested in something here. Looking at him, the girl asked that she was beautiful now. The protagonist froze in bewilderment. He exclaimed in amazement. The ground in the cave appeared. Sitting next to the girl, Chuck said that he always. Lowering his head, he added that he always considered her beautiful. Chloe smirked, looking at him. Taking his face, she said that they were friends. Coming closer, the girl asked if this was really the limit. A cave appeared, and it was heard that their relationship. The hero looked at her in bewilderment. With his eyes wide open, he thought that they were friends. Chloe stood above him. With her mouth open, she said that she had been his for a long time. The man frowned and shouted that they were finally done. Suddenly they hit him, to which he asked what for what. Looking straight ahead, the girl asked what was going on, to which they answered that nothing. Removing the bandage, she said that well, okay, when he woke up, how does he feel? Daggers were stuck into the hero. It was heard that she somehow healed the wounds on his body with an elixir, but the eye. A white glow appeared. Grinning, the girl said that fortunately. Suddenly she froze in surprise. A loud scream was heard from the cave. Looking at them, the protagonist said what was going on. He could see everything perfectly. To which Ruby replied that no, it was just, well. Chuck asked again in bewilderment, hearing that it was color. The blue sky appeared. It was said that in a few days people would come to take Chloe to the Union of Evil Demons. The girl looked straight ahead. The thought arose that she, as she had said earlier, had decided to trust them. Closing her eyes, she said that well, a few days in Chuck's place were truly priceless. Smiling, Chloe added that when they met again, she wanted to stand with her head held high. Looking at her, the hero replied that he was sure it would be so, and then thought that they had just met, and it was already time to part. But now this was probably the best choice. The protagonist looked at the forest. The blue sky appeared. The thought arose that until the next meeting, let him not die. The man held a lock of hair in his hands. It was said that they had not done so much together yet. The girl was sitting on the ground. It became dark outside. Standing behind the hero, the demon said that the girl's hair. Looking straight ahead, he thought that the head of the Union said to keep them, and then said that they were probably for the sorcerers from the south. Smiling, Kyle added that he should keep them carefully and not sniff them, to which Chuck replied that he knew without him, he was not going to. Plans for the future appeared. The hero suddenly looked in surprise. A glow appeared in front of him, and he asked what it was, something swaying in the forest. The spirit smiled and said that he had tasted demonic energy, and his eyes slowly began to open. What he sees is demonic energy. The protagonist opened his eyes wide, hearing that an ordinary person does not see it, but he is now not quite ordinary, thanks to a new demonic eye that appeared due to his power. Gritting his teeth, he said damn, he was slowly ceasing to be human, to which Kyle replied that he should consider it lucky that after borrowing the power of a great demon like him, he got away with just that. Looking straight ahead, the demon heard that there was demonic energy here, because, to which he replied, yes, they were approaching the south. A red glow appeared. It was heard that the darkness of the night, silence, rustling, from everything that people fear, demons are born. Scales appeared. It was said that the South is especially favorable for them. Here the development of civilization lags behind. There are few means to disperse the darkness. Smiling, Kyle said that the born demons sow fear among people, and feed on it to grow. The snake looked at the hero. It was heard that such is the nature of demons. Sticking out his tongue, the beast asked what he was doing, daring to return to his territory. His human flesh looked quite plausible. The demon smiled and said that it seemed that demons also saw him as a demon. Suddenly, a blow flew at the monster. The girl exclaimed in fear, and the hero thought that he was a demon. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist added that he would really become a demon. A white glow appeared. A wide smile appeared. The snake demon was eaten with great pleasure by the group. Looking at the hero, the girl said that he looked like an idiot who was trying to seem cool, but he was not succeeding at all. Looking straight ahead, Neville said that behind this forest was the city of Devon, where a very talented sorcerer lived. Smiling, the man replied that it meant that if they went there, they would find a way to remove the curse of the lesser heavenly demon, to which the guy said that everything was not that simple. Standing in front of them, the merchant said that Devon was the territory of the Chagall family, one of the pillars of the Murim alliance, and besides, now was not the best time. The guy closed his eyes and heard that in a few days it was the first birthday of the child of Harry and Monica, who got married a couple of years ago. The girl looked ahead, and it was said that all the warriors of the righteous path would gather in Devon on the occasion of the celebration. Looking at him, the hero thought that Monica was the one with whom brother Nigel was in love. The guy smiled and said that he was called the greatest young master of the righteous path, but the girl he was in love with was stolen from him. Looking at the guy, the protagonist thought that then perhaps brother Nigel was also in the village now, and Neville said that this is why he did not advise him to go there. Frowning, Chuck said that no, he did not want to waste any more time. Was there really no safe way to get there? The guy grinned and replied that if he had enough money, that is. The hero asked again in bewilderment, hearing that Erebrise was always ready to fulfill the wishes of her clients. The blue sky appeared. The transport moved forward. The girl looked out the window. Her gaze froze in one place. A glow appeared near her. It was heard that she was thinking about that boy. The man grinned, hearing that he was the head of the union. Looking straight ahead, he heard that he had nothing to do at all. He had already appeared here several times, to which he replied that it meant he was taking care of her, and she was still indignant. Chloe gritted her teeth when she heard that she didn't like it, to which she replied that there was always a reason for kindness. The leader of the union raised his hand when he heard that, especially if it came from a man hiding his face, to which he replied that he didn't wear it because he was up to something. Sitting in front of him, the girl asked what was the reason then, to which the man replied that there was no particular reason. Smiling, the leader of the union said let him look, it was just some kind of mask, but he seemed so mysterious, didn't he? The girl looked at him in bewilderment. Turning her head away, she added that this was the 10th time he had appeared here, and there was no trace of his mystery left. The sky appeared, and it was heard that there was always a reason for kindness, he said, not always. Looking straight ahead, the man said that she had only met small people who did not have such luxury, and she should blame her narrow-mindedness for that. Chloe looked at him in surprise. Frowning, she thought he was being completely serious. Smirking, the leader said that it was probably because she had always been the main character, a very inflated ego, and that she shouldn't worry, he wasn't interested in her. The girl looked at him in amazement, hearing that he was interested in that boy, the light demon. Looking at him, Chloe asked what he was planning, to which he replied that he dared to direct his murderous intent at him. She frowned, hearing what she would do and what she would do, being struck by a curse, to which she replied that whether she was cursed or deprived of limbs, she would always remain herself. Clenching her fist, Chloe thought that it would be like that, because she had promised him. Looking at her, the man thought it was a pity. Smiling, the leader of the union said that she should calm down, he wasn't interested in him in some strange sense. Putting his hand to his face, he added that he wanted to take him as a disciple. Looking at him, the girl asked what disciples. The demon looked straight ahead. It was heard that the demon emperor, the strongest master of the unorthodox path, the head of the union of evil demons, wanted to take him as a disciple. Looking straight ahead, Chloe heard that there was a reason why he should not do this, to which she replied that she heard that he does not take disciples. Raising his finger up, the head of the union said that there simply were no worthy ones until now, he will say so. Smiling, he added that as much as he is not interested in her, he is interested in him. The girl looked surprised, hearing that he is not interested in geniuses who have great talent from birth, but ordinary people who know what diligence is. Sitting in front of him, Chloe asked that Chuck is ordinary, let him not talk nonsense, he started slowly, but in 10 years he. The man smiled and asked again. Looking at him, the girl heard that yes, for a genius it is incomprehensible. Looking straight, the man said that she cannot even imagine. The man looked at the mark. It was heard that how he spent these 10 years. The sky appeared. It was heard that this is why he likes him. Sitting on the ground, the man heard a question. Aladdin smiled and asked what the client was. Looking at him, the hero said that he wanted to find a person. Sitting in front of him, the sorcerer answered that then he was at the address, asked about payment. The protagonist looked in bewilderment, hearing what happened to him at all. Holding a bag in his hands, Chuck said that he was looking for the one who cursed the owner of this hair. Smiling, the magician replied that it was not that difficult. He held the hair in his hands. The hero looked at the glow. The man frowned and said that he saw a forest. An elf appeared. Sitting in front of the hero, the magician said that the sorcerer was now in the elf forest. He stuck his finger up his nose and added that this was also a terrible curse. The sorcerer who cast it was unlikely to remain unharmed. The man closed his eyes, hearing that he was now suffering as much as the one who was cursed, to which he replied that then the hunt would be easy. Standing next to the man, the hero asked that the forest of elves, which means the target has been identified, to which the man said that an easy hunt disgusted him. The man looked away, hearing who they were. The guy was standing behind them. Closing his eyes, he added that they were clearly not ordinary people. Frowning, Luke said that the light demon is here, he has arrived in Devon. The guy closed his eyes and said that the light demon, they met once, who would have thought that he would become such a villain, which means that a squad of black dogs asked for help from the Chegal family. Standing in front of him, the man said that yes, but they lost their trail immediately after arriving in Devon, perhaps. The hero looked straight ahead, the thought appeared that they had changed their appearance. Turning his head, the man asked what was unusual, he said of course. Frowning, he said that he usually hides his true name, because the traitor's forces thirst for the death of the last descendant of the family. He is the last representative of the fallen noble family. He usually hides his identity, pretending to be a simple hunter, but in his chest there is always a burning rage and thirst for revenge. The guy frowned, hearing this. He looked at the hero. The protagonist, standing in front of him, said that he is a dog. The man froze in bewilderment. Chuck stood still. Harry narrowed his eyes. Splinters appeared on the hero's face. The guy frowned, looking at him. The hero looked at him. Standing in front of them, Harry thought that no matter how you look at it, it's suspicious. Okay, the right one is still okay, but the left one, there are no people with such a mug. Closing his eyes, he added that it was probably a disguise, a mask made of human skin, but people looked at him in bewilderment. The guy grinned and thought that fighting them alone was suicide, and then said that it was clear. Well, good luck to them. The hero and the man walked forward. Looking at the hero, the girl asked that he saw through them, to which the protagonist replied that he did not know. Looking at the man, Chuck said that he was in this form, and the old man too, to which the girl replied that why did he get into the role so much? I just wanted to hit him. Stan held the bag in his hands. The thought occurred to him that the full set of disguise that the old man impulsively bought turned out to be more expensive than expected. Looking straight ahead, the hero thought that if this were not the cheapest option, then there would not be enough money even for a sorcerer. Suddenly he stopped. Lowering his head, the protagonist asked that a person like Harry suddenly came to the sorcerer from the outskirts. A settlement appeared. It was heard that it was clear they were looking for them. The man held a weapon in his hands. Stretching his hands forward, the magician said that he checked. It seemed that the two they were looking for were the ones who had just left. The guy clenched his teeth and thought that he thought so. He needed to quickly form a pursuit squad. Standing behind him, the man turned. Bowing his head, he asked that he was going to go after the light demon. Turning around, Harry said that the light demon was, after all, his sworn brother. Looking at them, the sorcerer heard that he should not pretend that this was none of his business. He should also join. He was not going to go against the will of the Murim Alliance. Did he say anything against it? Frowning, Nigel said that he should not worry. He was not going to refuse. If his younger brother had taken the wrong path, then it was the elder brother's duty to guide him to the right path. Harry closed his eyes and replied that he should gather his heavenly blades then. They would immediately form a pursuit squad. The guy slightly opened his mouth. A settlement appeared. Looking at the people, the hero said that they were nothing special. Apparently, there was not enough time to gather the elite. Warriors appeared. It was heard that they were done in this city. Taking off his mask, the protagonist shouted that they would break through them at full speed, to which the man replied that for the glory of his family. Chuck ran away from the guards. Looking straight ahead, the demon said that just in time, his old shelter was nearby in the forest. He would also take the promised treasures there. It got dark outside. It was heard that they had such a hard time getting here. With his eyes wide open, the hero asked what was wrong with this forest. The girl looked at him in amazement, and shouted that she had drawn this picture 2 hours ago. They had been walking in circles all this time. Stan frowned and said that even his bloody rings wouldn't break a single tree here, asked what the hell was going on. Ruby looked at the waves and shouted that the mana flow was too strong, she couldn't even create a map. Beams were flying in the air. It was heard that but the last time he was here, it was an ordinary forest. This phenomenon, it seems that someone put a barrier on the entire forest. Looking straight ahead, the demon heard that to which he replied that such a barrier is beyond the power of human magicians. A bright glow appeared. It was heard that perhaps some annoying creature had started up here. The girl opened her eyes wide and screamed. A monster appeared in front of her. Harry closed his eyes and shouted who he was. He swung his weapon sharply. The guy frowned. Standing in front of the monster, he asked what he was. Pushing him away, the sorcerer shouted, "What the hell, get away." He began to chant a spell. The magician opened his eyes wide. A bright glow appeared in front of him. Rays flew in the air. Nigel's eyes widened and he asked what it was, to which the wizard replied that it was an evil spirit. The wizard scowled and shouted that he had told him that this forest was dangerous, full of demonic energy and evil spirits that their martial arts were powerless against. He put his hand to his face and added that if he had known that they would end up in the forest of confusion, he would never have gone with them for any amount of money, to which the boy replied that he should calm down. Harry closed his eyes and asked that he didn't know what he was talking about, but wasn't he overreacting? Nigel looked ahead. The boy smiled and said that he should look around. Such forces had gathered here, the best young masters of the three families. Nicole frowned. Monica looked away, and they heard the troops of the three families and the pursuit squad of the Alliance. Luke stood still. The sorcerer gritted his teeth, hearing that with such powers, to which he replied that he did not understand anything at all of his powers would soon be dead. A red glow appeared. It was heard that demons were born from fear. 400 years ago there lived a great demon, who brought terror to the whole world. Harry closed his eyes, hearing that he was so strong that even after death the fear he generated remained, distorted this forest and filled it with ominous power. Standing in front of the sorcerer, he asked that he should wait, that is, these are the remains of the great demon, and not himself, to which the magician asked again. Aladar smiled and said that he was so calm because he knew nothing, even the remains of that demon could easily destroy them all. Nigel looked away, hearing that the name of that demon. The spirit opened his eyes wide. Gritting his teeth, the hero asked why these lights were so friendly. The protagonist looked away, hearing that he should just not get angry. Raising his hand up, Kyle said that the forest had become like this, probably it was his fault. Suddenly, a blow flew at him. A dark sky appeared. It was heard that in general. Raising his hand, Chuck asked what he wanted to say, that the fear of him had distorted this forest, to which the demon answered that it was true. He understood this, noticing the light stuck to him. A glow appeared. It was heard that the fear, deprived of its owner after his death, had settled in the forest. Looking at the demon, the hero heard that he was still so strong. Wow, to which the protagonist thought that he wanted to hit him, but he couldn't even say a word, because he was so happy. Standing still, Chuck asked what it meant. "It's safe here," to which Kyle replied that he didn't know. Some of the creatures he had created were listening to him. Gritting his teeth, the demon said that many do not obey his will. It is too early to relax, but at least he can show the way. The hero frowned, hearing that the pursuers probably already fled in fear, to which he replied that yes. Pointing at the spirit, the protagonist said that they will follow these lights, take his treasure, break away from the pursuit and get out of the forest. Ruby looked in bewilderment, and asked why the lights were shaking. Grinning, Kyle said that there is something here. Frowning, he added that this aura is him. Standing in the darkness, the demon said that they have not seen each other for a long time, thought he was dead for 400 years. The protagonist gritted his teeth, hearing that be careful, this predator is the king of demons. Adam looked straight. Frowning, Chuck thought that one of the 5 kings of predators. Smiling, the demon asked what the king of the Inhumans was, said that this place was now vacant. Kyle frowned, hearing what happened. He was much weaker than before. Adam suddenly took off his cloak. A wound appeared on his chest. It was heard that as he saw, his heart was torn out. Smiling, Kyle asked what it meant. He was absorbing the rest of his power here, to which Adam replied that there was no point in maintaining his pride. He was right. Gritting his teeth, he added that he suffered a crushing defeat, was expelled from his hometown and was forced to hide here to recover. He would punish him for invading his territory. Taking the hero by the hood, Kyle replied that no, let him heal. Picking up after him, he came here for his things. Looking straight ahead, the demon said that fortunately. Kyle turned around and asked who defeated him. The monster looked forward. The image of a girl appeared. Looking to the side, the demon heard that the girl who now rules Ormurai. The dark sky appeared. Turning his head, the hero asked that he didn't think that someone had already stolen his treasures, to which the demon replied that it was nonsense, that was impossible. Looking at the building, he added that they had just arrived. Let him look carefully. The demon smiled broadly. A glow appeared in front of the hero. The protagonist looked in surprise, hearing that he had kept everything in the subspace. No one but him could find them. Well, let him go and open it. Holding the box in his hands, Chuck said that the jewelry seemed not to be a ruby. What kind of stone was it? To which Kyle asked what. He was seeing it for the first time. The stone was lying in the box. It was heard that it was the heart of a dragon. The hero looked in amazement and exclaimed. A glow appeared from the mouth. It was heard that it was the ginseng of eternal snow and the poison of a humanoid spider. The remains appeared. It was said that the bones and scales of a dragon. The protagonist and the demon smiled, and it was heard that there were several boxes of gold and jewelry. Holding a bottle in his hands, Kyle said that it was an endless bottle of wine, to which Chuck replied that it was trash, and he added that no, it was the most valuable. The man took a step forward. Stan looked in amazement. A glow appeared around the protagonist. Looking at it, the man thought that his chi had almost doubled, he had become stronger again. Chuck looked at his hand. The demon was pouring wine, and the thought appeared that he knew that he was a powerful being. Kyle had collected such treasures and even killed the dragon. The monster was drinking, and the thought appeared that how did he die, and he wanted them to come here only because of this bottle. Frowning, the girl said that they had been in the forest for a long time. I wonder what happened to their pursuers. Stretching his hand forward, the hero replied that they did not have such signs, they must be in big trouble now. Stan frowned and replied that he thought he knew what was wrong with them, to which the protagonist asked again. Looking straight ahead, the man said that he could barely smell it because of the energy of the forest. Blood was dripping onto the ground. The corpses were lying behind a tree. It was heard that, but it was definitely the smell of blood. The protagonist looked away and said that yes, those were the warriors from the Alliance who were chasing them. The sorcerer was lying on the ground. Gritting his teeth, Chuck asked if this was Adam's doing, to which the demon replied that it was not. The hero's eyes widened, hearing that it did not look like it. The demon was lying on the ground. Smiling, Kyle said that even dethroned, he was the king of the Inhumans, he was not so easy to kill. The protagonist looked straight ahead, it was heard that he was a light demon. The guys looked at him. Smiling, Nigel said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Looking at him, Chuck asked what was going on. The demon opened his mouth, it sounded like he was attacking them, threatening to eat their fear. Gritting his teeth, the guy added that the one approaching tore the red demon apart. The hero opened his eyes in amazement. Smiling, Kyle said that there were too few of them. Taking a step forward, he added that they could not do anything, unfortunately they met. Walking forward, the monster added that the greatest of the great demons,